trade for the top pick was the ability to keep their second-round selection this year, the 35th pick. That way, they can upgrade the team Michael Vick will eventually inherit, either with a playmaking wide receiver, depth at linebacker, or improvements on both lines. Now to Ed Werder.
Well, here in San Diego, the Chargers didn't get the blockbuster deal they wanted for the #1 overall pick, and they won't have quarterback Michael Vick. But GM John Butler now sweats whether he can still get the #1 player on his draft board, TCU running back LaDainian Tomlinson. Let's go to Andrea Kramer.
More big news here in St. Louis, where the Rams have agreed to a 3-year contract with perennial Pro Bowl cornerback Aeneas Williams. This is a sign-and-trade deal contingent upon Williams passing a physical today in Phoenix. Because the compensation to the Cardinals is a 2nd and a 4th-round pick, this does not affect any of the Rams' 3 first-round selections. Let's go to Mark Malone.
Here in Kansas City, the Chiefs pulled the trigger on a deal to bring them quarterback Trent Green. In return, they send the 12 overall pick to St. Louis, and in return, get a #5 back and the rights to wide receiver Tony Horn. They didn't stop there, signing restricted free agent running back Priest Holmes and a backup quarterback of 14 years, Bubby Brister. They have 9 picks remaining now. Look for them to move up to the 2nd round. Now here's Sal Palantonio.
Here in Tampa, after signing quarterback Brad Johnson, the Bucs are once again the NFC favorites to go to the Super Bowl. Today in the 1st round, Tony Dungy will try to further upgrade his offense, especially that passing offense that was ranked 26th in the league last year. Now let's go to Solomon Wilcots.
Here in Baltimore, most would agree that since winning Super Bowl 35 in Tampa, the Baltimore Ravens have already improved themselves by signing quarterback Elvis Gerbach and offensive tackle Leon Searcy. So after drafting 4 Pro Bowlers over the last 5 years, the Ravens stand poised to add depth to an already talented roster. Now let's send it back to Robin Roberts.
All right, Solomon, thank you very much. Everyone is working today. That's going to do it for the Saturday morning edition of SportsCenter. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Robin Roberts, hunkered down as we begin our 16-plus hour coverage of the 2001 NFL Draft. We'll have it on until 7 o'clock on ESPN, then kick it over to ESPN2. Plenty of chats on ESPN.com. Coming up next, live from New York, it's the NFL Draft. We'll see you.
ESPN welcomes you to the following presentation of the National Football League.
We've seen them excel on the college gridiron. Today in New York, it's time to rock and roll into the NFL.
Hey, we've been watching you. We've seen you move, checked you out. We know what you can do.
What can't Michael Vick do? He can do it all. But in the first major move of the 2001 draft, he'll be winging it south, not out to the coast.
But any doubt, or any fear, you better save it for another year. The second chance, baby, if we miss, we're on the clock. It all comes down to this. But all my dreams and all my plans, now my fate is in another hand. But I keep holding out for fortune, kids. Day to day, it all comes down to this. It all comes down to this.
For the 66th time, they roll out the bench. 7 rounds of players ready for the test. Their talents tough to resist. Today, it all comes down to this.
Let's go to war. It all comes down to this. It all comes down to this.
They began gathering outside the theater of Madison Square Garden before the sun came up. Fans of all teams trying to get in to watch Michael Vick. 5 other of the top players like LaDainian Tomlinson, David Terrell, and all the teams represented, all 31 of them, for this, the 66th annual NFL selection meeting, which in English we should translate as the NFL Draft. Welcome to New York for a weekend of football. And are you ready for the draft? Are you ready for some football? I think we have a new attendance record. 52,000 have wedged their way into the theater here. Chris Berman, Mel Kiper, Joe Theismann, Chris Mortensen. In dog years, we've done this 162 times now. We have many, many events that have happened even the night before. Will it be a portent of what is to come? We shall see. Well, as we like to say, our good friend Warren Zevon once sang in Werewolves of London, I saw a werewolf drinking a colada at Trader Vick. I don't think he was talking about the 2001 NFL draft, but we've had a trade involving Michael Vick, essentially. Yesterday afternoon, the San Diego Chargers and Atlanta Falcons swapped the #1 pick of the draft. In exchange, the Chargers move down and pick 5. They get a 3 this year, a 2 next year, and a kickoff return man extraordinaire, Tim Dwight. But the headline is, the Atlanta Falcons have an opportunity to select Michael Vick to play some quarterback, to play in the South. They know him full well from Virginia Tech. And Dan Reeves has done this once before. Chris Mortensen, how and when did this go down, and why did it go down?
Well, I think really this process started 2 weeks ago when Dan Reeves brought Michael Vick to Atlanta. Dan Reeves did not go to the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. He brought Michael Vick in for a visit, not a workout. Just needed to eyeball him and liked what he saw, liked what he heard, and then they just waited. And as San Diego went through this process, I think John Butler, the general manager of the Chargers, never truly comfortable with Michael Vick. Otherwise, this deal never gets done. Needed an offer he can live with. Got it. The Falcons struck. And then as far as the contract goes, Harold Richardson, the general manager of the Falcons, talked to Vick's agents, Andre Colonna, Mike Sullivan, and basically said, what are you looking for? They presented the same deal that they gave to San Diego. Vick's people did. And the Falcons says, we'll take it, even though it'll take 2 weeks to finalize. So basically, Taylor Smith, the owner, okays it. The money's done. 2 weeks, he'll probably sign the contract. And Dan Reeves, by the way, did call Chris Chandler yesterday, another part of the process, just to say, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it.
Well, I think a lot of people in Atlanta are certainly energized. The team that 3 years ago went to the Super Bowl, and they're wondering where they're going in this day and age. But Mel, when you trade away the rights to a quarterback at the top of the draft, I'm not asking why you would do it, but what might be a hang-up on Michael Vick? Is he not a 12-year star in this league once he gets the hang of it?
Well, it's not a given, Chris. You look at Michael Vick, best athlete probably to ever play the quarterback position at any level. He's that gifted. He runs that 4.3, a 40-inch vertical jump. You see the arm strength and the law on those passes down the field. You see he's upright. He's to tweak those mechanics.
No, wait,
certainly. And Joe, I know what you're going to get into here, but I'm telling you, he needs a lot of work before he said, if he's so good, Joe, why did nobody outside of Atlanta try to trade up again? And why did San Diego pass on a franchise quarterback?
Because I think right now he's a little too young. They've got a quarterback who can play for him right now in San Diego. They're fine.
What, for how long? Hey, if they thought he was a franchise quarterback, Joe, that had taken him.
I don't believe that. I still believe that this is the right choice. They have a greater need now to build on that franchise. I think Michael Vick has athletic ability that you can't teach. Throws the ball deep well. We saw it in the highlights. Moves around very well. Positions the ball well. Quick release. You look at the way the trend has gone in the National Football League. A lot of running quarterbacks. Dante Culpepper, Steve McNair, Donovan McNabb.
That's all fine, Joe, but you got to be able to beat somebody with your arm in the pocket. He is light years away from being that type of quarterback.
Tell that to Jeff Fisher.
Now, bigger
picture. To be able to contribute with the arm.
Bigger picture.
And legs.
Is it because Vick was not head and shoulders ahead of about 6 or 7 other guys in many teams' evaluation end years? What do you think?
That's exactly right, Chris. I think if you look at this draft, it did not have that one super elite prospect. You talk about 7 players, maybe as many as 12 with the same grade. Michael Vick's at the top because he's a quarterback, no question about it. But any one of these players, I think, has a chance to become a great talent in the NFL. The perception, though, right now, is this draft does not have that one super elite prospect. And my contention is that San Diego thought he was next. John Elway, Drew Bledsoe, he would have been the #1 pick. And I think
just to throw in here really quick. Look, Sugar Bowl game. Michael Vick, freshman, Florida State in the Superdome. Everybody talked about there's like 30 NFL prospects on that Florida State roster. The best player on that field tonight was Michael Vick.
That's the college level, Mark.
And he definitely threw the ball better than Joe did at the Super Bowl, but that's at the Sugar Bowl. That's another.
Anybody throw the ball better than I did.
Listen, San Diego, there is a big question. Let's take it from San Diego's perspective for one moment. Did they get enough? They get a 3 and a 2 next year in Tim Dwight for a guy that they figure could sit and watch Doug Flutie play for 2 years and then be a perfect guy and re-energize that franchise that was de-energized, and that's the understatement of the century, by the Ryan Leaf, and we can only call it a fiasco to this moment. But San Diego's coming off a 1-15 season. If they get a running back and if they get other players, they feel that, you know what, we have better served our team because Flutie is going to be playing right now. And by the way, that's already energized the fans out there. I have one case in point, and then I want to go out to Ed Werder. This exact deal happened in '95 between Cincinnati and Carolina. Carolina went down from 1 to 5. Cincinnati went up from 5 to 1, as San Diego and Atlanta have done. Cincinnati ended up picking Kajana Carter. Carolina ended up picking Kerry Collins at 5. But it cost only a 2 to make that move. So if you look at that as the worth, then a 2 and 3 and a returner in Dwight, then they did get a good deal. There are others that say they did not get enough. But if they get the running back here or at the top of the second, then I think San Diego is satisfied. But you know what? The beauty of this is we can debate this forever. And the beauty of this is that Ed Werder is out in San Diego right now, right in the middle of all this. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Chris. You're right. The Chargers do want to upgrade their running game, which was the worst in the NFL last year. They averaged just, their leading rusher, Terrell Fletcher, averaged 3.3 yards a carry. They got 67 yards rushing per game. And what they want to do with the 5th pick is take LaDainian Tomlinson, the #1 player on their board. But there's a lot of concern about what Cleveland will do with the #3 pick. They fear that either the Patriots or more likely the Bears will attempt to trade in front of them, and those teams also covet Tomlinson. If that happens, and both the best offensive tackles are gone, I think John Butler wouldn't hesitate to take Gerard Warren, the top defensive player on the board.
All right, Eddie, thank you very much. It shall be interesting out there. And, of course, San Diego trying to do a lot of building. Hey, make no mistake about it. This team is on its way. We'll talk about them when they get there. It's just on its way a little different than we thought 24 hours ago. Another big picture for you fans to watch out today. The St. Louis Rams, a year ago, 1 year removed, the Super Bowl champs, they couldn't stop anybody last year, even though their offense continues to be one of the most prolific in the history of the NFL. By making deals involving Trent Green, and earlier, the Rams now have 3 first-round picks as we speak and 2 second-round picks. You think this offensive juggernaut isn't going to address defense and become an unbelievable force this year? Let's see what happens today and tomorrow. The Seattle Seahawks have 2 very high picks in the first round as well. No one was busier than them in the offseason. Those are 2 teams to keep your eye on. Justin Smith, Leonard Davis, these guys are going to be hearing from them immediately after the commissioner opens it up here in New York. We'll be back to kick things off at the 66th Annual NFL Select. This has truly become springtime football. We first started doing this in 1980. People thought we were nuts. You're reading the phone book on national television. Well, think again. Everybody watching coast to coast all over the world. We're on ESPN.com. There's ESPN Radio. There's the ESPN Zone with NFL Player Chat. We've got expert panels in Bristol. I feel like I'm Jackson Brown. We got truckers on TV. We got Richard Pryor on the video. We have video teleconferencing with all 31 teams. There's the zone. We hope we are in the zone because you know what? We've been chomping at the bit to talk NFL football since the end of the Pro Bowl in early February. So, that is his honor as starting in his 2nd decade now. Commissioner Paul Tagliabue gets to theoretically throw down the gavel and open up this NFL draft. So, let's go. I mean, we're going to talk Atlanta. We'll wait for the commissioner to immediately open it. But the Atlanta Falcons, they have Chris Chandler hurt a lot. Yep. Tell you what, we're going to go to the commissioner. You see, and here's his name, and here he is. See, we work together here.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2001 NFL College Player Draft. We appreciate all you fans who have joined us here in New York today, as well as the millions around the nation watching on ESPN. We also extend our thanks to everyone involved in college and high school football for all you do for the great game of football. The Atlanta Falcons have the first pick in this 2001 NFL Draft, and the Falcons are now on the clock.
this time, the Atlanta Falcons were the defending NFC champs. The bottom, of course, fell out. 4-12. They couldn't move on offense. They couldn't stop very many people on defense. They have a quarterback in Chris Chandler. Gets hurt often, but when he's in, they play pretty well. They got Eric Zier to be a backup. So what should be the plan for Michael Vick? Watch for a year and two, play in goal line situations. What would you do with him, Joe?
I certainly think that Michael Vick right now is going to be a football player that has to think that I'm going to play in this particular year at some point in time. I don't care whether Chris Chandler's healthy or not. I still think they'll try and work him in. They'll give him specific packages. They'll give him 5 or 6 plays to run in different situations. I would think if you want to stress an area for him, put him down around the goal line. That would be the place where he's most
How many times are they going to be near the goal line?
You guess what? You'll never guess who this pick is. Let's go to the podium.
With the first selection in the 2001 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Michael Vick, quarterback, Virginia Tech.
That's the fastest their offense has moved since they gave the ball to Jamal Anderson in the Super Bowl
2 years ago. Joe's making a point about Chris Chandler. I think he does well. Chris Chandler throws a great deep ball. Dan Reeves likes throwing the ball downfield. And Michael Vick throws a tremendous deep ball. So there's a good match there.
Let's back off for a minute and analyze what a moment this is for this young man who has played 2 years of big-time college football at Virginia Tech, whose difference from September and October a year ago to the end of this past season, I mean, you talk about a learning curve that was a skyrocket. And here he is. He's the #1 pick in the NFL. Just not put yourself... Who knows how many millions?
I know the excitement in Atlanta, because I do live in Atlanta. I'm telling you, this guy connects with a young generation of football fans.
Well, your son.
Your son told you to go season. I've got to buy season tickets, but I'm telling you, Atlanta needed something inspirational, and Dan Reeves provided it.
And one thing about, you talk about Michael Vick, he is a leader. He is a guy that can rally the troops. The team really galvanizes around Michael Vick. He will work at it. He will spend time evaluating and breaking down film, the tendencies of the opponent, Joe. He will have the work ethic and the diligence and attention to detail that you need to develop those skills. That's a major plus in his favor.
And when you sit down with the young man, you get the sense that he understands that there is a learning curve. He knows he doesn't know everything. He knows that there's a process that has to take place. I just think the things that he possesses, the gifts that he has physically, are not things that you just go out and learn.
Since the common draft, since 1970, this is the 11th quarterback to go overall #1. 2 years ago was Tim Couch with the Browns. 3 years ago, of course, Peyton Manning with Indianapolis. Drew Bledsoe in '93 with the Patriots. Jeff George, one of the more interesting Mel stories over the year, went in 1990 with the Colts. Troy Aikman, that pick turned out, I think, okay for Dallas in '89. Vinny Testaverde with the Bucs in 1987. John Elway picked by the Colts, but of course the trade with Denver. Steve Bartkowski, yes, Atlanta did this 26 years ago. Jim Plunkett, 71 with the Patriots, won Super Bowls, but obviously with the Raiders, not with New England. And a guy named Terry Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls, being drafted #1 in 1970. So that's pretty good company to be put in right there.
And speaking with Butch Davis, who coached at Miami against Michael Vick and Donovan McNabb, he used this comparison. He said he thought Vick had more quarterback skills than McNabb, but he also said he went golfing with Frank Beamer last year, and Beamer just raving about this kid's charisma. And as his teammates truly loved this guy.
You mentioned his ability to throw the football. The thing that I look at when I studied his workouts, and when you watch him go through this specific workout that he had, you'll see traits that quarterbacks have to learn. Here's the quickness going back. Now keep in mind, he is a lefty, and he's throwing the ball out to the right. Look at his feet turn. See how he turns his shoulders, gets the ball out quickly. I believe the hardest pass for a quarterback to throw any level is a little swing pass. And then you look at the timing of the route. He doesn't hesitate. The delivery is just a flick of the wrist. The ball comes out so easy, so comfortably, resets, anticipates. You see him loaded. The receiver hasn't turned around yet. He lets the ball go. There's the perfect intersection as the receiver comes out of his route. Those are the things that sold me on this young man as a quarterback.
But he is throwing against error there. I mean,
I don't care.
Because I have had some very good coaches in the quarterback guys who say they really have a big question mark on him. I will say that. There is
you have to have a question mark on a 20-year-old man. I think that's given. But the upside is tremendous.
One sentence each. 3-4 years from now, big star in the NFL, Mel?
I think it's a big question. I think it's a roll of the dice type pick.
Joe?
I absolutely think he will be at the level of a Dante Culpepper or a Donovan McNabb at least.
Mort?
For once, I'm going to agree with Joe.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. What will be the pack? Do we have a number on what this is going to be, dollar-wise?
Oh, it's going to be similar to that $40 to $50 million deal, although guaranteed money in the first 3 years is really the key thing. It'll be about $15 million guaranteed in the first 3 years, although he has given Atlanta an extra year in terms of when he voids that contract. The traditional number is void after 3. This one will be void after 4. And there are always 2 contracts in one when you do these deals.
26 years ago, we mentioned Steve Bartkowski was a very good quarterback for Atlanta, #1 overall. The first ever pick of this franchise was 1966. Who lives 3 years? A lot of people don't follow the Falcons. Tommy Novus. He was pretty darn good at middle linebacker. If Michael Vick can approach Novus and Bartkowski, I think fans in Atlanta will be thrilled. I know Michael Vick is thrilled. Chris Fowler's thrilled that he's sitting with him. Hey, Chris.
Well, Chris, this is not Michael Vick's first draft. He was the 30th round amateur draft selection of the Colorado Rockies back in June. Michael, I imagine this is just a tad more exciting for you. Is the heart rate still up?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You know, it's very exciting. And, you know, it's something I always dreamed about. I always dreamed about walking that stage, you know, meeting Paul, and it all came true for me. You know, so I'm very excited, you know, very happy to be playing for Atlanta Falcons, and, you know, hopefully everything will go good for me.
What's your reaction to the trade? For probably a few months, you were envisioning yourself as a San Diego Charger. That suddenly changes on draft eve. Now the projections are you may play a lot sooner than you would have in San Diego.
Yeah, I always thought this throughout the entire process that I was going to be a Charger, but, you know, the trade was made, and my agent, you know, informed me that some trades may be made, and, you know, I knew that. So, you know, I'm just happy that if I go in there and I have to play, then that's what I have to do. You know, that's what they're paying me for.
Well, you had a redshirt year at Virginia Tech. It was very important to your development. We talked yesterday, no redshirt year in the NFL, but the big debate is, guys debating it on the set, how soon are you ready to step in and absorb the offense?
Well, first I have to learn the offense, and then, you know, I'll be a whole lot more comfortable, you know, when I'm out there playing. You know, it just gives you a better feeling being out there and gives you the feeling that you can make things happen. So,
how much better equipped are you? You came to college, you were kind of puzzled by the complexity of the Hokies offense. You considered changing positions to wide receiver at one point because you were frustrated. Are you much better equipped now to pick up an offense?
I think now I know a lot more about the game, you know, so I think I'm ready to take on a challenge, and I don't think learning another offense will be a problem for me.
You don't have a lot on your resume for a #1 pick. You've played maybe a handful of games against top-quality college competition, but have you ever reflected on how much money you made and how much your stock raised? One game against Florida State in that Sugarville?
One game, you know, and my stock flew through the roof, you know, and, you know, it was just Lord's blessing, you know, and I have to thank him, you know, for all of this. You know,
Michael, congratulations. Best of luck in Atlanta. Very happy guy. Chris, very relieved guy, too.
Hi, Chris and Michael. Congratulations. It'll be #1 pick in the draft. And let's make this human for a minute. What a great moment, whether it's San Diego, whether it's Atlanta, or whether it's the Hartford Rams, which we almost had. At any rate, let's go up close to Hartford to our studios in Bristol. Mike Tirico and a bunch of wise men. Is that not right, Mike?
That's true, Chris. As we wait with Arizona on the clock, we're joined by Mike Golick and Hank Goldberg, Sean Salisbury. I want to start with Ron Jaworski on the Michael Vick pick. Joe Theismann weighed in as another quarterback who's watched Michael Vick 20-1, just 21 games as a starter. What are your thoughts?
Well, he's a tremendous athlete. That's obvious when you watch him on television. I had an opportunity to study game tapes and how he reads defense, how he throws in time with his receivers, and he's light years away from being a polished NFL quarterback. He's only thrown 313 passes in his Virginia Tech career. That means he has a long way to go. Now, when I project a guy to the NFL, first, I want to see him make plays in the pocket. That's where you win championships. Once you make plays in the pocket, your running skills become secondary. Yes, he can run, but he's got to make plays in time with his wide receivers.
And also in college, in the offense he ran, he only had to look at half the field. They simpled it down for him a little bit. He read a safety in the corner, went to one side of the field. If he didn't like his options, he ran pretty quick, something that he's going to have to... Again, the hardest thing, you quarterbacks who know, the hardest thing an NFL quarterback has to learn is patience in the pocket. He's a great athlete who's going to have to learn that.
And, guys, we all agree with Chris Chandler being a little bit injury-prone, that Michael Vick's more than likely going to have to play sooner than he's expected.
Can he do it? You looked him in the eye, you sat down and talked to him for a while.
You know, he told me that he said he didn't feel he was ready to play, that he wanted that cushion. But you know what? At $15 million to sign and going to the Atlanta Falcons, that was when he expected to go to the Chargers.
that he's going to have to play. And here's what, though. This offense, let's give this kid a chance now. Jack Burns brings a little bit of the Washington Redskins, a little bit of the Vikings. They'll move him, little misdirection, throw the ball down the field. I'm just questioning one thing. We've got to see how mentally and emotionally tough he is, because he hasn't played that many games when things are going bad early on, because Atlanta is not a very good football team right now.
Go ahead. Did Boomer say wise men are wise guys? Because I got the wise guy take on this, and that is attendance in Atlanta has been abysmal. How does this play into the equation? How tempted are they going to be to put him into the brink, you know, and help draw people?
Well, you know, he'll draw people. He's an exciting football player. And I play with perhaps the greatest running quarterback of all time, Randall Cunningham. Now, Randall Cunningham could run, but the problem is he used his legs too often.
Exactly.
And that's what the problem you have with a running quarterback. Run second, play quarterback first.
One thing we know about Michael Vick, he is a hard worker, and that will start immediately in Atlanta. Back to Chris in New York.
Hold on a second, Bill. Hold on.
All right, we are, thank you, fellas. Wise men, at least men, right? We'll get back up there. Arizona is on the clock with the 2nd overall pick. There were lots of thoughts that they might trade. They have made a trade, which we will tell you in a moment, they have traded Aeneas Williams. This just did get done. Okay, Aeneas Williams is going to St. Louis, but we'll get to that in a minute. We suspect tackle Leonard Davis, Texas. Let's see.
With the 2nd selection in the 2001 NFL Draft, the Arizona Cardinals select Leonard Davis, tackle from the University of Texas.
And congratulate, let's explain the thinking behind this. Even though the new coach, Dave McGinnis, is a defensive player, and congratulations to Leonard Davis. Look, the most important thing in my mind for Arizona, who gave us a brief glimpse a few years ago, they were a playoff team. They upset Dallas. They played okay at Minnesota. And then they remembered they were the Cardinals. And then they became an abysmal team again, frankly, and fell toward the bottom of the division, 3-13 last year. But if they can stockpile an offensive line, which has Shelton on it, which has got big aircraft carriers, they have nice receivers. If Thomas Jones runs, if they have a big line to get Jake Plummer going again, the team gets an identity and the team moves up. Like it or not?
That is, I like it, but
that's what they're thinking.
I like it, but it has nothing to do with the success of the Arizona Cardinals. Everything revolves around Jake Plummer's ability to make the right kind of decisions. He's 2-to-1 interceptions to touchdown passes in his career in the National Football League. It isn't because he didn't have guys up front blocking for him. It isn't because the system was so difficult. He's struggled with the decision process. Certainly, this move allows them. Think about it. They can move L.J. Shelton down to guard.
That's all fine, Joe.
You talk about a big offensive line, but I think the whole thing still revolves around
You don't even think he's the best old lineman. No, I think Kenyatta Walker is the best offensive lineman. You said it all revolves around Jake Plummer. Don't you think this is to try to jumpstart the career of Thomas Jones as well? They're going to have to outscore people, Joe. That defensive line is really suspect. Aeneas Williams moves on. How are they going to stop anybody?
But
Gerard Warren is a better football player. He's sitting there, too.
Let's take a look at him. 6'6". 370. Does he play like 370 or does he play like 320? And you know the kind of question I'm asking.
Go find Jonathan Ogden. I mean, that's basically everybody.
He's not Jonathan Ogden.
I'm not saying he is. I'm talking about size. You take a look at his size here. He sets up. He just dominates. If he can't get in front of people, it's just going to take so long for people to go around him. And he certainly can open huge holes. I mean, he's a massive man. And that's part of, I think, to me, that's a big attraction.
Joe, the game that Roy did it was the job he did against Justin Smith, and that's all great. And I think you look at Leonard Davis, I think the instincts as a pro-style pass blocker need to be developed. If he moves inside, he gets his hands on you, he can maul you. He can certainly assist that running game. But he's got a long way to go in pass protection, Joe, from an instinctive standpoint, former defensive lineman.
Let me add something here. Dave McGinnis, and you hit on something. I spoke with Dave McGinnis, and he was telling me why it would probably be Leonard Davis, which is their defense does have a lot of holes. Their offense, he really feels, is close. It has a chance, if it comes together, to be he hopes, a dominating offense. Obviously, the key is Jake Plummer, but he made some coaching changes as well, and he's hoping all these things come together. So if you can't really fix the defense, if the safest pick, you know, when you're picking a side, is a guy like Leonard Davis, then go ahead and do it and see how good you can get on offense.
And they got Pete Kendall and they're just trying to, boy, for years they loaded up on the defensive line, and for one reason or another, they're hardly there, or they're certainly not healthy. Now, the man that has been there for Arizona through all of the horribles, and let's make no mistake about it, all of the down years, perennial Pro Bowler Aeneas Williams is now moving on and has a chance to play in the big game at the end of this year, pending a physical, 3-year deal, reported at perhaps $14.7 million, contingent on the physical. In exchange, Aeneas Williams is what, 32, 33?
Still playing well.
Right, still playing very well. Arizona gets the low second, the original St. Louis second, and a 4th-round pick that came yesterday from Oakland. Low 2, low 4. Hey, they did the right thing by Aeneas Williams. They've really said, we're not going to sign you, we can send you somewhere else. We're giving you a chance to play in a big game. So Aeneas Williams' career as a Cardinal ends on the day Leonard Davis's career as a Cardinal begins. Up next, Cleveland. They could go a lot of directions, including a trade. This will be interesting. We'll be back. And welcome back to New York. The Cleveland Browns, in their 3rd year of existence, well, this Cleveland Browns, they're on the clock. They got 9 minutes to go. There's a lot of things we're going to discuss here, including indicating with a lot of players. But in Atlanta, they're discussing only one thing, and that's Michael Vick. Let's go down to Hotlanta with Scott Walker. Scott, obviously enthusiasm for a day and a half, for a day now.
Absolutely, Boomer. And Dan Reeves, good enough to join us here, coming down from the war room. And obviously, you said there's relief here as well. 18 years ago, you were in a similar situation. John Elway was the player. What do you learn from that situation in Elway's development that you'll use here with Michael Vick and making him the quarterback you think he can be?
Well, I think, first of all, both of them have the things that you see, to look at, the athletic ability and those types of things. And we were very fortunate in that John had those things that you couldn't really see. A great desire to be successful, great competitiveness, the ability to learn your system and want to be successful. And I think Michael Vick has these things. But that's going to be the real key to determine how good this young man is going to be, because he has a tremendous amount of athletic talent. And I think the fact that he is so competitive is really going to help him be able to play quickly.
You met with him a couple of weeks ago. Was that the meeting that showed you that he had those intangible abilities?
You know, I think, first of all, the fact that he would come in here when you think you're going to be the first pick in the draft and we had the 5th pick, for him to come in here said something to me. You know, that he had his feet on the ground and realized there were a lot of different things could possibly happen in the National Football League. And he came in and he fit in. We had about 20 players in here, and he really fit in very well with everybody and had a good time and was very impressive. And I think that's the thing that he has all the football talent, but the type of person he is off the field is so important too.
Everyone wants to know, when will we see him on the field? Will we see him on the field in a position other than quarterback?
Oh, well, that I don't know. We're going to try to get him ready. I think it's our responsibility as a coaching staff to try to get him ready as quick as we possibly can and make sure he's ready to play when we put him in the football game.
I'm sure everyone here is excited. Dan Reeves, thanks for joining us. We send it now back to Chris Fowler.
Drafted right after Michael Vick, big Leonard Davis out of Texas, headed to the Arizona Cardinals. You're looking at the baby of 21 brothers and sisters in the pride of Worthing, Texas. I guess about 1,000 people have gathered watching a big screen TV. Do you have something to say to the folks back home?
I just want to say, you know, thanks for all the support, and, you know, I really appreciate it, and, you know, growing up with people and having the relationships, and I just want to thank them all for that.
Now, you know what a demanding position tackle in the NFL can be, going against the best pass rushers in the world. If there is one question, they say, Leonard might not be mean enough, might not be nasty enough, but do you have a war face? Do you have a mean streak?
I have a mean streak, and I'm able to turn it on and off. You know, when I get off the field, you know, I'm a nice guy, but you know, when I get on the field, I'm you know, going out and trying to, you know, just take somebody's head off.
This guy's been 300 pounds, I think, since 8th grade. So you've always known what it is to be big. Now you'll know what it is to be rich. Congratulations. Leonard Davis, to Arizona Cardinals. Chris?
If he's been big for a long time, Chris, then he understands what it means to be big, and the Cardinals hope he plays big. The Cleveland Browns, who last year, after all the pomp and circumstance of getting back in the NFL, one of the most storied franchises in the National Football League, last year Tim Couch got hurt, the bottom fell out, they couldn't move the ball at all on offense. Defensively, they started to improve, but when you can't move the ball at all on offense, eventually the defense, it just totally ran out of gas. The Cleveland Browns at 3-13 have a healthy Tim Couch, and they have a new coach. They have Butch Davis, who is the coach, a defensive mentor, a great college coach at Miami of Florida, and a coach who we are now looking at, and we have an idea what it is, but I'm going to throw out a bunch of names. now looking at defensive linemen, even though they drafted Courtney Brown last year. They're now looking at perhaps a wide receiver because they don't have a lead receiver. They got a couple of nice receivers. Running back, I mean, they could use everything. They could use everything. Is there a play? Just your grades. Is there one that stands out for you?
I think Gerard Warren's the guy. I think we can slide down possibly to New England guys, but I look at Gerard Warren. You put him next to Courtney Brown. Everybody says, well, you have Tim Catch. You need the running back. You need the wide receiver. What about Courtney Brown? I mean, he's your focal point of your defense. You put a Gerard Warren. Richard Seymour's name's come up. I have him down the line just a bit. I think you need a Gerard Warren to really stabilize things and really just jam that middle and complement Courtney Brown.
You know what? It's interesting. Two other names were out there by the Browns all week long, other than Warren. Let's see what they do.
With the third choice in the 2001 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns select Gerard Warren, defensive tackle from Florida.
Well, the reason I threw out what I did, and we had a little premonition it might be Warren, you're smart, is that it's interesting. Some can you know when they're bluffing, others you can't. The Browns had Seymour's name and Terrell's name, the wide receiver, both outstanding players, but they said, Butch doesn't like Gators.
Yeah, right.
Guess what? He's a pro coach now. We can get over it more.
He played against Gerard Warren. I spoke to Butch about Warren, and I had one coach tell me that if you want Gerard Warren, it's like getting Warren Sapp. And Butch said, not quite. You know, Warren Sapp was more athletic, more fluid. Warren Sapp came to Miami as a tight end. But he said, this Gerard Warren, more explosive, more powerful. And don't forget the division they play in. Even though there's going to be realignment, it's still the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're still going to play smash-around football with some of these teams, and you need a big, stout, big guy, 327 pounds.
We have to also take a look. What did they do in free agency? I think we're sitting here talking about the draft, but how do you help your football team? They bring in a Mark Smith. Okay, he was a good, solid player in Arizona when they got him to show up. I mean, he just had to come and show up. Dwayne Rudd, you bring in as a linebacker. You added Ross Verba to the offensive line. All of a sudden, this team starts to take some shape. Now you've got your solid #1 pick from last year, a good guy inside, and you start to get it going. When you take a
look at this,
they were lighting the rear end.
Guys, you talk about strength. Obviously, 6'4", 325, you're going to be strong. Gerard Warren with Courtney Brown on the outside and Gerard Warren on the inside. You just hope, and I don't mean to put pressure on these guys, but I remember a defensive end named Deacon Jones and a defensive tackle named Merlin Olsen, and the Rams were pretty good for about 12 years, weren't they? I know that's a reach.
You know what I like about this?
There's the strategy.
It's Dwight Clark, a receiver, right? They were looking at Gerard Warren, David Terrell, the Michigan wide receiver. Dwight Clark was the guy who I think helped encourage Butch to go ahead with defense. Hey, I was taken in the 10th round. We'll find somebody later in the draft.
But there are a lot of guys also that are available.
Receiver deep draft right now.
So you're freed up more. You know, Florida, he had 7 more tackle guys in the second game. And this is a guy that had a ton of hurry. You free him up a little bit more in the NFL when you have Courtney Brown next to him.
Oh, I agree. I think when you start getting tandems together, I always think of Leonard Marshall and Lawrence Taylor. When you start putting tandems together on the defensive line, it's tough to deal with. And you take a look at what they have as far as their defensive line goes. Orpheus Roy, solid. Stalin Colonnade, solid. Keith McKenzie, Courtney Brown. Now Gerard Williams gets sprinkled in. You don't see teams play 4 defensive linemen anymore anyway. But there's a rotation.
But what about Tim Catch? This is a team that its offense was dreadful last year. 30th, 31st in this league. And you do need help for Tim Catch.
But I want to tell you, guys, you might think this is going to be a statement. I'm sure it's going to get some reaction. I don't think Curtis Enis is done. I think he's okay to come in there and fill a role for them. And I'm sure they can get a receiver.
Very seldom in the NFL does a running back develop down the line. Running backs, if they're gifted, they usually jump out as soon as they come in.
They played him wrong last year. They played him at the fullback position. He was out of position.
Let's see what they do top of the second round.
They will take a running back to the top of the second round. They're going to be staring a lot of good running backs in the face.
There'll be some good receivers there. But the Cleveland Browns are hoping that they have done maybe some old-fashioned Cleveland Brown football, like the late Lou Gatto on the defensive line. The Bengals are next. Can't wait. Welcome back to New York. We have had Michael Vick to Atlanta. Leonard Davis tackled Arizona. Another huge man, Gerard Warren, defensive tackle, Cleveland. And now we come to a team that we always come to in the first hour of the draft, the Cincinnati Bengals. For the 7th time in the last 10 years. Now, 7 times in 10 years, the Bengals have a pick in the top 6. Now, sooner or later, they're going to bust loose. sooner or later. Last year they picked Peter Warrick, who they hope will energize their offense. He's an interesting player. They could trade, but I don't know if they really know how. Do they go just a big offensive tackle? What do they do, Jim? Here, okay,
I think they've got to go offensive tackle.
Here, last year, new stadium, same Bengals. Consulate out, Dick LeBeau in. Corey Dillon, oh, by the way, broke Walter Payton's rushing record for a single game, 278 yards. Achilles Smith looked like Achilles' heel, struggled at quarterback. We saw Peter Warrick at times show the flashes that we know he is capable of. But the Cincinnati Bengals are still looking for some movement. They were outscored by almost 200 points. They lost more games than anybody in the 90s.
They're the Bengals.
They're the Bengals. What do they do?
They've spent time with 4 players. Leonard Davis, Kenyatta Walker, Justin Smith, the defensive end from Missouri, and surprisingly, Drew Brees of Purdue. Now, I think maybe Brees, second round. Yeah, that's the 4 guys they spent time with.
He had to be on his way going somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, he just sort of stopped in Cincinnati. They got
Indiana, they changed planes.
Somewhere they were moving.
So you had John Kitna in there. You know, Kitna's there, but you certainly had 1 sack. You had a Booker and Copeland. You had no production out of your defensive end.
Justin Smith or Kenyatta Walker, got to be.
With the 4th choice in the first round of the 2001 draft, Cincinnati Bengals select Justin Smith, defensive end from Missouri.
Now, you talk about some picks that maybe the Bengals have made that you're not sure of. This young man from Missouri, motor. My God, you know exactly what you're getting here. I mean, many teams coveted this guy, Mel.
6'4", Chris, 270, and look at the speed. He ran a 4.62 during his workout. And I like the fact that, in addition to sacks, I think sacks can be very overrated. He set the single-season record at Missouri with 11, Chris, but 97 tackles led Missouri. That's impressive.
This is guy, it's interesting when you talk to teams about this guy. Boy, it was love him or lukewarm on him, and you love his attitude, you love his motor. But I also hear people say 32.5-inch arms. There's only been 1 defensive lineman in the last 10 years who's had any success with 32.5-inch arms and 32-inch arms. They mentioned Marcellus Wiley, and that was only 1 year. So that is a question mark. They certainly hope he's not Jason Buck.
32.5. You know, it's easier to buy shirts, though, for your defensive end. 32, and he can at least get shirts. You saw that there. I mean, he's got explosive.
Well, the other side of it, too, when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they only had 9 interceptions. They were 30th in the league. They had 26 sacks. You say that sacks at the college level maybe not a factor. It certainly is a factor. If nothing else, you create pressure on a quarterback that causes the interception. I think it's an excellent choice for them. It's a way to start building the other side of the ball.
Joe, what you have to realize with Justin Smith, he did both. He was a guy that I think held up against the run very effectively. That's proven. But he also had some sacks. So he gives you the both. I think he's not a one-dimensional player at all.
You know what? Peter Warrick last year, Justin Smith this year. I like those picks. Do you? Combined? I like it.
Listen, it's always when it's the Bengals, the stars of the show. And listen, I really believe, like Achilles Smith, I think that if Dante Culpepper had been in Cincinnati, he might be struggling. If it was Donovan McNabb in Cincinnati, he might be struggling. There's just something about the franchise, the team, that takes the player down.
Until they settle in. Bob Rukowski is now the offensive coordinator. They added John Kitna as a quarterback. Now, John out in San Diego, I think he had a great teacher in Mike Holmgren. I think that's an upgrade at that position. Between Achilles Smith and Scott Mitchell, they got nothing out of the quarterback.
At what point will Achilles Smith become the starting quarterback?
I think it's still a question. I really think it's a question.
You're looking at Justin Smith. That's the first time a player from Missouri's gone in the first round in over a decade. 1987. Remember the big tackle, John? 100 pounds of clay was the pick there. And now, when that card went up, and when Cleveland did what they did, the happiest folks in the first round are now the San Diego Chargers. They gambled and won. They fought the law, and the law did not win. They will get a chance to draft LaDainian Tomlinson, running back. And John Butler is the new general manager. Mike Riley, the holdover coach. San Diego has a new quarterback. We're in the war room. There's John, and he has to be thrilled. San Diego's on the clock, and they are just thrilled that the Cleveland Browns, for one, did not pick a running back, LaDainian Tomlinson, who we expect to be San Diego's pick. But with our first of many, Tonight in video conferences, we bring in the new coach of the Cleveland Browns, Butch Davis. So you see, Butch, not only are you welcome to the NFL as a head coach, you're the first on one of these video conferences. And I welcome to the NFL, and I know you don't expect to be drafted up here that long.
Well, Chris, it's great to be here, and obviously it's a great day for us. We're really excited, and the pick, obviously, with Gerard Warren, I think it maybe caught a lot of people by surprise, but our entire organization, coaches, you know, everybody, the scouts, management, everybody really felt like that was the best pick.
Well, you saw him up close in college for a long time. What stood out more than anything else about Warren to you?
Well, there were a couple of factors, Chris, in trying to decide which guy we were going to take. One of them, we really felt like that Gerard was a terrific player. He'd been a dominating starter at the University of Florida almost his entire career. He's a big, extraordinarily athletic big man, 320 pounds, guy that provided a lot of sacks, a lot of pressures. You know, we just really felt like that he brought a dimension defensively to our entire defense. The division that we play in, obviously, there's tons of running backs. Eddie George, you know, Corey Dillon, a lot of people, Jamal, and, you know, we just got to do a great job stopping the run, and so we felt like that he was going to be the kind of guy that we needed to add to the defense.
Real quickly, Tim Couch, as we stand in late April, ahead of schedule, behind schedule, to be ready to go and like nothing happened.
No, absolutely. Chris, we really feel like that he's ahead of schedule. We had a mini camp last week prior to the draft. He threw the ball extremely well, no adverse effect.
Well, that's good for all football fans. Certainly in Cleveland, we look for you to do offense, but, you know, you send out some different smoke signals. You're getting good at this, you know.
Thank you, Chris.
Back to the war room for Butch Davis. In the NFL as a head coach, of course, for years, as an assistant with Jimmy Johnson. That's his NFL pedigree. San Diego, they went down from 1 to 5. And what did the Chargers do last year? Well, what didn't they do? The San Diego Chargers at 1-15 win. Well, and there's no way, there's no nice way to describe the quarterback situation with San Diego. Ryan Leaf, the second pick overall a few years ago behind Peyton Manning, couldn't stay on his feet, couldn't keep the ball in his hands. They tried Harbaugh, they tried Moses Moreno. It was offense, it was horrible. And they just wanted one win. And they finally got it against the Chiefs. Ironically, off the foot of John Connie, Sheila McCray. Good night, everybody. but Carney won't even be their kicker next year. They've gone with Richie. The San Diego Chargers, though, have done a makeover. John Butler is the new general manager. Mike Riley is still the head coach, but Norv Turner, offensive guru, worked with Butch Davis under Jimmy, of course. He is the new offensive coordinator. So a new feel, and a guy named Doug Flutie at quarterback. Ed Werder, it's hard to get a crowd and a city excited about a 1-15 team. But yet I think now, okay, they traded Vick, they get Tomlinson and all these other moves. They're selling tickets out there at 1-15, aren't they?
Well, John Butler obviously knew his board very well and knew everybody else's draft board ahead of him very well, because the guy they really wanted all along, once they couldn't come to terms with Michael Vick and decided to trade the #1 overall pick, was TCU running back LaDainian Tomlinson, who is there and is almost certain to be their selection to improve a running game that was the worst in the NFL. This will add an elite runner, and Norv Turner, the offensive coordinator, feels very confident that they will be able to run the football successfully. I think you'll see a much greater commitment to the running game. And Norv Turner, Chris, has had a Pro Bowl running back in 6 of his last 10 years, and 5 of those years, he also had a Pro Bowl quarterback.
And they have a workhorse here, Eddie, if Tomlinson is the pick, which well, let's just go out on a limb and say that it's going to be the pick, okay? They've gambled, and so far they have won. And how they use their 3 and how they use their 2 for guys who can get on the field immediately this year will be, you know what, while we're waiting 2 years for Vick to play while we have Flutie, we're actually making a move in the AFC West, and it's smart. Let's see.
With the 5th pick in the first round of the 2001 draft, the San Diego Chargers select LaDainian Tomlinson, running back from TCU.
Chris, two weeks ago I had a conversation with John Butler, and he openly fantasized about his true wishes for this draft, which was he'd love to make a trade, get to number 2 or 3, and end up with LaDainian Tomlinson. He said, as much as I love Jim Kelly and what he did for the Buffalo Bills, I still think Thurman Thomas was really the guy that drove us.
Well, he may have just drafted Thurman. Over 5,000 yards rushing in his career.
You look at the way he runs the football. Now, you might say, well, he played in an offense where they pitch the ball a lot. You can see there that he also runs out of the eye. There's the pitch. Now, look at the speed and the power running through tackles. There's the eye. There he is hitting the hole. Again, great balance. You have to remember who his offensive coordinator is going to be. Norv Turner knows how to get the most out of a running back. He also has a quarterback who will be extremely effective in play-action styles of play. So you got Doug Flutie's ability to move around. You've got LaDainian now to be able to pound a little bit. You can still find a running back somewhere, or excuse me, a wide receiver somewhere in this draft. So I think they're putting the pieces together that they want.
Well, Tomlinson as a pro, I mean, my goodness, you talk about a workhorse, Mel?
Oh, I'll tell you, Chris, he carried the ball 49 times in one game last year, 36 times in one game as a junior. Certainly the productivity's there. Now, he did it against some bad defenses. There's no question about that. You also saw the option incorporated in that offense. Remember, Rashawn Salam, option back. He struggled, guys, and I think what really did it for Tomlinson was the fact that he went to the Senior Bowl, and on that Tuesday practice in Mobile, Mort, he put on a show. The first division, and the combine with that 4.44 and that 40 vertical. I think he did everything right since the end of the season to become the 5th pick overall.
And from the end of the season to now, hey, listen, there's a lot of debate. Is it Tomlinson? Is it Deuce McAllister? Is it Michael Bennett?
I still like Deuce.
I know, but since that Senior Bowl, though, Tomlinson separated from the pack, most of the pack, and this is the guy that basically has
loyal,
and ran full loyal.
Let me just say something. We saw him hold up number 1 down there. Wore number 5 in college. He's gone with the 5th overall pick in the first round. So already there's a good omen, San Diego. The last time San Diego had the 5th overall pick in the first round, 1990, Junior Seau, who conveniently wears number 55. So 5 is the low number of Charger wins next year. They're going to go 7-9 with Flutie and Tomlinson. They've got a pretty good defense. If they'd only bring back those great uniforms. I know you can't do it this year. Bring back those AFL Lightning Bolt uniforms, then you got everything. When we come back, the E-Men, New England on the clock. A little rock and roll here at the draft by our guys Todd Tebow and the Blue Chips. He didn't know that his group was the Blue Chips. They are now. Blue Chip running back? We think so. LaDainian Tomlinson with our Chris Fowler. Chris?
Boomer, as you said, number 5 for TCU goes with the number 5 pick to San Diego. Yesterday, you reeled off to me almost the entire first-round draft order off the top of your head, but you never thought Chargers number 5 until the trade.
I never thought about it. You know, it was one of them deals that I was for certain that that they was going to take Vick at the number 1 spot. But when the trade happened, I was like, well, maybe so. You know, I was awfully happy.
You came to TCU, endured a 1-10 freshman season, empty stands, something very few players in this draft had to endure in college. Have you reflected on what an amazing 4-year ride it's been? It culminates right here.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing. You know how far I've came. You know, I know how to rebuild a team. You know, I know how to step in and work hard. I know what it takes to rebuild a team. So, you know, I'm just looking in, going in, contributing, and playing at San Diego. I'm so happy right now. It's unbelievable.
You've been through a 1-10 season. The Chargers also won 1 game. And I know you have kind of a secret plan. You're a very goal-oriented guy. You came to TCU with a plan for college and almost followed it to the letter. Right. The NFL, your plan does involve the playoffs and perhaps playing a game in Hawaii at the end of that. But it's going to be tough. You know you're part of a rebuilding program. Right. In a way, it's starting over what you went through at TCU.
Right. You know, I enjoy that. I love to have a chance to be on a team that's rebuilding. You know, I've dealt with it my whole career at TCU, and there's nothing different here. You know, I know what it takes, like I said, and I'm looking forward to the challenge.
You know the rap by some, well, he's too short. He may not be a franchise back. The stopwatch says he doesn't have top 5 or top 6 quickness. But you love to prove people wrong. You've been doing that your whole life.
I love to prove people wrong. Everybody always told me I couldn't do this. You know, and the thing about it, no one ever said you have to be 6 feet to be a running back. You know, I got a lot of heart, and a lot of people will see that.
What do you need to work on in the NFL the next level? A lot of backs come in, and not everybody succeeds. Let's face it, there's a lot of busts at that position. What do you think you need to work on?
Well, I think I just need to continue to work hard. I think I need to outwork people, you know, work on picking up defensive blitzes, doing some pass routes out the backfield, all kinds of things that I can get better, man-to-man, beating the linebacker, or even the safety, things like that.
Wish you the best. It's been fun watching your career, one of the top 5 or 6 all-time rushers in college football. Another rebuilding job ahead of you, LaDainian Tomlinson. We wish you the best out in San Diego. Yes?
Here's a young man that just give me the ball. Let me put it on my shoulders. So for you fans of the TCU Horned Frogs, I don't know how many of you know this, the first Horned Frog to go in the first round since Norm Big Blue Goulash, 1970. Now that's, we remember him, Joe. Mort, you're too young to remember Norm. Although it was in your time. That was the grandson of Alex and the son of Dean. That was young John Spanos giving him the uniform. And I do want to clear up one other thing for San Diego. Their evaluation as Michael Vick as a player or a person, that didn't go down anywhere. That trade was made hoping that this would happen. It might be out there that San Diego didn't think of him that highly as what kind of maybe player, or somehow I've read some things this morning that San Diego never said, that it never got out that way. So they wanted to make sure that they hope both guys excel in the NFL, and of course we do as well. We now move on to year 2 of Bill Belichick as head coach of the New England Patriots, a team that was in the Super Bowl a handful of years ago. But a team that fell to the bottom of the very competitive AFC East. Andrea Kramer is in St. Louis, and I can't believe with all the draft picks St. Louis has and what's been going on there, she actually has time to think about New England. But Andrea, I do know that they took a look at Warren at the end of this week. Obviously, he's gone. They need to press the envelope a little bit down the middle of the field. They can do it in several ways. Good morning, Andrea. Good afternoon, Andrea. What do you have?
Well, remember, Chris, they have phones everywhere. Doesn't matter how many picks you have. But, yes, you're talking about the holes that they had on offense. But remember that on defense, a lot of needs to fill as well. They lost Chad Eaton to the Seahawks. They released Henry Thomas. I think who the Patriots are thinking about is Georgia defensive tackle Richard Seymour. He's got great size, very versatile. He could be a 4-3 tackle, a 4-3 end. He could play over center at nose tackle. A lot of holes to fill, but I think that Seymour is the guy that the Patriots are thinking about first and foremost at this 6th slot.
All right, well, that would certainly add up. Bill Belichick, Andrea, defensively, guys, and Mel and Mort, Joe. Let's look at the board. Is Seymour, is this a little high, or do you got to go get a guy like that right now?
Well, he's been projected to go in this general area, and I think you look at it, guys, you have Drew Bledsoe. Do you surround him with the David Terrell, with Corin Robinson, or do you upgrade a defensive line that has some problems right now because of losses of free agents?
I think you have to stop and think who the head coach is. Again, you know, you think about Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was a big part of the championships that were won in New York, as good as the teams were in New England before, as good as the teams were with the Jets. He is a terrific defensive football coach. I would think if he had his druthers, they feel like they can stop people from scoring. You've got Drew Bledsoe now signed for a long time.
Yeah, but you don't score many points, Joe. Too many 10s and 13s.
But you will be better, and I believe eventually they're going to have to find a running back. That's going to be the key, I think, in this draft, to find someone somewhere.
I just wonder whether they plan for David Terrell to be here. That seems to, you know, because this is probably, because they're clearly looking at Richard Seymour. Butch Davis loved Richard Seymour. He's 20 years old. He's athletic. He's got to learn how to play the run a little bit more, but he will get upfield. But David Terrell, got to be tempting when you got Drew Bledsoe.
Well, the Patriots are there. They've invested huge money in Drew Bledsoe, so he will finish his career as a New England Patriot. Will he have some toys to play with on offense? Here's the pick.
With the 6th pick in the 2001 draft, the New England Patriots select Richard Seymour, defensive tackle from Georgia.
Well, so we've had 3 defensive linemen go in the first 6 picks, which isn't really a surprise. Richard Seymour, you talk about a size. Well, he's light at 300 pounds, huh? I mean, as this day and age goes, 6'6", 300 pounds from Georgia down your home way, Mort. He's powerful. got pretty quick hands and feet for a guy this size, Mel.
What he is, Chris, is a guy who has tremendous wingspan. I think if you look at a guy like Richard Seymour, going back to his sophomore year, this is against Tennessee. He had 12 tackles as a junior, 9 this past season. You know, Cole Palmer and the Volunteers are glad to see Richard Seymour move on to the NFL. Played next to Marcus Stroud, who will go probably mid-first round. They were read, react, contain types. He only had 1.5 sacks. Has to become more of a finisher. That may have been system-related more.
I think what's system-related? Gary Gibbs playing that Hokie defense there at Georgia. And this is a guy, Richard Seymour, Marcus Stroud. They went through a lot of changes on defense at the University of Georgia. Changes with the defensive coordinator. Always learning how to play in a different scheme. But Seymour, I think he's just 20 years old. Tremendous upside with this guy. Maybe 3 years from now, could be a Pro Bowl player.
Look, they need help on, they need help in a lot of places. And Bill knew that even at the beginning of the year when they were in a lot of games before the bottom really fell out. I mean, you got to, if you were building in this division, remember, everybody was at 500 or above other than the Patriots. I mean, there aren't any easy chalk wins in this division. You better be able to muster up on both sides of the offensive and defensive line. The offensive line is changing over, and as you mentioned, Eaton gone, that's changed as well. And now, as we move on here, now we are at the portion of the draft where the first of 2 picks for the Seattle Seahawks and Mike Holmgren and company, who are as busy as anyone in this offseason, changing really the whole feel of this team that 2 years ago won the West, but last year fell way down in the West. Now you have to wonder, even though Mike Holmgren and many who are offensive-minded say, I'd rather go with a big guy than a receiver this high. He doesn't really have a big time.
But one of the big guys just went, Seymour.
Well, all the big guys.
And here's David Terrell.
But I think you really have to stop. I mean, again, you have to look beyond that and say, what did Mike Holmgren do in Seattle? What did he do on his football team? The part that he went after was the defensive side. So maybe here in the draft,
let's look at receivers. Let's look at your list, Mel.
You bring in Matt Hasselbeck, you better find some wide receivers.
Right.
Darrell Jackson, they stole in the 3rd round last year. Warren Robinson would have been off the board by now, but remember that 40 time with the pulled hamstring? Nobody has an accurate 40 when a 3rd-year sophomore who's just 20 years of age. Rod Gardner, I think, is a very safe pick, a big physical receiver like a Mike Holmgren is looking for. So is David Terrell at 6'3", 213. So the receivers that Mike Holmgren likes and prefers are there now. But remember Terrell, the stress fracture, then the injury question, it subsided, Boomer. But I think the questions about those 2 underclassmen are the reasons they're still on the board right now.
Mike Holmgren and Brett Favre, where did they go almost all the time? Sterling Sharp, tough, big guy across the middle of the field. Weren't necessarily home runs, although Sterling certainly hit many. A big receiver. Terrell and Robinson fit. I'm going to guess it's going to be David Terrell, but we have Mike and the Wise Men, or at least Mike and the Men, up in Bristol.
Just a guess, I'm sure, Chris. Thanks. You know, when you talk wide receivers, since '96, in the 1st round, 20 receivers have been taken. They average 4 touchdowns and only 37 catches. So we're not talking about, usually, guys who come in with big-time Pro Bowl-type production.
No question about it. And for me, if I'm evaluating a wide receiver, I'm looking for a guy when the ball's in the air. I want to see how tough he is when the ball's in the air. It's his or nobody else's ball. Now, I know there's speed, but if a guy can run the 40 and 4.3 but can't catch a cold, I don't want him. I want that guy that week in and week out I look on tape. He gets open, he runs after the catch, and it doesn't matter who you put on him, he can beat a defense. I want that guy who's hungry for the football.
Let me ask you quarterbacks a question. Or you too, Mike. Really, with the West Coast offenses today, how does that change the perception of what you're looking for in a wide receiver?
No question, if you run the West Coast offense, you have to be able to run after the catch. First, you have to have the good hands and a quarterback that gets the ball in the right location. Then you have to be able to run. That's why the Gardners, the Terrells, the guys that are the big, strong guys, a la our colleague Sterling Sharp, catch the ball, knock people down, and run. But this is the most difficult position in the National Football League to evaluate these guys coming out of college because of the adjustments you have to make once the ball is snapped.
So if you're going Holmgren and the type of receiver he likes, it is Gardner, it is Terrell, because they're big guys over the middle. But Corn Robinson and Terrell both average around 17 yards per catch. But Corn Robinson does it a lot of times on the short passes, and he uses his moves, gets the yards after the catch. What you were talking about, Sean. You can go short to him, he'll get you the yards. Terrell is down the field a little
and a home run hitter after he catches that ball. And remember this in Corn Robinson, a young guy with a lot of upside, a lot of potential. He's my favorite, but once, and Jaws, you hit it perfectly. Trying to judge these guys comes down to this. Mentally tough. Can they beat press coverage? Because the corners are getting bigger every year.
Just give me one quick thought. Seattle's pick here, obviously. Who's the best pick? fit, with Seattle?
Corn Robinson, for me, I think he's the best receiver on the board.
I think they're going defense. I'm going to go away from the wide receivers. I think they're going defense.
I think they cut both their their starting wide receivers.
Yes.
I go Corn Robinson, yards after the catch.
28% of the top 25 receivers in the last 5 years were first-round picks. That's all.
Not much. Let's go back to Chris. Boomer.
All right, Mike and guys, I made my guess. We'll see. Oakland at 12-4, Denver at 11-5 atop the division, which a year ago, or once removed, was won by the Seahawks. The Seahawks fell back. And Mike Holmgren has been coach of the year. Well, there's a trade with the 49ers, who will go defense. But let's just, while this is up there, because it's a little high to pick a receiver. While this is up, just take a good look. Let's go back to that for one more minute. Here are the moves that Seattle made. Joe mentioned Matt Hasselbeck. He's going to be the starting quarterback from Green Bay. Let's go back and see Chad Eaton, John Randall, perennial Pro Bowler on the defensive line. Marcus Robertson is going to play safety for the Seahawks. Levon Kirkland is going to play linebacker for the Seahawks. So these are moves that he made on defense, and now he's going to get, I guess, an extra pick as soon as we get details of the trade between the 49ers, who we feel want Andre Carter.
Right.
That's why they would move ahead of Chicago, and therefore we'll see what Seattle gets in return for moving down just 2 spots. Andrea, what happened?
Well, Chris, there was so much talk about Bill Walsh wanting to wheel and deal. Remember, he already got more picks later in the round, but he wanted to make this move to Seattle because he wanted one guy, and you've been talking about him, Andre Carter. When I spoke to Steve Mariucci last night, and we know how effusive Mooch can be, he said, I love Andre Carter. Remember, Mariucci recruited Carter to Cal when he was there. He loves his size, the wingspan. He's an edge player. This is completely an area of need for them, defensive line, getting production from the defensive end. So they made the move up to get Andre Carter from Cal. Back to you, Chris.
All right, Andrea, and you pointed out he never played for Mooch, but he recruited him, and then that was the year Mooch moved on to San Francisco. And there's pretty good heritage here as well, which we'll explain in a moment.
With the 7th pick in the 2001 draft, acquired by trade from Seattle, the San Francisco 49ers select Andre Carter, defensive end from California.
First of all, they don't have to pay moving expenses. I mean, that's the most important thing. You just some mileage, drive across the bridge from Cal to
$2 for some gas.
Down to 49,
Don't even fill your tank up. Here's a quarter tank.
Look, they drafted almost everyone defense last year. But an Andre Carter, Andrea Porter, Mooch was in the home recruiting him. And I want to put, this is the son of one of the best, one of the best all-time nose tackles to ever play in the NFL, and that's Reuben Carter. And all you have to do is sit with Tom Jackson for 14 years, hear about how good Reuben is, and work ethic, genes, it's all there,
And what's interesting about this is that the Denver Broncos had been talking with San Francisco about getting up there to get Andre Carter, but then there's been a lot of talk last 24 hours about Carter going to the Bears at number 8, which meant if you wanted Andre Carter, you had to pretty much go to the 7th spot.
Now, he's at 250, Mel, not, prototypical for weight, correct?
Well, you're talking about the 250 to 265 area, Chris. I think you look at Rob Burnett and Michael McCrary in Baltimore, and you see the success that they've had at a similar weight. You look at the productivity over 4 years of Andre Carter. 20 tackles for loss, 10 sacks as a junior. He's a marked man this year. They move him around, and he's still productive, Chris. That's what's impressive. They scheme to take him out of a game, and they can't. That's the reason, Morton, Joe, that Andre Carter solidified. I want to ask you, Mort, this question. Teams, I think, allowed too much information to go out too early. Everybody knew Chicago was eyeing Tomlinson and Carter. San Francisco knew it. They trade up one spot ahead of Chicago. They get Andre Carter.
I think Mark Hatley of the Bears like 3 or 4 guys. Listen, and David Terrell's there, but this morning, Deuce McAllister was getting very strong with the Chicago Bears.
But who was their main option, though, Mort?
Well, Andre Carter quit it, but I think Hatley never had a conviction on just one guy when I spoke with him last night.
See, I agree with Mort here, Mel. People don't give it, again, twice.
Team it up on me, Joe.
In the same hour.
Chris, you got to help me, pal.
The thing is, it isn't too much information. We can sit down and you can look at the need of a football team and say,
Joe, that's not true.
This football team needs a couple people. Yes, it is true.
No.
We can sit down. How do you pick them? You know the need.
Yeah, Joe, but Andre Carter, you talk about names associated with a team. It happens too often.
But there's so few in this area.
You know what?
Last that year, good.
Last year,
they have other needs.
There was a time that San Francisco played at one time. They didn't all start with a couple injuries. I think there were 8 rookies at one time playing defense for San Francisco. Some of them are really going to pan out pretty big time. And with Carter, along with Bryant Young, who's the old guy from Notre Dame on the line, they're hoping if they get a defense, they get a pretty good offense. We'll be back with Stuff Bears. Bell. Outside, fans were streaming in here to the 2001 NFL Draft, the 66th NFL Draft. The San Diego Chargers, they hung on, they traded the #1 overall pick away. The San Diego Chargers did, but they got their man, or their next man, running back LaDainian Tomlinson anyway. Life of Riley is with Ed, never a discouraging word, Ed.
Well, Boomer, they did get the guy they wanted off the top of their draft board, but going down from 1 to 5, Mike, there had to be a lot of nervousness as those picks were coming off the board ahead of you. And how were you monitoring it in your room as to what was going on?
Ed, we were trying to find out if there was any activity going on at the other places that looked like there might be a trade in the making. Once we made the first pick trade, we were waiting for LaDainian, and we really wanted to get him. And there were some anxious times in there.
Did he prove to you at the Senior Bowl, is that where he demonstrated that he could be a 3-down back, that he could catch the ball well enough to stay on the field in all situations?
Yeah, we thought after looking at him at the Senior Bowl and the workouts that he was an all-purpose guy, very versatile. And the longer we looked at him, the more we liked him. You know, that was the big question. What could he do catching the football, because they'd run a lot of option in college. But I think he dispelled all that as the offseason won.
Well, and Chris Berman, here's how much the Chargers think of LaDainian Tomlinson. John Butler, the GM, who was the architect with Bill Polian of those Buffalo teams that went to 4 straight Super Bowls, was on the phone with Polian the other day, and Polian said, doesn't he remind you of? And before Polian could spit out Thurman Thomas, John Butler cut him off and said, tell me about it when he makes the Hall of Fame.
Well, if Ed and Mike, if they have a run like the Bills did, and LaDainian Tomlinson is at the hub of it, well, then we'll look back at this draft as where the Chargers went from down to moving up and staying up. A long way to go, though. A man that has been at the top of, or near the top of his profession, well, for a few years. Let's just do it that way. Let's bring in on our, it's an Acton video conference, Hall of Fame, Professional Football Hall of Fame head coach, and running, can I say it, Bill? Probably running your last draft, Bill Walsh. Welcome this morning.
Well, it's great to be here. We're excited about our selection. He's the man we wanted all along, and it took some doing. And Mike Holmgren is a tough guy to deal with. I don't know where he learned that, but
I don't either.
but this guy drove a hard bargain. But it was really important to us that Andre Carter come to the San Francisco 49ers. To me, he's light years ahead of a lot of the defensive linemen playing in the NFL today. His dad has taught him defensive line techniques since he was 5 years old. So as you watch him play, he's so far ahead of the rest of the competition that we think he can come right in and start and be an outstanding player.
You have a bunch of, well, will be second-year players and rookies, and you're going to draft a couple of more as well. I would assume as the day goes on. Does this defense build this year have a chance to make a move? Because you have some parts on offense, there's no question about that.
Well, we can move the ball. Steve Mariucci's offense is beautiful to watch sometimes. But defensively, you need athletes. You can't do without them. And in the case of Andre Carter, if we were to sign Dana Stubblefield back with Bryant Young, we have some excellent young defensive ends. We've signed a middle linebacker in Smith. We've got Ulbrich playing the weak side linebacker. We should be a very good, solid defensive team this year.
Bill, and a personal note, after this weekend, or perhaps soon, your duties will change with the 49ers. A tinge of sadness with you, a tinge of elation as you approach this draft with your usual zest, or will those feelings you deal with after this is over this weekend?
Well, there may be a letdown in a couple of weeks, but right now I'm very excited about the draft and about Andre Carter. But yes, it's a parting of the ways in the sense of having responsibility for something. But I'll remain on with the 49ers, and I think I'll have a very active role. and I'll enjoy that very much. But it's been a great run, and along with Ron Wolf, the two of us are stepping out of the way for some younger, more, even in a sense, more dynamic people.
I love that you and Ron Wolf had kind of one for the road. You made kind of a, you know, a swap of picks. You guys couldn't resist it, could you?
And we had to do something, and both of us tease each other. We were relegated down to trading 4th and 5th round picks. That's all we were good for. But in the meantime, here we are. We've got Andre Carter, the man we wanted, and I'm just elated.
Well, Bill, you've been, to kind of put it in encapsulate, your legacy may be the Super Bowl teams. It may be the offense that 20 years later, when it's run right, can't be stopped. Or your legacy may be all the men that you kind of influenced, like Mike Holmgren, who you've sent on in the league. And I'm sure you're very proud of all those things. We congratulate you on a run that may be unparalleled. Have fun this weekend, will you?
Thanks a lot, and thanks for including me.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Chris.
He's, well, it was nice of Bill and I to invent that West Coast offense together.
You
Joe
did
Montana
an
ran it.
outstanding job. You really did.
You're talking to a legend right there.
You let him take the credit. That was nice.
Well, you know what, though? He's still making moves. All right, now we have the Chicago Bears.
With the 8th choice in the 2001 draft, the Chicago Bears select David Terrell, wide receiver, Michigan.
I think, I mean, we haven't talked about one of the most storied franchises in football, the Bears, because all this was happening and Bill was so gracious with us. I think that's a guy that Seattle was looking at, although that there are 2 receivers there, so maybe they'll do that. But let's talk about the Chicago Bears, who again had another disappointing season, and I think it begins with the lack of development / cohesiveness in huddle. Call it what you want, Joe, with Cade McNown.
I think Cade McNown still is another young quarterback that has to try and prove himself. I'm not 100% sold. I liked him. I thought he was quarterback ready to come into the league a couple of years ago. I think he has regressed. I don't think he's performed to the level he can. This is a good choice for them because Marcus Robinson, who's a big receiver and a good receiver, has a back problem. So Marty Booker, he hasn't really stepped up and done the job they want. They lose Eddie Kinnison. So the wide receiver position creates a bit of, there's a void created there and an uncertainty that's wrapped around it.
And this is a guy in Terrell that I think that fits their offense. But as far as Cade McNown goes, I think you have to learn. He does not have the job. This time last year, it was his job. But, hey, based on how he has regressed, as you said, Shane Matthews, Jim Miller going to be given equal opportunity to win that job. And Cade McNown now has to earn it, which I think will go a long way if, in fact, he does.
Whoever it is, a quarterback will relish this selection of another big guy. You mentioned Marcus Robinson, David Terrell, a Big Ten player. So certainly everyone sitting at Soldier Field is familiar. Mel and Morton, Joe, what he did in college, 6'3", 213, 900-yard receiving games, and runs good routes, huh, Mel?
He really does. If you're watching this tape right now, you're seeing him beat Nate Clemens. Nate Clemens is a mid-first round draft choice. David Terrell against Jamar Fletcher. See him there with the size, 6'3", 213. I mean, he is a physical receiver. He'll block downfield. He had, I think, when you look at the productivity, yeah, impressive. But as a junior this past year, 14 touchdown receptions, 7 the prior year. So a guy that really stepped it up. The question I have is the stress fracture. He said it was there since August. For a skill position player, Mort, is there any concern about the injury going into this draft?
You know, I think there was a little bit of concern, but since he played with it his senior year, and everybody seems to say it may not be a major thing, so obviously you don't go in the top 10 if it's a major.
Before you do that, all you need to do is take a look at the depth chart, which we had up there. Marcus Robinson, you know, Des White, you know, hasn't really stepped up the way he wants to. Bobby Ingram. Bobby was hurt a lot last year. Marty Booker, not sure he can do it. Dwayne Bates. I mean, no one really jumps at it. I think Marcus Robinson is a terrific receiver, but again, is he going to be healthy enough? Also, they still will run a degree of Gary Croyton's offense in the past.
Let me ask you this.
John Swoop, they'll try to run
you guys, Cade McNown, he has not yet established himself, right? What's the problem? Is it the arm strength question at Chicago, or is it the fact he has not established himself as a leader within that football team?
I think it's twofold. First of all, I don't think he had a running game to support him. I think every young quarterback benefits from a running game. We're seeing Tim Couch struggle the same way. And Peyton Manning on the other side has Edwin James, so he's able to get it done.
James Allen had to pick up his game.
Secondly, I think it was their offensive philosophy, just to throw the ball around as much as they did. I don't think that helped them.
You know what the league needs, and this is whether you root for this team or not. The league needs the Chicago Bears to be a factor again. I mean, these are the Chicago Bears. They're in a division where every team was over 500 last year, except for them. They've been, for them, floundering, although they knocked Detroit out at the end of the year to have their one high moment. But now they get a guy that maybe puts a little excitement, they hope. David Terrell, the first receiver we've seen gone. He's with our Chris Fowler. Chris?
Well, Chris, a few minutes ago, David Terrell was taking a nap. He woke up, he started crying, and was a little cranky. Talk about David Terrell Jr., your 2-year-old son, who was awakened about 25 minutes ago, anticipating this pick. You had to sweat for a little bit, but I know you're elated to be a Bear.
Oh, yeah. I'm very excited. I'm just going to this situation, going to Chicago. Got a lot of friends in Chicago, a lot of family. My uncle, Jamal Crawford is there. You know, a lot of my friends are there. So I'm going to go into it, and the Bears want me. They took me, and that's kind of rock and roll. I'm showing what I'm all about.
You're a great salesman for Michigan, a great salesman for yourself. You talked to this guy for 10 minutes. He could convince any team that you'd be a great NFL player. But you were telling me yesterday, you are driven to be one of the great NFL receivers ever. You talked to Paul Warfield and Chris Carter, others, about what it takes to get there.
Oh, yeah. I just want to prepare myself for what I'm about to embark on in the NFL. And by that, you know, I need to go out there and affiliate myself with the right type of people. You know, I did that going to Michigan and throughout my high school career, and now with going and working out with Paul Warfield and those sorts of guys, I think that's the best thing for me.
Now, underneath those fancy boots on your right foot, actually, you played through a stress fracture, never missed a practice or a game your junior year at Michigan, but still a lot of teams were concerned about that. Are you able to look them in the eye and say that is no issue, I'm 100% healthy? Because that's an obvious concern for a receiver, that kind of an injury.
Yeah, oh yeah. It was a concern for some of the teams, and I took care of that. You know, I rested and then came back. The stress fracture was clear. The doctor said it was clear. I went to the retest on April the 6th, so I thought that the team thought that it was not a problem for me right now. But it's something that I play with, and it's something that I'm going to continue to play with, but it's not a problem for me.
Wish you the best, David Terrell, a Michigan man, headed to the Bears.
Go Blue.
All right, Chris and David, congratulations. The Bears won wide receiver at 93 in the first round with Curtis Conway. They've done it here 8 years later with David Terrell. Is this the first of a run of wide receivers, or at least right up top? Seattle picks, then Green Bay picks. You know that they're each eyeing this group of wide receivers who you would think Corn Robinson's at the top of the list, but there are many others. We'll catch it all when we return to Damian Tomlinson, the top running back. And San Francisco, in a trade up 2 spots, took Andre Carter, son of great nose tackle Reuben Carter, as defensive end. And now the Green Bay Packers are on the clock. They wanted receiver, they wanted defensive tackle, but you know what? The big guys for that who are worth those selections at 10 may be gone. Let's go up to Mike Tirico and the guys to bat it around. Michael, just a couple of guesses here with Seattle.
Just a few. Sure, Chris. While we have a second, let's go back to the top of the draft. Michael Vick selected by Atlanta. Scott Walker is at the Falcons headquarters. We'll bring Scott in now. Any conversation of how they're going to use Michael Vick in 2001, Scott?
Yes, they're starting to talk about that here, Mike, as Vick. It was interesting. 2 weeks ago, he had a meeting here in Atlanta with the Atlanta coaching staff well before the Falcons envisioned that he could become an Atlanta Falcon. In that meeting, Vick was asked by the coaches to imagine some of the things that he might be able to do on the field. And it's that kind of imagination the Falcon coaching staff will take into this season. They do intend on getting him on the field somehow, trying to get him on the perimeter with the football, giving him the ability to either run or pass to try to make plays. That will not include the traditional slash role you saw with Cordell Stewart. He will not play a receiver role at this point. As for being the starting quarterback, they said it's up to Michael Vick as to when he will mature into that role.
Okay, Scott, Michael Vick with the football in his hands is a special player no matter when it happens. We'll talk more about him as the weekend goes on. I want to go down to the number 3 pick with Cleveland taking Gerard Warren from Florida. Our Sal Palantonio's in Tampa covering the Bucs. But Sal, you had a chance to speak to the new Cleveland Brown on the telephone.
Yeah, Gerard Warren is up the road in Gainesville, where he went to school at the University of Florida. He is celebrating being the 3rd pick with his family. I had a chance to talk to him on the phone, Mike, and he said he had a long conversation with new Browns head coach Butch Davis, who talked to him about the up-tempo, aggressive style of defense that Davis made famous, of course, at the University of Miami. That's exactly what Warren wanted to hear. That's how he played at the University of Florida. By the way, he's in Gainesville because he wanted to celebrate with his family, and when he told the NFL he wanted to bring 200 people up to New York, they said, we don't think so.
We've seen big families, but that stage isn't quite that big. Interesting, Warren in the Florida defense was beaten up by Miami's offense in their bowl game. Let's go back to Chris Berman now in New York.
All right, Mike, gang, thank you very much. The Green Bay Packers on the clock. This is the trade that they got, or this is a spot that they moved into when they traded Matt Hasselbeck in the offseason, the backup quarterback to Brett Favre, one of many backup quarterbacks that the Packers have had, like Mark Brunell, like Ty Detmer, like Hasselbeck, like Aaron Brooks, who's going to New Orleans. Well, you're not going to play with Brett Favre, but they're pretty good guys moving along. And now here are the Packers, and maybe a surprise?
Maybe a pass rusher. Maybe someone like a Jamal Reynolds. Who knows?
Just like that?
With the 10th choice in the 2001 draft, the Green Bay Packers select Jamal Reynolds, defensive end from Florida State.
Well, even though, and Mort, you know this, you talked about it, we talked about it, Ron Wolf has said in this going into his last draft, I wish at some point I'd gotten Brett Favre a big-time receiver. Look, they all of a sudden cannot move on the defensive line. Those days that they got in a Super Bowl with a big line are gone, even though a slim Gilbert Brown has returned to the Packers.
He's got on the rush passer. The Packers are in a division that you've got to get to the quarterback. The Dante Culpepper, we know the Bears throw the football, so I think that's a lot behind it.
More talking about getting after the quarterback. You go back to '99. He sacked Joe Hamilton twice, had 3 tackles for loss against Miami. And guess what? He sacked Michael Vick 3 times in that championship game. Now, this past season, 10 sacks the first 5 games. Then he had that slight knee sprain. Only had 2 sacks the rest of the way. One thing Jamal Reynolds can do, when he's 100%, he is a pure outside pass rusher. Runs in the 4.55 to 4.6 range. His weight's up to 268. And I'm impressed. When I see a guy sacking Joe Hamilton, as elusive as Joe is, and Michael Vick, who's the best athlete ever to play the position, guys, that's a kid who can get after the quarterback. Question is holding up against the run at the National Football League level.
Well, they have Bonnie Holiday with a huge first year, but it's not quite the same. They definitely need help up there. And he sacked Joe Hamilton, Frank, and Reynolds. That's pretty good. Ron Wolf, hanging him up, or he says he will. Well, he's certainly leaving Green Bay in June. Always on the move. Made the move here, which was the Hasselbeck trade, but a lot of the moves pay off the following way. Bonnie Holiday a few years ago, and maybe having some other big guys on the line, like Reynolds, will get Holiday back to the form that we saw his rookie year.
You know what it reminds me of, guys? Tony Brackens, coming out of Texas. You know, not the ideal size, but remember, Reynolds has his weight up to about 268. So this is a guy that I think, when you look at what Brackens has done, I see that same pass rush ability in Jamal Reynolds.
And again, I think when you look at it, Green Bay's got to feel like our receivers need some help, but it's an area we haven't seen. We've seen Robinson go. We've seen Terrell go. So that's the only 2 receivers. There are a lot of receivers left.
There's one star receiver. I'm telling you, there's actually a couple guys who go
solid guys that they might get a shot at later on. They do some guys that, Ferguson, guys that, could be there for them to help them out.
1 or 2 could be special. I think Rod Gardner from Clemson could be special in the NFL. And Santana Moss, he weren't 5'9.5" guys. Would have been talking about him in the top 5 to 10.
You know what? Let me jump in for a minute. Let's talk quickly before we move on to the next pick, which is Carolina, and then the first of all, the St. Louis ones, the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers with Brett Favre, who is re-signed, 10 years, he's not going to play 10 years, although maybe he could, he wants to, for $100 million. The money doesn't matter. Brett Favre is, you could argue this, he is still the most exciting player in professional football. They had an upturn at the end of last year. No, it wasn't the playoffs, but in year 1 under Mike Sherman, they were 9-7. You started to see some things that we saw from the Packers that got to 2 straight Super Bowls. Can they make another run in this Mike Sherman era and the players that Wolf gets with Favre at quarterback? Or they have too many needs,
I think they are very close. I think this is one of the teams. Right now, I look at St. Louis. I think St. Louis is going to make another run. But I think the Packers, look at the teams that were around 500. That's the trend in this league. The next year, you take a big jump up. I think the Packers still can make. The only thing I question here, Mike Sherman barely getting his feet wet here as a coach, all of a sudden has all these expansive responsibilities as general manager, and I don't know if that's a good thing.
But also, you've got Amon Green did a terrific job coming in.
Yes,
Dorsey Levens comes back healthy, you hope.
Yes.
The receivers have to be addressed, but as long as Brett Favre is a Green Bay Packer, I'm going to say that they are a viable threat to be able to get into the playoffs, and we all know anything can happen there.
And if you're in the playoffs, if you get there and you have Brett Favre, anything
You've
is
got a
possible.
chance.
We know that, especially a home game maybe on the frozen tundra. You know, Reynolds might have raised some eyebrows, but guys who have watched him all year are our college folk, like Kirk Herbstreit, who's with our Chris Fowler, in a position you guys are, I think, accustomed to. Welcome back. You rejoined at the hip, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, we did watch Jamal Reynolds a lot because we saw the Seminoles about every other game on College Game Day. As Mel mentioned, he did have some very big games, sacking some very mobile quarterbacks, but he's a Florida State defensive lineman, and that's been a big but lately.
Well, I think Florida State defensive linemen, as you know, especially the defensive ends, their primary goal is to get to the outside and just rush the quarterback. Think about it over the last 2 or 3 years. You have Andre Wadsworth, who got drafted in the first round, Peter Boulware, who went and became an outside linebacker, Renard Wilson. The thing about these guys at the next level, they don't have the success at the next level up to this point that you see at college. So I think the big question with Jamal will be, can he get in there at the next level and showcase his abilities and be able to pressure the quarterback, also being responsible for being able to come down on run support as well. Up to this point, they have not been able to do that.
There was a guy in college who handled Reynolds pretty well. That's Kenyatta Walker, the offensive tackle of Florida. He's the only guy waiting back there in the green room. He said, wait a minute, I dominated Reynolds. I'm still sitting back here. He's already been picked. So he's perhaps up very soon, guys.
All right, guys, thank you very much. And we go with our Tenacton video conferencing up to Green Bay. And we just heard from Bill Walsh a short while ago. Well, here's another man who is decorated in his uniform, I would say, and that's Ron Wolf running his final draft with the Green Bay Packers. He took over there in the early 90s and made them a Super Bowl champ and a 2-time Super Bowl team. Ron, we welcome you again on draft day. Tell us why Reynolds really piqued your interest.
First of all, Chris, his ability to rush the passer. He's a great backside player. That's what we really like. We play a defense now, you know, run and chase, and he's exceptional in that area.
Are you, Ron, I mean, you can't tip your hand here, but do you want to find receiver or two more offensive weapons pretty high up? Remember a few years ago I said, hey, we're going to get defensive backs till we get it right, and you really rolled the board there. Is that something you look at next?
We're going to get into that area. It's something we have to do. We have to address that area, no question about that. We had a little debate in the room right at our pick, but when Corden Robinson went, it solidified Reynolds, and we're delighted with that selection.
I was going to ask Bill this, but I could ask you as well. In this day and age, and where football has gone, I don't know if you can define the word dynasty, but if you were, or the Packers, for example, could get into the Super Bowl the next couple of years, which would be 3 in, what, a 6-year span, is that about as good as you can get these days with these rules? I don't mean to be that you're, you know, the messenger of doom here, but is that the new standard, that sort of standard?
You know, Chris, I don't really...
With the 11th choice in the 2001 draft, the Carolina Panthers select Dan Morgan, linebacker from the University of Miami.
And you know what? They were holding, we haven't had a chance to discuss Carolina and George. They were holding their breath. I mean, they're thrilled that he fell here, I would think.
There's some good football players.
Yes.
Mel does it. The Kenyatta Walkers, the Morgans, the Hutchinsons, the Anthony Clements. And I think they were... Go ahead, Mel, take this. Tell them about this guy.
I'll tell you what, Chris, you look at Dan Morgan in the eyes of a middle linebacker. What you have to remember is he played 3 years at outside linebacker. He was 212 pounds back as a freshman, then moved up 225, then to about 238. Now he's 250, and Dan Morgan says he's faster than he's ever been. Here's that big interception at the goal line. You talk about the eyes and the vision. You see it here in number 44, reading the quarterback, good hands for the INC, and a kid who is a real warrior. And I think with the Carolina Panthers, Lester Pound came in as a late-round pick, did a heck of a job for it in the middle. And you can't forget the fact that Morgan was an outstanding outside linebacker before he moved to middle at a necessity when Nate Webster moved on to the NFL.
And he runs in a style like Zach Thomas in Miami. Everybody talks about, well, he's a little stiff in the hips. You know, I'm not sure about that. Zach Thomas, when you look at him run, he's like a little, no offense, Zach, like a little penguin moving back and forth. You see the same type of movements in Dan Morgan, but yet he goes sideline to sideline with a lot of these.
He's 6'2", 250 guy.
Spielman-type heart. I mean, isn't this a Chris Spielman? I mean, this is a football player here, right?
No question.
I mean, you can play him. You can play him anywhere. I mean, let's bring in Sal Paolantonio, who's in Tampa. But Sal, you have some insight on how Carolina, and they were holding their breath, no question about it. They're elated right now. George Seifert, a defensive guy. Let's not forget. Sal?
He is a defensive guy, and of course, to get the Bednarik Award winner, you're very, very happy. But as Mel mentioned, Dan Morgan played outside linebacker for his first 3 years in college. And don't forget, the Panthers cut Lee Will, formerly of the 49ers, in a salary cap move. And what I'm hearing in Carolina is that Dan Morgan will play outside linebacker, Chris, not the inside Mike position.
Well, that's interesting, Sal, because inside Mike is somewhere good. Can he play either place, guys?
He can do it. He proved it for 3 years. And as I said, when I talked to Dan Morgan, he said, hey, I was 212, then I was 230, now I'm 250. And he claims that he would like to see maybe 255. He's 6'2", and he's a great athlete with tremendous speed. And, Joe, he says he's faster than he's ever been. He's handled that outside linebacker spot for 3 years. He's experienced.
I think people in general, when you look at a 4-3 style of defense, everybody says there's one inside linebacker, two outside linebackers. That's really not the way it is. One of those outside linebackers so often winds up playing inside the end, and so you really wind up with two inside linebackers, one outside linebacker to be able to roam. So I think he can fit into that system very well.
And by the Panthers addressing their offensive line this offseason, they hire Paul Boudreau, and then they go ahead and sign 3 free agents, Jeff Mitchell, Stussy, and what you
Kevin
have,
Donnelly.
Yeah, and Kevin Donnelly. It allows them to pass on Kenyatta Walker. I don't know if that's a good thing, and take a Dan Morgan, but that's why they were able to pass on a guy like Kenyatta Walker.
Without really elaborating on it, this is the type of football player Carolina needs right now in many ways. I think everybody will agree with that. For a franchise that was in the title game not so long ago, but had misfortune and worse than that happened to it. This is a good pick by Carolina. We will be back with St. Louis. Great years. Someone from Miami of Florida has gone in the first round. That's the longest streak. But now comes Christmas continued for the St. Louis Rams, the first of 3 number 1s, and they wasted no time.
With the 12th pick in the 2001 draft, the St. Louis Rams select Damian Lewis, defensive tackle from the University of Miami.
This is always interesting in a draft when a major league contender and only 1 year removed Super Bowl champion can make an impact with picks or trades or both, like the St. Louis Rams are hoping to right here. And so Damian Lewis, well, this just in, Joe. Defense, defense, defense.
Total philosophical change. They're changing their entire defensive philosophy. Mike Marsh was not happy with the play that he got. He wasn't happy with the effort. He told me this week, he said, 2 things I'm going to change defensively. We're going to change the attitude of this football team, and we're going to add speed. You know how much he loves speed, Mort. He loves on the offensive side of the ball. That's why they went for Trung candidate last year. Now you can see it again on the defensive side.
And he fits this Lovie Smith scheme. They changed the attitude when they hired these coaches. Lovie Smith a little bit more low-key, but Bill Kolar, the defensive line coach, fireball. Ron Meek, secondary coach, fireball. Even the special teams coach, Bobby April, a fireball. So he's got change in personality, that coaching staff. But I also, it's going to be a young, 8 new starters on this defense is what Mike Marsh expects to have. That's why Aeneas Williams was so important. It's going to be a young defense. He wanted a veteran guy to become a leader, and that's where Aeneas Williams fits with what they're going to do today.
Well, they end up with, they got Aeneas Williams for essentially a 4 and a 6. They traded Trent Green to St. Louis, and that, of course, enabled them to get this number 1 pick right here. They traded him to Kansas City, and they traded last month Kevin Carter, a former very high number 1 pick at defensive end to Tennessee, for their pick at 29. And now, by the way, in case you were wondering if Miami would have first-round pick 7 straight years, we did it 2 in a row. We went from Dan Morgan to Damian Lewis, and I think, Mort, you hit it right. And Mel, let's look at him. The quick scheme of the Tampa Bay style that Lovie Smith is going to play, and Damian Lewis certainly has that, doesn't he?
He's a great athlete. He's going to drop back into coverage at zone blitz package. He averaged 14 points, 11 rebounds as a basketball player in high school. And you go back to his redshirt freshman season, led all Miami defensive linemen with 72 tackles. Very instinctive, very quick. Not a 3 technique. It's one of those penetrating defensive tackles. And you look at this past season, got broken foot.
early on in that loss to Washington. Had it not been for that injury, which hampered him most of the year, Damian Lewis would have been in the top 5 to 10. But talked about how important it is to get value. Forget about the senior year. Go back to those other seasons, and Damian Lewis was one of the best in the business.
You know, just a quick point there, attitude. We talk about the change in attitude. Here's a kid that plays with an injury. Right. I mean, those are the kind of people that you want on your football team. Guys that don't look for an excuse to leave, but guys that want to stay and play.
I don't think you can ever go wrong with Miami defensive linemen. Never can go wrong with the University of Miami defensive linemen.
Let me tell you, I mean, you don't need to be Dick Vermeil or anybody to figure out that, my God, we scored 540 points last year. Did the St. Louis Rams, as Mike Martz certainly was quick to see. But when you give up 471, no wonder you lose in the opening round of the playoffs. Here is step one, Andrea Kramer, of what we expect to be, at least up front, a defensive day. It already has been in St. Louis.
Absolutely, Chris. Now, in the war room, there was basically no debate, and that's one reason why they made the pick for Damian Lewis so quickly. However, 2 picks earlier, there was a huge sigh of relief when Green Bay selected Jamal Reynolds. That's because the Rams had 3 guys rated right there: Dan Morgan, Jamal Reynolds, Damian Lewis. They had a feeling that Carolina would go for Morgan, so when Jamal went and they knew that they could still get their guy Damian Lewis, they were very, very relieved. They also looked back at when San Francisco took Andre Carter and thought there could be a run of defensive linemen. So definitely got their man in Damian Lewis, the Rams did.
Natural.
Well, we will have plenty, Andrea, to talk about all day long, as the Rams are scheduled to make 3 first-round picks. Today they got Aeneas Winston. You talk about a team working quickly. How about Jacksonville? O-line, Hutchinson, is that it?
They can help themselves here.
With the 13th choice in the 2001 draft, Jacksonville Jaguars select Marcus Stroud, defensive tackle from Georgia.
Well, that was, I'll be honest with you, that was the word this morning, that Tom Coughlin, so impressed by what the Baltimore Ravens have done with the big defensive tackles, the Saraguses, the Sam Adams, that he really felt that was the way to go. And I mean, when I heard Stroud this morning, I said, okay, if some other guys aren't there, but Kenyatta Walker, when you've lost Leon Searcy and you've got a great offensive lineman like Walker, I'm surprised.
How about Steve Hutchinson? You know, guard tackle out of Michigan. You got a Hutchinson and Walker sitting there. My opportunity here is to say, hey, we stole one of the best players in this draft. Marcus Stroud is a guy I don't think plays to the level every week of his talent. Well, to me, he is not a Sam Adams type. He is a guy that has to be developed. I think this is a stretch. I think it's to a point where in this draft where you could have got a much better player in Walker or Hutchinson than Marcus Stroud.
6'6", 320 from Georgia. One of those tackles from Georgia, the 2 of them. Obviously very strong, but you think this is high? I mean,
I don't say high, Chris, because he would have figured to go right in this general area, but a stretch when you say Hutchinson and Walker, who I thought were 2 of the elite players, more, I had them graded out and said nobody in this draft had a higher grade than Walker and Hutchinson. They were the same as those 7 to 12 we mentioned. Marcus Stroud was not in that group.
No, but despite all the losses Jacksonville suffered in free agency, I think that Tom Coughlin still says, I still got the Brunells, Freddie Taylors, the receivers. Our offensive line improved last year. We were 7th in offense.
You lost Fordham and you lost Searcy, Mort, and you got a quarterback in Brunell. Has to be able to stay healthy. That's a question with that knee.
I'm surprised they passed on one of those 2 offensive lines.
I'm shocked. I mean, that is a shocking first-round pick as far as I'm concerned.
Well, they were snake bit a couple of years ago when all those defensive players got hurt, and they kind of fell from where they were, and they... Well, oh, God, yes. Buffalo has some intriguing choices they didn't think they would have. We'll go to the cab driver next.
Nebraska sure has changed since my days scouting the frontier. Well, back then, all we had to guide us were a few landmarks, the stars, and maybe a compass. But now, with the Nebraska Traveler as your guide, discovering Nebraska is a whole lot easier.
Whether your interests include genuine frontier history, summer festivals, shopping, outdoor fun, golf courses, a world-class zoo, or arts and culture, the Nebraska Traveler is the guide for planning your Nebraska vacation. The Nebraska Traveler also includes a comprehensive listing of scenic byways, hotels, bed and breakfasts, guest ranches, cabins, and campgrounds. Wherever your vacation takes you, take the Nebraska Traveler along. If you're going places in Nebraska, call for your free copy of the Nebraska Traveler. It's your guide to genuine Nebraska, America's frontier.
You can do it. You can do it. Go, Jorge. Go, go, go. You can do it. Yeah!
Thanks, Jorge.
I love you so much.
I'm Jason Williams, and this is ESPN the Magazine's brand new mascot, Maggie the Magazine. I guess she's supposed to represent how great the magazine is, but mostly she just gives people the creeps.
Welcome back to the NFL Draft 2001. SportsCenter in-game is SportsCenter in-draft. So we'll get started with some of the top headlines of the draft so far. Of course, the Falcons move up in a deal with the Chargers, and they take Michael Vick with the #1 pick. The Chargers got first, third, next year second, and receiver Tim Dwight. Upsides of Vick, big arm, great running ability. Downsides, just 2 years of college football. One of today's big moves, the Rams agreed to a 3-year deal with Cardinals cornerback Aeneas Williams. St. Louis sends the Cards a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. The Rams hanging on to all 3 first-round picks. They took Miami defensive tackle Damian Lewis with their first pick. The NFL looking forward to next season. The NBA's 2nd season began today. The Sixers swept the Pacers this season. The Pacers knocked the Sixers out of the playoffs the last 2 years. Right now, the Sixers beating up the Pacers 57-40 in the 3rd quarter. Allen Iverson just 8 points so far in this game. And NBA notes, Jim O'Brien, who took over for Rick Pitino in Boston, is close to signing a 3-year deal with the Celtics. And from the NHL, Sharks right wing Teemu Selanne told the San Francisco Chronicle he's been playing with a broken right thumb since Game 1, which explains why he's had trouble handling the puck. St. Louis leads the series 3-2. They can wrap it up with Game 6 this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And in baseball, the Yankees are leading Boston 2-1 in the 3rd. Paul O'Neill with a 2-run shot. Detroit and Cleveland, this one was delayed by about 40 minutes because of rain. In the National League, the Reds leading, all tied up with the Mets now, 2-2. Sean Casey with a solo shot. Cubs and Pirates, no score in this one. And that's going to wrap up SportsCenter in-game for now. We'll see you again at the top of the hour. And right now, let's go back to Chris Berman in New York. Chris?
All right, Susie, thank you very much. We are back in New York. We're about 2 hours in, and we had trades on Friday, and we've got some wheeling and dealing on Saturday. The Buffalo Bills, and there are more players who could be rated very high, like Kenyatta Walker, like Steve Hutchinson, like an intriguing player like Santana Moss. There are some names at certain positions. We haven't had one corner go yet. Remember that. They're all sitting right here. So if you're happy with a bunch of names, as apparently the Buffalo Bills are, you send the cab driver back out to pick up another fare at the airport, and you make a trade with Tampa Bay, which the Bills have just done. Tampa moves up 7 spots to number 14. So the Bills move down 7 spots to 21. They pick up a 2nd-round pick as well. And look, a long time ago, Tampa Bay had a left tackle who just retired named Paul Gruber, who slid. Do you see a similarity here for what Tampa might want?
I'll tell you, it looks great. I think you have to say, hey, Jacksonville did Tampa Bay a favor. They select Marcus Stroud when you had Hutchinson and you had a kid like Kenyatta Walker. I think is an elite talent. I mean, this is a kid that played right tackle, that played left tackle in high school and in fall practice this past season. Look at the best available. Walker, an outstanding prospect. Hutchinson, I think, is one of the safest picks in round 1. Rod Gardner, I compare his natural pass receiving skills to Chris Carter. You know I'm loyal to Deuce. Deuce had a tough year with the injury, and I think he is going to be a heck of a back who proves the doubters wrong. Jeff Backus started 49 straight games at left tackle for Michigan, and you look at the corner still on the board. They figure to go in the mid to latter portion of round 1.
Rich McKay, the general manager of the Bucs, told me last night that they would not move up unless somebody special was there, and it's got to be Walker.
He is special, I'll tell you that.
Throw Hutchinson back. I mean, they weren't sure any of those names would be there. They're all there.
They have a Super Bowl team missing a part.
Richie McKay, an underrated man at working the draft. I'll talk about that in a minute. He's not mentioned with draft day deals very much. He should be. Here may be another one.
With the 14th pick in the 2001 draft, acquired by trade from Buffalo, Tampa Bay is selecting Kenyatta Walker, tackle from the University of Florida.
Well, they got all those Pro Bowl guys, you know, Christie at center and the moves that they made, but they need a homegrown, and when a homegrown tackle who's a local product. He's a Gator going there. I mean, that was a position. They get McDaniel and Christie, but tackle is what they need. Is it Gruber-esque? Well, if he plays as well as Paul Gruber, my God, do they have to steal.
He is an immediate hole filler more at left tackle for a team that thinks they can move on to the Super Bowl.
And he's a guy, remember, is going to have to protect Brad Johnson, who needs protection for them to get done what they want.
We look at him at right tackle here, and you see the balance. I mean, he was beaten, it looked like initially, but he kept his feet, kept his balance, and he did the job. Here again, protecting the quarterback, very experienced in that area, in that Florida-style offense. Now, when you look at moving the left tackle, sure, he didn't play that position in Florida. He practiced there in the fall when Mike Pearson was hurt. He played there his entire career at the prep level in Mississippi, where he earned All-American honors. And you look at 6'4.5", about 315, 31.5 vertical, and here he is right there against Warren. You see the ability in pass protection. That's the key, Mort. Like you said, protecting the blind side for Brad Johnson.
Yeah, but you talk about protecting and protecting and protecting. You guys, we're talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, please. I think one of the problems that they have run into over the last couple of years is trying to change and figure out who they are on offense. They wanted Sean King a couple of years ago, really felt comfortable. That didn't work out. They go get a Brad Johnson. Now, Brad Johnson is in a situation where I don't know whether it's him coming in that's going to help them or just having Clyde Christensen decide on what they want to do on offense. To me, this is a football team that has to go back and establish the run, build in a play-action game, let Keyshawn get his catches as they go, and then develop that style of offense. Once you do that, let the defense go out and do their things, then you're going to be the Tampa Bay Bucs that will compete for a title.
I just find it intriguing, with all due respect to the New York Football Giants, who had a wonderful season and getting to the Super Bowl, and all due respect to the Vikings, who many thought, you know, got the championship game and go, the NFC favorites, there is no question, are St. Louis and Tampa Bay. There is no question in my mind. I think you agree with me. And for teams like this, at least at this stage of the draft, to be making moves that will affect how they play immediately for all 16 games, I, as a football fan, find fascinating. It's great. They're going to meet again on Monday night in St. Louis in late November. That was the game of the year last year on Monday night. Sal Paolantonio, wheeling and dealing down in Tampa Bay. That's why you're there. You on the boat?
Not yet, but we will be probably during the season, Chris. Don't forget, this is a team that gave up 26 sacks in the second half of the season after only giving up 12 in the first half of the season. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to increase their pass protection and consistency on the passing offense for Brad Johnson. They didn't want to bring in a big home run hitter who would compete with Keyshawn Johnson. One of the things, as a matter of fact, Joe Theismann mentioned, just get consistency on offense, a play-action game, get the ball to Keyshawn Johnson earlier in the first quarter, get his excitement and energy going, and that's the way to do it, is to get some pass protection for Brad Johnson. And by the way, they really, really liked Steve Hutchinson, and it came down to one of those two players, Chris.
All right, Sal, thank you very much. I mean, they... You know, Richie McKay's first draft was the year before Tony Dungy was the head coach. It was in 1995. That was the year that Warren Sapp slid. He made a move to get Sapp lower value. I mean, he was still in the upper half of the first round when everybody was questioning, okay? And then by moving down, he got some extra twos to move back up at the bottom of the first round, and he picked Derek Brooks. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find two draft picks in the first round, this is 95, equivalent of Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks, two of the premier defensive players, and he's hoping that lightning strikes again 6 years later. Let's, Kenyatta Walker, Chris Fowler may have gone a little bit farther down than he thought, but my goodness, it's a commute from Gainesville to Tampa. He's got to like that.
Dang, he got scared for a minute.
He was scared, Chris. I'll tell you what, in a city of anxious people, this guy right here was the most anxious of all until about 3 minutes ago. You were worried about being the last guy left in that green room. You were very anxious about this whole process over which you have almost no control. You have to be extremely relieved right now.
Hey, I can breathe again, honestly. I was a little anxious. You know, I'm Tampa Bay, that's perfect. You know, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to play. I'm ready to show them, for the people who didn't pick me, why they should have.
Is that a little fuel in the tank now? There were some teams that passed on you. You slid down further than a lot of folks had you rated. You sat back there and sweated until nobody else was left in that room. I know it's been the last hour. It's been very tough on you.
Well, you know, when coming up here, you knew that, you know, this could happen, you know, and I kind of knew that, and I took that chance. But, you know, everything worked out fine for me, and I'm happy. I'm very excited to be going to Tampa Bay, you know, and I'm ready to play.
Your mom was a school teacher for 31 years, a very tough intimidator. You told me yesterday she wasn't aware even what position you played on the football field until very recently, and actually fell asleep, took naps at Florida Gators games at Florida Field, which is the loudest place in the world.
You know, I love my mom, and I know she's excited. I know she was very nervous back there. She was worse than me, but, you know, now it's over, and, you know, I give thanks to everybody who, you know, has got me here, and I'm very blessed right now, you know.
Wish you the best, Kenyatta. Chris, this is really a side of this draft for the college players who feel totally in control and comfortable on the football field, but very out of control, very uncomfortable, waiting to see what team they're going to be selected by.
Yeah, it is never easy. We remember Thurman Thomas in '88, but Kenyatta Walker thought that they would be going to the Bengals. Now he goes to Tampa Bay.
Brought his people in, Jimmy Ray and Kurt. They've come in now and become a part of that franchise.
But we already have a Deion Sanders. I mean, I don't think
Deion's done.
Marty...
Deion is done.
You just mentioned Deion.
I know, but they brought him in, but he's done.
If he's not there at the start of training camp, I don't see Marty Schottenheimer having anything to do with him.
Darrell Green should start at corner for them.
You know what we're talking about, Marty? He comes with an impressive resume. Okay, not a Super Bowl, but you try to put up the job he did in Cleveland, where they were perennial contenders. My God, could they knock on the door anymore? And what he did in Kansas City, you look at his overall 150 and 96. I mean, this is a man that understands how to win. This is a man that understands veteran players. And their best shot in his 4-year contract is right now. Right now with this year. Would you agree? I absolutely agree. And it all depends, again, on Jeff George. What do they want to do offensively? How well will their wide receivers perform? James Thrash is gone. Albert Connell is gone. They've lost some speed. The pick I would love here, and it probably won't, Santana Moss. They need somebody to be. I know they're not. I know they're not. I know they're not. But I'm just saying, to me, you lose your kick returner. You need some speed, some quickness, and I don't buy into the big receiver theory. When I'm a quarterback and I'm throwing the football, I'm throwing through holes in the defense. Whether a guy is 6'3" or 5'10", doesn't matter to me.
Marty inherited a team full of holes. Guys, look, hey, they don't have guards. They need receivers. The quarterback thing is shaky. He only has 4 draft picks. He might even trade to get more draft picks.
Who better knows that than a man that helped them, that ran their drafts the last couple of years after running San Francisco's before that, Vinny Serrato, who along with Billy Devaney, who was with the Chargers for so many years as personnel directors, are helping us out in all of our ways here at ESPN. And so Vinny, my cousin Vinny, is down there with Chris Fowler, and I think he's got some insights, Chris.
I think so. We made our trade with our team. Marty Schottenheimer goes to Washington. Vinny comes here. You've heard the debate a little bit about what the Skins should do with this pick. What would you do with it?
Well, I think it definitely has to be a wide receiver. Westbrook coming back off an injury. Albert Cannell's gone. They just re-signed Kevin Lockett, or they re-signed Kevin Lockett, who really started 6 games. I think Rod Gardner's a perfect fit in the NFC East. Big, strong, physical receiver. Rod Gardner's my choice, and I know that's Mel's choice also.
He's the guy from Clemson. There are a number of receivers that a lot of teams have rated very differently, but there may not be a consensus, shall we say, in Washington between the owner and everybody on which receiver fits in.
I think if it was up to you, I think Dan Snyder likes Santana Moss. All season long he was saying, check out Santana Moss, check out Santana Moss. But, Chris, they could also look at corner with Deion Sanders. He's leading the IHL, or the International League in hitting at 422, and Darrell Green's 41. So they could go Nate Clements at corner also.
They've got this pick. You say receiver. What do the Redskins have to do in this day to shore up real quick besides that receiver?
Well, I think that they need an offensive right guard. They'll play Mookie Moore at left guard. And the defense has come back. They were 4th in defense. They just have to stay healthy. Corey Raymer's back healthy, and get Jeff George to do what they want him to do, and they've got a chance to be okay on offense.
You get, Vinny, you got that draft day look in your eyes. You're teed up, Chris.
You know, and I know that draft day look with me. Although our draft day look after a while is a glaze. Well, a man that was a #1 pick in 1969 by the San Francisco 49ers. Now, among the officers in the NFL, Gene Washington will handle now the podium. So a #1 pick, announcing a #1 pick. And fittingly, it's...
With the 15th selection of the 2001 draft, the Washington Redskins select wide receiver Rod Gardner. From Clemson.
For Gene Washington, it's a receiver is the first pick that he announced.
You know what's interesting here is Vinny Serrato just mentioned that the owner, Daniel Snyder, wanted Santana Moss, was dying to have Santana Moss. The fact that it is Gardner tells you who is running the show in Washington, and it isn't George Bush.
No, well, running the big picture. Let's take the big picture. He's got that one. But
Well, here's the little picture. Here's Gardner, who, you heard Vinny say it, and Mel, 6'2", 219, 2,400 yards in receiving at a school that has receivers in Clemson, 159 catches, second best in the school's history.
Chris, he is the best and the highest-rated receiver coming into this program since Jerry Butler. And you talk about Jerry Butler, 5th overall pick of the Buffalo Bills way back in 1979. You see him lay out to pull in that reception. Not a lot of separation with Rod Gardner. The guy is very physical as a receiver, 6'2 1/4", 217 pounds. Look at the body control, the hand-eye coordination. He attacks the ball, and certainly he'll get off the jam. There's pressure quarterbacks in the NFC East. And I think when you look at Rod Gardner, a guy that will come right in and have a major impact. I was obviously a big fan of Rod Gardner. I gave him the equal in terms of grade to any other player in the draft. So I am a huge Rod Gardner fan.
All right, bigger question. They're the deep receiver. There's no question about that. Bigger question. How long, if things don't go well out of the gates, how long does the owner do what he says with Marty and leave everything alone?
I think he does. I don't think he gets himself involved as actively as he has in the past. I believe this is Marty's show to run. Now, that's a credit to Daniel Snyder. Like any young guy who takes over anything or comes into our league, there's a learning process.
Yes.
Daniel Snyder is learning how to be an owner. I believe the hiring of Marty is a step in that process, and a good step. I think Daniel said, look, I've hired a good person. I'm going to let him do the job. I'm going to be the fan. I'm going to get excited. If we lose, I'm going to be mad. But it's Marty's football team to run.
And I think Marty made it clear with Snyder that, hey, one time you come in here and you want to voice yourself, that's fine. Second time, you be paying me off my $10 million and I'll be walking.
Well, and I think that Daniel Snyder, we said this on primetime emphatically during the season. He didn't become a successful businessman by not learning. And if he's done, as you said, he has a passion and he's learned, we think, and if he has, then that can only benefit the Washington Redskins. Now, we say all that. Vinny Serrato, you were inside the closed doors yet. Do you think that this will be a quiet period, even if things don't go well for Marty?
Well, I think so. I think he's given total control to Marty, and I think he's saying, Marty, you got experience. You've done it before. Take the reins and run with it, and I'm going to stay in the background and let you do your thing.
Well, we all hope. Hey, look, Marty didn't take the job hoping that was going to be the case right out of the gate. Let's go down to Sal Paolantonio in Tampa for some thoughts on why the Skins with Gardner versus another receiver. Sal?
Well, Chris, look at this from another perspective. If you remember at the NFL owners' meetings, Marty Schottenheimer was asked, who is the best team, which is the best team in the NFC East? And he replied, the Philadelphia Eagles. They have Donovan McNabb. All they need is a wide receiver, a big play wide receiver. And the guy that the Eagles coveted was Rod Gardner. Tom Modrak, the director of football operations in Philadelphia, loved Gardner. And that was the guy they were targeting. If they were going to go up to get any wide receiver, it would have been Gardner. So this is a way for Schottenheimer to get his guy and take away a division rival's potential big playmaker, Chris.
That's very interesting that you say that, Sal. And then I think we have a gentleman that works with us that's played a little quarterback in Philly that understands that exactly Gardner would have been a guy that Philly would have gone up to get. And Ron Jaworski, you like this pick for Schottenheimer, don't you?
Absolutely. And, you know, one thing, if you watch those tapes on Rod Gardner, you see a guy that can block. And if you know you're going to play for Marty Schottenheimer's offense, they're going to run the football and the wide receivers have to block. But I was also very fortunate in my career to play with a wide receiver, Harold Carmichael, and height does make a difference. He can go up and catch the football. And what I love about Rod Gardner, he can get off the bump and run to the jam at the line of scrimmage, and he can separate. When you look at this tape here, you'll see a guy that will go up and take the football away. You got to love this kind of stuff. The quarterback will see the bump and run coverage. Hey, you get this coverage with a big, quick, strong wide receiver, audible to the fade. Good stick to the inside. Just freeze that corner for 1 split second. Now, club him, beat him, get him off you, and run up the field, not to the sideline. A lot of NFL receivers run to the sideline, give the quarterback nowhere to throw the football. You'll see the throw here out in the box. Gives the quarterback room. You see the room to the sideline. Makes it an easier throw for the quarterback. But you saw the separation at the line of scrimmage. You saw the strength when he came off the line and clubbed the guy to get him away. And then you saw the really smart, heady play of giving room for the quarterback to drop the ball in the box, Boomer. I like this pick by Marty.
Well, we all agree, Jaws, that the Redskins made an intelligent pick. Remember, one of those Skins The receivers went up to Philadelphia, not of this regard, but at James Thrash. Washington opens at 1-15 San Diego with Doug Flutie. Washington will be a favorite on the road. First Swamp pick of the season. Bolts as a dog at home. Daniel Snyder, give me the phone, Marty. I don't know. I hope not. I hope not. I'm giving you a possible scenario in September to file away. When we return, the Steelers, son of Marty, Bill Cowher, will make the pick for the Steelers.
In the crosshair.
I'm Santana Moss, wide receiver / punt returner, University of Miami Hurricane.
It's time to get by.
It's hard growing up not having someone to really show you the rope to tell you right from wrong but your parents. You know, your parents only gonna be with you but so much, you know, time. I'm much stronger because I didn't have a brother that always tell me anything. So what I do for my brothers, you know, I let them know what I went through and how they can take their path, you know what I mean? Just, you know, just stay focused and dream on, you know, have fun. My son is a big inspiration to me. There's not a day go by that I don't think of. And when I first heard I was getting ready to have a son, it was like, you know, some guys might be, I'm about to leave school, I don't need this right now. But I was like, it was neat. You know, I always feel that everything that's happened in life is always meant to be if it happens to you. I remember my first year playing Pop Warner. My first game, the first play of the game, I caught a deep bomb and like the safeties was back there, and I just shook them loose and I was gone, you know what I mean? So my first game ever playing Little League ball, my first catch of the game, I scored a touchdown on it. I knew that coming in on that track scholarship, I had a lot of things to prove to guys, let guys know that I wasn't just a track guy, I was a football guy first and that just ran track on the side. You know, I remember growing up telling my mom I'm going to be in the 2000 Olympics. I got a chance, but I weighed my options. I said, hey, you know, I want to, 10 years from now, I want to be known as a football guy. I want to be playing football. It might not be the ideal size of a receiver, but at the same time, I had the heart of all the big guys anyway, you know. My plan is always to make the first guy miss and then just give it to him, you know what I mean, take it to the house.
Big time players step up in big games.
I put so much pressure on myself to be good to where sometimes it's disappointing when you're not.
Bring that beat back.
I came to school to get my degree first and then be an athlete, you know, second. I went through college having the best years of my life, and now it's time to always seek some better ones.
Santana Moss.
First of all, it's a great name. I mean, Santana Moss. I mean, that has stardom in New York written all over it. He's an exciting player. He's going to be a return guy. And here is the draft, the trade that we just talked about. So the Steelers get a 4 and a 6 to move 3 spots and let the Jets come up to get a player that they really had targeted. The Jets had this guy targeted. Herman Edwards is the first-year head coach. He's the 4th head coach of the Jets in about 14 months, if you count Parcells to Belichick for a few days, to Al Groh, and now Herman Edwards. It's a new regime with the Jets, with Herman Edwards as coach, and Terry Bradway, not Bradway Joe or Terry Bradshaw, but Terry Bradway, who is running the draft from Kansas City. But Herman Edwards is a man that has paid his dues. He's an outstanding corner. He's paid his dues at every level of the coaching ranks. And now let's go down to Tampa, South Palatonius with Tony Dungy, for whom Herman was the assistant head coach these last few years. Guys?
Well, Chris, not only assistant head coach, but also good friends with Herman Edwards. And I'm sure Herm is up there at Weeb Eubank Hall looking at this right now. Critique that Santana Moss pick.
Well, I love it. And matter of fact, Herm and I talked a little bit on Thursday, and, you know, they were ahead of us at that time. And I said, you know, my son Eric, that's his favorite player. If you take Moss in front of us, you're going to crush Eric. And he just kind of laughed. So I had a feeling they had their eye on him.
Now, with your pick, Kenyatta Walker, an offensive tackle, breaks a lot of historical precedent. In 10 years, you've never picked an offensive lineman here in the first round. Why Kenyatta? What made him so special that you would go up and get him and pick him in the first round?
Well, you have guys that you look at in that light, that they are special, and if they get close and you have a chance to get them, you'll do that. And we evaluated it that way and just felt like this guy is a very, very good player. He's talented. He's played in a lot of big games. He's played under pressure at University of Florida. And we liked him as a person. When we talked to him, we just thought that he's going to have a special career in the NFL and play for a long time. So we're excited to get him.
Real quickly, pencil him in as a starter right away?
Well, we never do that, but we think he certainly has that type of ability, and we're going to give him every shot to do that, but he'll earn it in training camp.
All right, thanks, Tony. Boomer, back to you in New York.
All right, Tony, thank you, Sal. And certainly Herman Edwards, an interesting head coach in the Meadowlands. He was the one that scooped up the infamous Pisarcik fumble and scored a touchdown for the Eagles of Dick Vermeil and Ron Jaworski some years ago. Now Herman Edwards returns as a hero in the Meadowlands, admittedly coaching another team, but at least still in green and white. Chris Fowler, Kirk Herbstreit, Santana Moss, you guys must have drooled every week watching him play.
It was fun to watch him play, Chris. He would... Big-time players step up in big-time games was his motto that he kept hammering time and time again. He certainly did in his career.
Well, if you go back and you think about what he did in games like Florida State, Miami, and in our world, that's as big as it gets. That's as competitive as it gets. And every time he played in that game, he was able to rise to the occasion. I remember sitting down and talking with him, and he had a look in his eye. And it was being a small receiver. People were always telling him, you don't have the size to make it at this level. I think that motivated him. I think it's going to be the same thing in the NFL. People are going to question his size, but don't ever question his heart. He has a young son that he's really dedicated his life to. You will see this guy, in my opinion, come in right away and be an impact player and a game breaker. You get him the ball in space, he makes people miss.
Fairly unpredictable first round so far, Boomer. This is one of the few instances where the team was talking about a guy. It's been in the tabloids here for a couple of weeks, and they went out and got him.
No question, guys. So the Jets have moved up for Santana Moss. And now for the second time in the first round, the Seattle Seahawks. I've already picked a wide receiver, Corey Robinson. Could they be looking big guys on the defensive front? We'll return. We get the Seahawks, Lions, and then Pittsburgh when we come back. Guard back in New York. The Seattle Seahawks. You understand that I think now they have, if they want, they have their choice of every corner that they want to play one day, or at least be a nickel now to play opposite Sean Springcraft one day. I still think, even though they've signed some big-time defensive linemen like Randall and Eaton, that it could be a defensive lineman perhaps like Hampton. I don't know. I actually don't know.
Of course you know.
No, I don't. But I tried. Gene Washington with the pick.
With the 17th selection, the Seattle Seahawks have chosen guard from the University of Michigan, Steve Hutchinson.
Now, there's a readjustment.
They lost Pete Kendall.
There's a readjustment that there's no way that the Seahawks thought, any team thought, that a player like Hutchinson, who just is pure nasty, I mean, this is nasty football, they just didn't think that he would be available. So as you point out, they lose Pete Kendall. Why not?
Yeah, you lose a Pete Kendall. It's an obvious situation that you feel like you have to fill. He's a tough guy, got a work ethic, same kind of attitude as Kendall. Now you've added your quarterback, you've added defensive back, you've got all these different pieces coming together. Didn't allow a sack the past 2 seasons.
Joe, watch him here at left guard, Joe. I mean, this is a guy who can do it all from a left guard position. Assist the running game. Here, Anthony Thomas about running downhill, not even touched until he's 7 yards deep in the backfield there. Again, not touched, getting through the first line of defense. Here he is, pass protection for Drew Henson, who had that big year with the Michigan Wolverines. Watch him now. You talk about agility and quickness for a 6'5", 315-pounder. He's 30 yards down the field, assisting on a swing pass to Anthony Thomas. This kid, in my opinion, was equal in rating to any player in this draft.
This is a Pro Bowl guy waiting. I'm telling you, you win with guys like Steve Hutchinson. When you put together championship teams, there's a Steve Hutchinson on your team. I love this move by Mike Holmgren.
You talked about the San Diego Chargers really jumping up and winning some football games. I think that the league is going to have to look out for this football team.
Oh, God, yes.
I think Seattle is... They'll be in the playoffs guaranteed. And the type of offense that they use is you need somebody who can quick and pull. You don't need a big road grader. Just a big guy who can run around.
This division, you talk about a couple teams at the bottom. I'm waiting to see what Kansas City does, although my goodness, they've moved. But Seattle, San Diego, and from the bottom, climbing back up to Oakland and Denver, who are quality teams. Mike Holmgren's been coach of the year. He'd like to be executive of the year while he's still coaching. We'll see what happens. Let's go up to Mike Tirico, because, Mike, this is a, there are not many that can wear 2 hats.
No, Chris, run the show and be the head coach. You talked about Denver and Seattle, and you have Holmgren and Shanahan. You also have Marty Schottenheimer in Washington doing a lot of the same. And our Tenactin video conference takes us to the Redskins headquarters and our friend, Coach Marty Schottenheimer, who just became a grandfather on Thursday. So congratulations on that, Marty, and the pick as well of Rod Gardner.
Thanks very much, Mike. We've got 2 #1 picks. The difference, of course, is that the one we got 2 days ago, we don't get to use him for 22 years.
Marty, with the pick of Gardner, as you were watching the way the first round was taking place and taking some different turns, is this the direction you hoped it would be for Washington with Gardner available at 15?
Absolutely, Mike. You know, our feeling was that he was a quality player. I was particularly impressed with the fact that he does a great job fighting for the contested balls. And, you know, in the National Football League, unlike the NCAA, guys don't really get wide open, as it were. So that, in combination with the consensus of our scouts and our coaching staff, we felt that this was a very solid pick for us.
2 receivers went before, and David Terrell and Corin Robinson. Was Gardner the top receiver on your board?
Mike, he was the 3rd-rated receiver on most of the people that were involved here, and we feel very, very good about getting him.
Everyone wants to know, and we had a long discussion after the pick, Daniel Snyder, his desires for whichever receiver he may have been interested in. How much input did Daniel have in the room as you guys were making this selection?
I'll tell you what, Dan and I discussed before the draft a number of scenarios. While in the draft, Mike, we talked about the fact that Gardner gave us the best opportunity to move along as we start this season, and he was very, very supportive of the choice. Basically, he said, Marty, this is how I feel. Do whatever you think is best.
Good enough. Coach, thanks. We'll talk to you as the weekend goes on.
My best to everybody, Mike.
Ditto. Congratulations. Marty Schottenheimer, our former colleague, and now a grandfather, and also with Rod Gardner from the Washington Redskins. Let's keep the Tenactin video conference line open. Send it down to Weeview Bank Hall, just on Long Island, the New York Jets headquarters. And their new head coach, Herman Edwards, joins us. Herman, after the selection right behind Washington of Santana Moss, the wide receiver from Miami. Herman, how antsy were you guys getting the fact that you traded a couple of other picks later on and swapped ones to get up here in Pittsburgh's spot and take Moss?
Well, I think we were excited with the idea that we could go up and get Santana, and it worked out for us, and I think it was going to work out for Pittsburgh also. And when you're sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden you see guys going before him, you get a little nervous when other teams are getting calls that are in front of you.
When you take a couple of picks and move up to get somebody, it means you really like them. What about Santana Moss is it that you guys fell in love with?
Well, I think the first thing you understand about Santana Moss, he's an excellent punt returner. You know, he can score from anywhere on the football field, and I think that's important in today's game when a guy of his caliber can catch a ball as a punt returner and all of a sudden put points on the scoreboard, as well as a receiver. I mean, you know, he's a little shorter than some people would like, but I think he's an explosive guy. He runs very, very fast, and he's been a good player at the level that he's played at.
Chris Fowler made the point. You guys weren't lying in the weeds or playing coy. You talked throughout the week publicly through the press in New York about how much you guys loved Santana Moss. Were you worried that somebody might have known that and was going to hop in there before you?
Well, no, I think Santana was one of the receivers we liked. There was a couple other guys there that we also coveted, but we felt that we had the opportunity to get Santana, and he would come in here and help us offensively and really put a little fear on the defenses that had to match up against this player.
Herman, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Herman Edwards there. The Jets in Pittsburgh almost made a trade for Chad Pennington last year's draft. That didn't go down. They do trade this year. And Chris, with the Lions on the clock, they either are very happy or very upset with the pick just before. Steve Hutchinson, being from down the road in Ann Arbor, was a guy the Lions talked about being interested in this week.
Well, there's no question, Mike, as you're now a Michigan native, but as you know, you can take anybody on the line. Their Backus is sitting there, and they might be very pleased to draft Jeff Backus. Detroit is on the clock now, and, you know, the Detroit Lions were a team that went through, I don't know if you want to call it turmoil, but they have 3 head coaches in the span of a calendar year. The Detroit Lions, no offensive touchdowns in the first couple of games. Defense tried to carry the way. Inconsistency set in. Yes, Desmond won a game at New Orleans very early in the year, but Bobby Ross had enough. He stepped out. Gary Moeller won 3 straight games right away, but in the end they were knocked out by the cellar dweller in their own division, the Chicago Bears, who beat Detroit at the end and knocked the Lions, albeit a 9-7 team. Let's not forget they were 9-7, but knocked the Lions out of the playoffs. So this was like 307 and 307. That's the Lions. And so in is Matt Millen as the CEO / president slash, by the way, they ought to line him up at linebacker and play him, slash commentator, slash, he's running everything there. And he's Marty Morningweg, a West Coast disciple of Mike Holmgren off of Steve Mariucci's staff. He is the new head coach in Detroit. So Matt Millen running the show.
I think this pick will be a pick that will tell you the story of a couple things. First of all, what Matt Millen is going to think about as the head of this organization. Secondly, what does he want to do with his offensive side of the football? I think the possibility still exists here for a wide receiver. They need help. But here's the name that comes up as a possibility, is Drew Brees.
Yes.
Now, we talk about Drew Brees being a system type of a quarterback, got a lot of production, 90 touchdown passes in his college career. Question is, if you go after a Drew Brees, what does that say to Charlie Batch? And can Charlie Batch protect?
Well, West Coast offense, Charlie Batch. They're already grumbling in Detroit. I think he can handle it. What do you think? You know more about it than I do.
I think it's going to be a struggle for Charlie. It's something that he's going to have to work at just because he's not fleet of foot. He takes a lot of hits. You don't get very far from the line of scrimmage in the West Coast offense. And look at the history of the guys that have been successful. Jeff Garcia, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Brett Favre. They have one thing in common. They all have the ability to avoid hits and move around.
Well, although you just take 3 steps, if you can make the 3 steps and identify receivers that can work. Marty Morningweg, the new head coach, for those that many people don't really know his pedigree, he played for Mike Holmgren in high school in San Jose. He was a quarterback there. Mike got him into the NFL on the Green Bay staff. Marty went to be offensive coordinator under Steve Mariucci in San Francisco. So that's his pedigree, West Coast, under Matt Millen, who is running. And this will be, if you want I know he's a Pennsylvania guy, but a top-nosed Midwest guy running a team like the Detroit Lions, you just got one in Matt Millen. So it changed. Let's go to Sal Paolantonio. And Sal, your thoughts on the Matt Millen regime, a guy who we loved covering, a guy who we loved being a member of the media with, and a guy who will be intriguing in this role, don't you think?
Well, I talked to Matt Millen, and he is very surprised that Todd Heap would still be here when they are picking on the clock at this point. They thought for sure that Backus would be there and they'd have a shot to get Backus. They obviously like Backus quite a bit. He is a Michigan guy, as Joe mentioned. But Todd Heap is a guy that intrigues them because don't forget, Marty Morningweg is bringing over the West Coast offense from San Francisco. You have to have a productive pass-catching tight end in this offense. So that's the discussion going on right now in the Detroit Lions walk room. Let's go back to Marty Morningweg. Also likes Drew Brees, but I don't know if that pick right there. They might move down to get Brees, but there's got to be Heap or Backus, Chris.
Well, again, there's some players who you didn't think were there. Sal, as you mentioned, we will return to an intriguing upper 2/3 of the first round of this, the 66.
Center in game. I'm Susie Colbert. Today it's Sports Center in draft. The top headlines, no surprise that Michael Vick went first. Where he went was the surprise. He went to the Falcons with the #1 pick. The Chargers get a package of picks for him, as well as wide receiver Tim Dwight. And all the talk was about the depth at lineman and wide receiver. Well, 10 out of the first 18 picks in the NFL draft were linemen, 7 D linemen. 6 of the first 16 players played college football in Florida. Of course, the NBA playoffs tipped off this afternoon. The top seed in the East, the Philadelphia 76ers, taking on the Pacers at #8. The Sixers had swept in this series. This game back and forth. The Pacers were actually down by 18 at one point. Here the Pacers down by just 1. Fourth quarter, Sixers trailed 73-72. Aaron McKee hits a slashing Allen Iverson, who hits the pull-up jumper, 74-73 Sixers. Same score, Pacers ball. Travis Best setting up the play. The pass to Reggie Miller, looking for the 3. He's got it. 76-74 Indiana. Pacers ball down 78-76. Miller takes the 3, misses. Rose, he's going to try to put up the 3. That's not going to go. Miller, he's going to take his shot at a 3. Another miss. The Pacers trying to get it done in the waning seconds of the game. Rose puts it up. Mutombo brings it down. And this one went down to the final few seconds. Allen Iverson trying to drive. The ball stolen away. And the Sixers fall to the Pacers 79-78. More scores of all kinds coming up at the top of the hour. Right now, we'll send you back to New York City and Chris Berman. Chris?
All right, Susie Q, thank you very much. Thanks for the work up there. The Pittsburgh Steelers traded down with the Jets. Now they're moving up to the podium. They have their choice of DBs at one position. Interesting players at this spot.
With the 19th selection, the Pittsburgh Steelers have chosen defensive tackle from the University of Texas, Casey Hampton.
Well, now that's the next defensive tackle. Right now, I mean that name, you know what? At 16, I think Bill Cowher and the Steelers thought a little high. I know 19 is not much different than 16, but is this okay in that slot?
Well, I think it was projected, Chris, to be maybe an Indianapolis-type choice somewhere in this portion of the round one. Surprising, though, that they didn't go corner. When they moved down, they still were able to see every corner still on the board at this point. They had the free agent problem at the end of the year. A little surprising that they would go defensive tackle over a cornerback.
You talk about free agent problem at the end of the year. All four of their corners are free agents, 2 unrestricted, 2 restricted. You still have to address that area, especially when you're... But, again, look at the division they play in. You know Tennessee's going to run the football. You know Baltimore's going to run the football. So you bring in more bodies. Plus they lost.
And don't forget, they wanted Ted Washington, the free agent. They couldn't convince him, and Washington went to the Bears.
Well, Hampton is 6'1", 314 pounds from Texas. 54 tackles for a loss in his career. And Mel, he's pretty quick inside, isn't he?
He is. His college career at Texas didn't get off really the way you would have hoped in terms of the productivity, because he had a season-ending knee injury back in '97, but he came back from that knee injury to put up the big numbers along the defensive front. Started 37 straight games, one of the stars just about every game from that point on. And look at this past year. Shawn Rogers is out with the injury, limited in terms of his effectiveness, yet Rogers goes out and dominates the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. I think that's pretty impressive. You lose your guy next to you that you relied on in Shawn Rogers. He's not as effective more, yet Casey Hampton still proved to be as productive as he had ever been.
They still need somebody to play behind him. They lost Levon Kirkland. Big loss.
Well, they understand at least the Pittsburgh Steelers finished the season on an up note. Cordell played better. They finished at 9-7. It's the first up note they've had on a couple of seasons. And you got to get up if you're going to look at the 2 AFC champions in your division the last 2 years. Baltimore, Super Bowl champ, and Tennessee the year before that. And Jacksonville is a strong team before that. Mark Malone certainly dialed into the Pittsburgh situation, although we have planted him out in the show-me state. Mark, never far away from Pittsburgh. Your insights here on the pick to Casey Hampton.
Well, I can tell you this, Chris, that in fact Pittsburgh really like Hampton, maybe even more than the tackle from Georgia, Stroud. When you think about it, let's remember, this is a football team that plays a 3-4. Kimo Van Ohoffen had been playing nose tackle. Really what they needed was a guy that was a nose tackle that could come in and play right away, and that way they can take Van Ohoffen and move him back out to the defensive end spot. So, Mel, you said yourself that if this guy was 2 inches taller, he would probably be in the top 5 picks. I don't know that you need to be that tall if you're playing nose tackle in the 3-4. So really, I think Pittsburgh got the guy they want. They move back 4 spots, and they pick up a 4th and a 6th round pick. So, yes, they do need a cornerback. I'm sure they'll address that. But right now, I think they got the defensive tackle they want in their defense. Back to
Mark,
you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One other note on the Steelers before St. Louis picks, and I think they're ready to go. Boy, are they antsy or what? One other note on the Steelers is that they signed linebacker Mike Jones the other day. And why? Well, they play Tennessee twice every year. If Tennessee is on the 1-yard line against Pittsburgh, you put Mike Jones in, and he's going to make the tackle. That's, of course, the Ram linebacker once upon a time that made the tackle on Dyson as they're trying to go to the Super Bowl. It's just a football note. On the 1, Pittsburgh's all set. If Tennessee's going in, and here's St. Louis.
With the 20th selection, the St. Louis Rams have chosen defensive back from Arizona State, Adam Archuleta.
Well, we segue from Malone from Arizona State, our director, Chip Dean, Arizona State. It's about that time. This is a unique pick here, and St. Louis had him pegged all along.
I thought he would have been a perfect Oakland Raider. I mean, what cost the Raiders in that AFC Championship game was a missed tackle. I really thought that Adam Archuleta would have fit in very well there. But look at St. Louis. They go out and they get Kim Herring. from Baltimore. Now they bring in an Art Gilletta to be your strong safety, a guy who was a former walk-on, played that rover linebacker position, and a guy that you go back and say, well, it's the transition into the NFL. Ask Darren Woodson that same question. Ask Pat Tillman that question. They transitioned Joe very effectively into the NFL.
Well, I think it's a nice fit for them. Again, defense, 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 speed, special teams. These are all the things that you think about. There he is up in the rover back position, coming in and filling. Now he comes up and makes a tackle. That's the other thing. He brings an attitude. Watch him go out, sideline to sideline, running around all over the place. Has good eyes and good vision back to the quarterback, coming around the corner. We've seen him do a number of things just in this highlight package. He knows how to get to the quarterback. He can bring it. That's exactly what they think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What do they like to do? They like to come after the quarterback. Possibly
John Lynch.
That's a great question. John Lynch, I mean, you know, we got a long way to go before you're John Lynch. But for what we just saw there, that is what they're looking for. So they've gone D-line, they've gone to safety. They get another pick in the first round. Might they go at linebacker?
They got Aeneas Williams.
They got Aeneas Williams.
Pencil them in. New Orleans.
St. Louis Rams. All right, everything in St. Louis flowing through the gateway to the west. And you know what? I think Andrea Kramer's with us, and your guest is probably pretty happy that maybe, just maybe, they don't have to put up 45 points a game anymore.
Absolutely, Chris. And we were in the war room when Pittsburgh made the pick of Casey Hampton. And as soon as that pick came in, they started high-fiving each other. Jay Zygmunt, the team president, throwing up his hand. They started calling him Adam Martz, as in, you know, Coach Martz. So Martz Madness is going to take on a defensive player at this point. The other thing that was interesting is that when Pittsburgh went on the clock, the Rams got a call from Carmen Policy and the Browns to see whether or not they'd be interested in moving down into the second round. And they said, if a player we want is not there when we're ready to pick, we'll move down. Art Gilletta was the guy. Art Gilletta is the one that they picked immediately. Well, perhaps the greatest beneficiary of all this defensive talent, believe it or not, is the quarterback, the MVP from 2 years ago. Who would think you'd be happy about defensive talent? Kurt Warner, what is your assessment so far of the defensive players added to your team?
Well, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the defense, but I know our coaches, you know, felt that that was our greatest need. And coming in, they were going to try to shore up some weaknesses we had over there. And from what I understand, the two guys we've got so far are going to be great attributes to the team and shore up our defense a little bit so we can get back to where we belong.
You are also friendly with Aeneas Williams. What is that addition going to mean to the Rams?
I think it's a tremendous addition, both on and off the football field. He's going to be a great leader for us. We've got a lot of young guys in our secondary. A guy that's proven that he can do it. He knows how to win. He knows how to win on and off the football field. And he's just going to be a great leader and really take control of that defense, I think, and bring us to another level.
Finally, Trent Green has departed. And different for you, because this isn't a Rob Johnson, Doug Flutie. You guys really were friends. What are your thoughts on Trent's departure and Joe Germain now being your backup?
Right. I'm excited that Trent got the opportunity to start. We talked a lot over the offseason, and you know, it was just a tough situation for both of us. And I wanted him to get an opportunity to play again, and that's what he wanted. I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet, but I'm excited about doing so because I know him and his family are going to be excited about that opportunity. Get to go back with Coach Vermeil in a system that he's, you know, he can recognize. And so I think it's going to be a great situation for him. And we're all excited about Joe. We know he's got a lot of talent. He doesn't have all the experience yet, but we're going to do a lot of that in the preseason, get him a lot of snaps, and get him ready to be the backup in case anything were to happen.
Just very quickly, how is your health, the concussions? Any headaches? Or?
No, I feel great. Probably not 100% quite yet, but I'm very close, and I feel good, and I'm just ready to get back out there.
All right, thank you very much, Kurt. Let's head back to Chris Berman in New York.
All right, Kurt Warner and Andrea Kramer, thank you very much. So the Buffalo Bills are on the clock because they moved down 7 spots in the trade with Tampa Bay. Oh, my God, the pick is in already. The cab didn't even arrive yet. Now, this is the new cab driver this year, but I got to think defensive back Clemens, Nate Clemens. That's my guess.
With the 21st selection, the Buffalo Bills have chosen from Ohio State defensive back Nate Clemens.
Well, it was part of a guess.
Yeah, right. The president, Tom Donahoe, Buckeye bookends. You got Antoine Winfield.
Who's a great player.
Yes.
Well, this is, I mean, the Bills are a discussion unto the, we'll talk about the player first, because Ohio State, and we'll get maybe Kirk to weigh in on this too. I mean, you talk about a football program at 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Cornerback. Plummer to San Francisco last year. Of course, Sean Springs with Seattle. I'm forgetting one off.
Antoine Winfield.
Well, we just mentioned Antoine Winfield. And now but they have Nate Clements. How does he rank coming out of school with these? Coming out of school?
Those players, Chris, I thought were a little bit more polished. You look at a guy like Nate Clements, you see great physical ability, 5'11", 209, and a guy that certainly has the recovery speed. Ran a 4.37 during his workout, did 20 reps, which shows that he has the strength that you're looking for. In coverage, though, against the Ron Johnson from Minnesota, against the David Terrell this past year, guys, he did struggle. Here's against Wisconsin, not a very sophisticated offense there. He does the job in the man coverage. Now, he's a strong, physical defensive back, excellent in run support. Here he is against Drew Brees in Purdue. Reads the route, breaks in front for the INT. Remember, he's also an outstanding kickoff returner at Ohio State. Did a good job in that area, but a guy that I think needs more experience and needs to gamble a little less. I think he was beaten in coverage far too much for my liking this year.
Let me just say this. With Greg Williams, who was the architect of the Tennessee defense, along with Jeff Fisher down there, I don't think you're going to see this cornerback situation be a gamble-less situation, Mel. I think he's going to have to hone his one-on-one skills. That's going to be very important. Pat Williams, with the leaving now of Ted Washington, I believe will come out as a Pro Bowl tackle in this style of aggressive one-gap, go after the quarterback. Eric Flowers, they envision him as a Javon Curse, a Kenny Holmes type of a defensive end. Now that they've got the guys up front, now you got to start adding people on the corner and in the secondary.
And this is the guy that the coach, even though he gambled a lot and got burned some, this is a guy that the coaches there in Buffalo felt that they could really develop with him. He's got good hips. He's a big physical type of guy. And he was one of the 4 guys I think Buffalo was going to debate at number 14.
Yes,
so that move pays off.
No question. They thought about offensive line with Rob Johnson, now the quarterback, and admittedly certainly not as mobile as Doug Flutie. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb on that. But they did not go Hutchinson or Backus. And Tom Donahoe, in his first draft with Buffalo, has done so well at Pittsburgh and became a great friend of ours this last year when he worked for us every Sunday on .com and with us. Got a second-round pick and still pretty much got a player he wants. Now, he doesn't have to come in and start. Kenny Urban is defiant at the other corner opposite with Winfield. Joe, you pointed it out. Greg Williams, new coach, they changed from 3-4 to 4-3. Coward is healthy again, although his position will change some. He's a football player. The question is, can Rob Johnson stay upright all season long? And if so, the Bills certainly have wideouts. They'll address some other issues as we come along, and there's some other Bills discussion. Oh, by the way, you mentioned one other thing on Clemens. How many every Sunday? Oh, those Bills special teams. They got a return guy, but they certainly got a return guy. It's the other 10 I'm worried about on their special teams. They're trying to sign Christie. He is unsigned right now. Steve Christie has kicked so well. God, I had to do that in a hurry. I mean, we didn't have a chance. We will have more of a chance. There are other issues with the Bills, but we bring in someone who should be... well, I don't think he's going to shy away from the camera. The new CEO / president / announcer / middle linebacker / well, he's everything. Matt Millen in our Tenactin video conference. And Matt, welcome to the other side of the tracks, huh?
Yeah, thanks, Boom. Good to be here. I think we're excited. Our whole draft room was excited to get Jeff back because I think we got ourselves a really solid player.
I mean, he's kind of on offense, the type of player. I'm not saying you're trying to mimic you, but I mean, he plays with a similar fire as I think that you once played with.
No question about it. And the thing that you want to get in that offensive line is a guy with a good attitude, a guy who can kind of set the tone. I think Backus is that type. I think he comes in here as a smart player. It's a great program. I mean, I've always admired the linemen that have come out of Michigan, and I think we got ourselves a good one right there.
Matt, what is going to be the hardest thing? Yes, you do have a good one. I think everybody agrees with that. For you now in this job, which maybe a couple of years ago you started to think about, maybe not with the Lions, but maybe somewhere else, right. But a player, a broadcaster, but running a whole team. What do you think you have to learn the fastest, be the quickest on the learning curve by the time the season starts?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just learning to dress properly. Because, as you well know, I am just replete in sartorial splendor. I think you told me that way. Well, I think the biggest thing is trying to get everybody together on the same page, number one. And number two, I think what we have to be able to do up here, and I've said it a bunch of times, is we have to be able to get an attitude change, and I think that's so important. And that's why I believe that Backus is a nice piece to this puzzle.
Look, a lot of things can happen, and you got picks to make, but as we stand right now, I mean, you're not picking second in or anything, there is already, you know, they talk football in Detroit, as you well know. Charlie Batch, West Coast offense. Can this work, Matt?
Oh, no question it can work. No question it can work, and Charlie Batch is working right along, and we're really happy with the physical improvements from our strength conditioning program. I think that's been a big plus for us. I think the offense under Marty Morningweg and the offensive staff, I think that's a nice match for what we're going to do here. And keep in mind, Boomer, and Joe can attest to this, one of the things with this offense is its adaptability, and that's I think that's a big plus for us.
Matt, I got to ask you, have you talked to Barry Sanders at all, anywhere along the line?
Yeah, I've spoken to Barry Sanders a couple times. In fact, after we had been exchanging phone calls a couple times and I didn't get him, I said, forget this. I just went over to his house, rang the doorbell till he answered, and when his wife answered, Marty and I barged in, sat down in the living room, and we had ourselves a really nice talk with him. And right now, Barry Sanders is not going to play, and that's fine with us because, hey, we're on Barry Sanders' side, and we would still love to have Barry Sanders part of this organization because, as you well know, one of the greatest running backs that certainly I've ever laid eyes on.
Well, all of us, too. Good luck, and God, a new hat for Matt Millen, a hat that none of us ever thought that you'd wear, but you know what? You're going to wear it well. Good luck to you.
I got the hat, but I don't have the tie. Well, don't forget it.
The tie, you know, you radio guys, you don't need ties, right?
Okay.
Well, TV,
Boomer, thank you.
All right, Matt, good luck. Boy, is that a refreshing man in that sort of position? You can talk about a different pedigree in that position than Matt Millen. I think everybody can root. It was interesting. At least dialogue is open with Barry Sanders. The Indianapolis Colts are on the clock. I have a couple thoughts there. I have to just check my list for a minute. But, well, go ahead. You guys talk for a second. Let me just check my list.
I wish we'd almost had asked about this. I heard he was in the weight room a few weeks ago and actually got a wrestling match with one of his players. Actually wrestled in the weight. The president and CEO of the team.
I love it.
You're never gonna take the football player out of Matt Millen.
We don't want to.
And you don't. But one of the things somebody asked me about him a while back in an interview, and they said, well, he's a TV guy going in to run a football team. I said, you got this all wrong. This is a football guy going in to run a football organization.
But it's still a different job. It is different.
But what I like about him is Matt has a plan. I think the most important thing, if you go into an organization, you have to have a plan that you want to implement. He knows what he wants. He knew what he wanted. He wanted Steve Mariucci as his coach. Didn't get him. Okay, I'll take Marty Morningweg because of the pedigree of Mike Holmgren, Steve Mariucci, Marty Morningweg, the success of this offense.
And let me be the first one to say this. Matt Millen has some help. Bill Tobin. Okay, I'm the fair.
Why not? Well, I like it, Mel.
It's good to have Bill back.
It's who he surrounds himself with. And
got all the
Tobins.
Example. They got all the Tobins, don't they?
Vince?
Bill, Vince.
Well, the Tobin
Schottenheimer. Is he there?
Are you a cousin of the Tobins?
I don't think so, Joe.
Okay, so you're not going to wind up in Detroit on this in a year or so. I'm just curious.
I'm still not buying quite, though, his endorsement of Charlie Batch. I mean, you have to say the right thing sometimes, but I think there is a question mark there. Their feelings about Charlie, and Charlie's going to have to prove it.
But I do believe that it's going to be Charlie's opportunity to prove whether he fits or not. And that's important. He's gotten in the weight room. Charlie's biggest knock, in my opinion, is he's not been able to stay healthy. He's sort of like that other guy besides Rob Johnson, who we talk about getting beat up all the time. Right. Play 3 games, bang in the chest.
Say Drew Brees slides into the early second round.
I think it's
what precludes Detroit from moving up to get him? You have Atlanta sitting there. They obviously have Michael Vick now, so that's out of the question. Right. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys. So what I'm saying is, if Drew Brees slides into the second round and Detroit's aggressive, they may be able to go up and get him.
Yes, it can.
Well, we have a trade. I was going through my Indianapolis notes, and it said trade. And so the Colts and the New York Football Giants have just made a trade for this, the 22nd spot. So we've seen the Jets trade up here in New York to get Santana Moss, and now the Giants have traded up. Mort, Mel, you may be wired on this one.
Well, I think you have to look at the obvious need area. It's no surprise that cornerback is at the top of that list. They need somebody opposite Sehorn, and you had some teams here that may be thinking corner along that line. And you look at Will Allen, Mort, you look at Willie Middlebrooks. I mean, those are guys. I had Will Allen going to the Giants when I did the report back in mid-March, and I think as a guy who played so well as a junior, and then as a senior, dropped back just a bit. He has some kick return skills. You have a Middlebrooks there. The cornerbacks,
the Giants, I think, said, okay, this guy could maybe be a guy opposite Sehorn or still on the board at this point.
They want a corner, they need a corner, but do not rule out Todd Heap either, because they do need, that's another position.
Well,
what's their major need?
Corner, you're right.
They made the, plus you get a guy with kick return skills. You mentioned it. We talked about the special team problems that the Buffalo Bills had.
Oh, God.
You got to remember, before Jim Fossil came on and guaranteed the playoffs, there was a nightmare. That was that Arizona game that we did on ESPN. There was a nightmare going on with his special team situations also.
Well, he's already changed his punting situation. Not that we're talking about. I mean, Maynard's already gone. I mean, that's part of the special team.
Well, it just takes one more element and adds it to it. But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, this has got to be somebody that they want in the secondary.
Here's your secondary. Thomas, a big guy, opposite Sehorn, but not maybe the wheels you want. Williams has become a beautiful player at the free safety part.
Every one of these defensive backs goes over 215 pounds. Every one of them is over 6'2". And I think they need some quicker, smaller guys out there to be able to get into one-on-one cover situations. It showed up in the Baltimore game in the Super Bowl. People can run by the big guys. They isolate them and run by them.
And one cornerback we should talk about here at the later portion of the round. One is Fred Smoot. Fred Smoot may drop down just a bit more.
Well, Fred Smoot has got some question marks about his character. Been some incidents in which actually there was a lot of correspondence going back and forth this week between attorneys, law enforcement officers, just to clarify Fred Smoot's situation. So Fred Smoot has dropped a little bit. He is that quick guy. But corner, yes, I'm still not ruling out a Todd Heap, though, tight end, because they need that type of player as well.
You know what? Well, the pick is in, and the Giant fans are up and waiting, and what a year they had last year. I mean, they were just a well-rounded, well, we'll talk about them in a minute. Here are the New York Football Giants.
With the 22nd selection, the New York Giants have chosen defensive back from Syracuse, Will Allen.
From Syracuse.
White Plains.
He actually grew up at Syracuse in addition to going to college at Syracuse. I'm sure. So Will Allen, we've had two straight corners. No corner goes to 21. Now we have two in a row. By the way, it cost a third and a sixth. That was what the trade cost, a third and a sixth. Will Allen, Mel?
Well, I think you look at Will Allen, Boomer, and you go back to the junior campaign where he was just blanketing wide receivers all over the field. Now, he dropped back just a little this year. You see the aggressive qualities, jarring the ball loose. And keep in mind, he's 5'10 and a half, but he's 193 pounds. Very good strength, and he runs in that 4.35 range on a very consistent basis. You see his kickoff return skills here as well. Averaged 24.1 yards on 19 returns this past season. The question with Will Allen is, become a finisher. Ball skills. And I think where he's positioned to make a play, you have to come down with the INT. And in my mind, Morton Joe, if you drop an INT or you don't come away with a pick, when the opportunity presents itself, it's a turnover against that player.
Again, he's a young football player. I think ball skills can be worked on. I think, believe me, he's going to catch more balls in this offseason than he ever dreamed about catching at Syracuse to work on his skills. The one thing you're always curious about a defensive back, will he stick his head in there and tackle? He will. I think that's what's very attractive.
3.5 hours into this draft, Butch Davis, now his old school Miami has 3 players chosen. Butch, of course, now the coach of the Cleveland Browns. Michigan's had 3 players picked. But Deuce McAllister, maybe the most known name of a player still available from Ole Miss. We have Uriah Heep, Todd Heap, the tight end, who is a unique pick. And then you come to some wide receivers, Mel, and some more corners.
Well, I think Deuce McAllister, it's not a surprise he's still there, Chris. I kept him up there highly rated. I've had him there all year. And I realized the injury question, but also realized Jamal Lewis, a lot of injury problems in 2 years at Tennessee. And look what he did. You see Drew Brees. He could go into the early second round. Ironically, talk about all the great receivers. Reggie Wayne's the best route runner, and he has the strongest hand. He could be an early 2. And Chris Jenkins is very interesting because he had an outstanding year, I thought, in Maryland. A big upgrade over his junior year. And he's big, and he's a guy that I think is really a comparable to those Baltimore Ravens defensive tackles. And we've, interestingly enough, compared every defensive tackle in this draft to Sam Adams.
Well, the thing you have to understand, if you want to get like the Baltimore Ravens defensive tackles, these guys need to put on 50, 60 pounds. I mean, you're not even going to scratch the surface of Syracuse at 320. I mean, forget about it. You got to go out to eat for a long time to get what Tony. 320 Canadian, right leg. About 66%.
320 Canadian.
Yeah.
Let's move up to Mike Tirico for some other news around the league. Michael.
Yes, north, but not as north as Canada. We want to bring in Sal Palantonio, who's south in Tampa, but discussing the Philadelphia Eagles as they await to pick 25th. Sal, what are you hearing from there?
Well, Mike, let's look ahead a little bit to that 25th pick in the Eagles. Don't forget they need a lot of wide receiver help. Reggie Wayne is still there. Freddie Mitchell is still there. Players that they do like. Todd Heap, the tight end, is there, but you have a Pro Bowl tight end already on the football team. But the interesting thing is Mel has his top pick still available, Deuce McAllister. The Eagles, Deuce Staley, has been injured. He was injured in the second game last year, still has a problem with a stress fracture. McAllister's an interesting situation for them. Do they pick up McAllister as an insurance, or do they go with a wide receiver? So they have a dilemma down in Philadelphia. Michael?
That's Deuce with one more E and a bunch more injuries, and I'm sure the guys will talk about that as they talk McAllister more often later on. Right now, we'll go back to Chris and company in New York. Boomer.
All right, Michael, Sal, thank you very much. We, you know, we've had 22 picks. We've had 4 trades while we've been on the clock. This has moved along much faster than I thought, hasn't it? I mean,
it is. It really has.
Homie said, geez, 3.5 hours, but I mean, with all the movement and everything else,
This is. I think it's an indication that there are teams out there. We talked about it, need versus value. There are teams out there that when somebody goes and you see the quick trade and the quick trigger, boy, if he's there, I'm going after him. Bang, they're gone. Well, if I can move up this many places, I can get it done. There's a willingness to deal out for players, and there's also a willingness to go up for players. I also think it's indicative of the equal nature of the talent in general in the first round in this pick. Nothing real exceptional.
Well, I heard many a personnel guys say, hey, between picks 15 and 50, it's the same guy. Just different position, but it's the same guy. So I think that's another reason.
Yeah, we talked about the Giants having a wonderful season. Boy, late November to December to January to remember. What about the New Orleans Saints? I mean, I don't care who you are. You have to root for the New Orleans Saints. And what Jim Haslett did last year in bringing this team into the playoffs and winning a division at 10-6 and eliminating the Super Bowl champion Rams from the playoffs, Ricky Williams in and out. I mean, second year, good when he was there, but didn't play a whole lot of the year. Jeff Blake gets hurt, even though while he was in, Joe Horn had a huge year receiving. But so who are we going to go with? One of those other backups to Brett Favre, who, oh, by the way, was an off-season trade. We're going to try Aaron Brooks. And Aaron Brooks beat the Rams in the playoffs, and they went up to Minnesota. And so the New Orleans Saints won the NFC West last year at 10-6. The Saints, a team that, look, offensively and defensive, were ranked in the top 10, and you don't get teams that much that put that all together. You talk about 1 year as a head coach. You got to look at what Jim Haslett did last year with New Orleans, one of the best. Hello, I'm a first-year head coach, and I'm coaching a franchise that hadn't done too well, and how well they did. Let's go out to San Diego to Ed Werder with some thoughts, perhaps, on the Saints. Ed?
Well, an interesting development, Chris. You know, Mike Ditka's last pick as GM and head coach of the Saints was Ricky Williams. Gave away almost an entire draft to make that pick. Well, now Jim Haslett and Randy Mueller are going to take another running back with their very first-round pick, and it's going to be Deuce McAllister, the multi-dimensional running back. When I talked to Mueller yesterday, he said, hey, this is a guy who reminds me a lot of Fred Taylor with that explosiveness, the ability to contribute as a receiver immediately. It also gives him a backup for Ricky Williams, who missed 8 games last year. And I think the other thing, it sends a strong message to Ricky Williams, who right now is the only member of their roster who is not participating in their off-season program. Now, they did dispatch Dave Atkins, their running backs coach, down to San Diego last week to check in on Ricky Williams. They weighed him. He weighed 228. Chris, let's go back to you.
All right, Ed, thank you very much for the insight. And if this is the case, which we're about to find out, another team that doesn't have to pay moving expenses, Ole Miss, New Orleans, it's close. Here's the pick.
With the 23rd selection, the New Orleans Saints have chosen running back from Mississippi, Deuce McAllister.
Well, this is some discussion here, boys.
Let's go. Jim Haslett, since he's been in New Orleans, has never been enamored with Ricky Williams. And it's black and white with Jim Haslett. He either likes you or he's got issues with you. Now, hey, Ricky Williams, 2 straight off seasons, has barely been there with Jim Haslett. Has forfeited $250,000 each year in off-season workout bonus money, and I don't think he's Haslett's type of guy. And this, at least, you'll find out, will he compete? Will he be motivated by getting a guy like McAllister?
And one thing, too, with McAllister's pass receiving skills, Mort, you have a heck of an option. You can utilize him in a lot of different ways. He has kickoff return skills. He's an outstanding punt returner. You watch Deuce McAllister. I think he's been knocked for his competitiveness. Well, he's just not accurate. I look at Deuce McAllister, Joe, and he battled back from that injury the best he could this year. Go back to 1998. He rushed for over 1,000 yards, averaged 5.1 yards per carry. Caught 20 passes out of the backfield. Next year, averaged 5.4 yards per carry. Then the injuries this past season. But I go back to the Arkansas game. He was still not 100%, so had a big game there, had a tremendous run off tackle where he won about 55 yards for a touchdown. Joe, I like Deuce McAllister, have all year, and I think the Saints are saying, hey, we have Ricky Williams, and we can utilize this guy as a receiver, as a punt returner, kickoff returner, and really use those multi-dimensional skills to our benefit.
I don't know if they're saying we have Ricky Williams. Jim Haslett's just sending a message out to Ricky Williams. We don't care. Go do whatever you want to do. I'm going on with my football team. That's Jim Haslett. He's great at handling guys who think they have problems. But he'll straighten them out. Wait 1 second. The other thing is that we talked about Jamal Lewis last year when the Baltimore Ravens were looking at Jamal Lewis and said, you know, he's got a nick here, he's got an injury here. Turned out to be a heck of a back. Deuce McAllister could be the same type of a back for them. Give them the pounder. Give them the versatility.
You agree with me, Joe?
I think I'm
with the Deuce bandwagon now?
Based on Jamal's situation, I think so. I think it's a good pick.
Let's look at the depth chart.
I love the pick.
Let's look at the depth chart.
I love the fact that Jim Haslett said, hey, look, I'm not going to put up with Ricky Williams baloney. Ricky Williams.
Do you really believe that Ricky Williams is not in the picture at running back?
No, I think
I don't believe Ricky Williams is this stupid. That's
Ricky Williams has been injured both his 2 seasons, too, though. You got to remember. So you're looking at a guy in Ricky Williams who has missed games each of the seasons because of injuries. McAllister, who had some of those issues. Maybe between the 2 of them, you get a heck of a back.
To me, I just have trouble imagining somebody not being bright enough to be able to figure out what's going on. He's a great football player.
Yes.
I mean, I'm as mad as a fan of the game of football at the actions that he has. I mean, he's really stupid. And forget about this baloney about going to play baseball. Guys have tried that.
And that's not the ultimate wake-up call to Ricky Williams.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what else could be a wake-up call than this?
Somebody rang the bell.
12-alarm fire worth of a wake-up
going
call.
on.
And they're taking it back. Where everyone down there, I mean, they're thrilled to have Ricky still in New Orleans, but, you know, a running back from Mississippi playing in New Orleans, that'll be home following in itself. I mean, that's a loud wake-up call. But let's go back a minute. We said that these 2 teams drafting back-to-back are 2 feel-good teams and feel-good stories from last year. New Orleans certainly, but it's hard to feel better than the New York Giants did last year. And joining us on the Fast Acton Tenacton video conference is the coach of the defending NFC champions, Jim Fossil. And Jim, I don't know if this was a guarantee that you were going to get a defensive back, but my goodness, you obviously were convicted to go up and get Allen from Syracuse. Why make the move there?
Well, Chris, you know, one of the things Ernie and I are very much on the same page with is that sometimes you got to be aggressive. We were aggressive last year with some of the moves we made in personnel, and we had a conviction on him, and then Nate Clements went, and we thought that there could be a run on corners, and we felt like it was value to go up and fulfill something. We felt like we needed to get a player at that position, and we were excited about him, and we think he can come in and help us.
Well, if you were to think back at the run that you guys got on right into the Super Bowl, it may sound like a trite question, Jim, but then you've had a chance to reflect on it. What 1 or 2 things do you want to bottle and make sure that you have to repeat all next year long? Could be a player, could be an attitude. What was the highlight as you look back a couple of months ago?
Well, without a doubt, I think the team chemistry. That's the one thing we worked very hard at this last off season, and we started that way right now. And I told anybody that we brought in as a free agent and different players I've talked to is that we finally built tremendous team chemistry in these guys. And I know that sounds trite and overplayed and all that type of stuff. It's not in my mind. And I don't want to lose that. I want to keep the work ethic going right now. We have virtually every player here working very hard in the off-season program, and I'm interested in keeping that type of chemistry, not only the free agents we sign, but the people we draft.
Well, I think it's indicative by the re-signing of Seahorn, the re-signing of Tiki Barber. Do you feel offensively, and Obviously, Kerry Collins grew, and you know, you got a nice season out of your #1 pick last year, Rondé. Do you feel that as an offensive team, the Giants are really just scratching the surface of what you could become this season?
I do. I think we can get better. I think we made good strides last year, and obviously the way Kerry Collins played was a big part of that. But we got better play. Tiki Barber was phenomenal. I mean, he played really outstanding for us. Our receivers played well. And I really think that, yeah, we can continue to get better. Our defense is outstanding, has been for a while. And as we become more of a complete team, our offense has the potential to continue to grow and get better.
Of course, you're going to be the one that they're hunting now. I mean, you know that. That'll be a speech somewhere along the line, won't it?
Oh, absolutely. I've got that speech already ready. They, you know, obviously with 3 Monday night games and a Sunday night game, and, you know, that road schedule will get you. Plus, we're playing very good football teams. And then also, like you said, you become a marked team. This team went to the Super Bowl last year, and, you know, Minnesota, who we played in the championship game, we got to go up there. And there's going to be some tough games. It's going to be a challenge for us, but we're a better football team, and I think we're a lot more mentally prepared to handle it.
Well, it beats the alternative, Jim. I think you would agree with me on that. And also, I think in the speech department, you're okay when you give that speech. We'll see you later on in the weekend.
All right, good to be with you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Jim Fossil, a good guy. Good things happened to a good guy last year. The Giants are a feel-good story, and they've moved up and drafted corner. We have Denver, Philly, Miami coming up. Playoff teams abound. We'll be back.
I think most people are sold on the ankle, that he'll be ready for mini camps and certainly for training camp. I think that what this does for Denver, it gives you three young corners. Denard Walker was a great free agent signing. They drafted Delta O'Neal last year. You got Jimmy Spencer as a veteran that could be a fourth guy. And they signed Darrell Lewis, and now Middlebrooks. Even if he starts out as a special team guy, as an inside slot corner, I think they've done a tremendous job upgrading their secondary.
Well, let's really quickly go Denver, and then we'll come back in a moment. But look, a year ago at this time, we really didn't know, is Brian Griese going to be not only a good starting quarterback, but a leader of the team? Answer now, 12 months later, yes and yes. Have they made enough moves to get back into the Super Bowl? Could we be looking, guys, at a Super Bowl team, especially if Terrell Davis becomes himself again?
I think they've had a tremendous offseason. And to answer your question, Boomer, I think they are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Between the free agent signings, getting Middlebrooks, I have one big problem with what they've done in the offseason, and I hope it doesn't negate everything. I am not a Chester McLaughlin fan. I think he has the capability of negating all the good that they've done, and it even bothers me that they're going to be playing in a spanking new stadium, and Chester gets to run out there and soil it from day one.
Well, why don't you just tell us something? You really believe there, you know?
I really believe this. Ask the people at Oakland, and going back Clemson, Oakland, and Kansas City.
Well, they're hoping that with Ray Rhodes that is the right mix. When we return, we will talk with Jim Haslett on the video coverage, who certainly made an interesting draft, Vick. So we'll ask Jim about that and what's going on down in New Orleans when we return. The draft in New York is we're 4 hours in. Miami is number 26 of the 31 teams in the first round. Could we hear the name Drew Brees here? We'll get to that in a moment. That would be intriguing. Well, we're going to go to the pick right now, and we'll see what they do, and then we'll visit with New Orleans. This could be an interesting spot. Don't know that it will be with Brees, but certainly something they could look at. Although, remember, they did sign Ray Lucas to back up Jay Fiedler, so they have 2 mobile quarterbacks. There wouldn't be an urgent need there. They did spend some money. So, Miami Dolphins, who won the division last year, let's remember that. They won, like New Orleans did, won their division last year, came from behind to beat the Colts before losing at Oakland. Here's their pick.
With the 26th selection, the Miami Dolphins have chosen defensive back from Wisconsin, Jamar Fletcher.
Well, you know, it's interesting. There's a guy, the Colts, their division rival, we're looking at, although the Colts trading down that many spots, can't be surprised that the Fletcher DB Wisconsin is gone. We'll talk back to Miami in a moment. But as we said before, on the line with us is a guy that it's hard to top what you do in your first year as a head coach in professional football. With our Tinactin video conference, we join the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, Jim Haslett. And Jim, good to be with you as always. Deuce McAllister. Surprised he was sitting there for you?
Well, we were very surprised. Obviously, he's a guy that we had it rated very high on our board, up and around, I think, 5th or 6th on our board. And when he fell to us, we thought, you can't turn down a guy like this. It just, he gives you so many weapons. A guy that can play running back and go out there and return punts and kickoffs. And I think he's a great pick.
Okay, so now the next question, you know where we have to go. Ricky Williams. I guess it's a two-pronged question. If Ricky is in and playing the way you want him, how do you project to get them both playing time? And where does Ricky Williams stand right now in your overall plans, Jim?
Well, obviously, I think this is a two-man position that you can't go wrong. I like the Giants did last year with Thunder and Lightning. I think this gives you some flexibility in plays. You can run with them, different things. And you know, obviously, Ricky's been hurt the last couple of years, so it's nice to have a backup or another guy that can go in and play. So, like I said, I think we got two good running backs on this football team right now.
Rookie healthy enough? I mean, is that not part of the equation of a question here?
No, Ricky's healthy. He's coming in. He'll be in this week for mini camp, and we're looking forward to getting both of them together.
What preconceived thoughts, it's only April, Jimmy, on your quarterback position? Jeff Blake did well, but boy, Aaron Brooks did well. Where does that stand? Do you have a starter as we speak? How do you see that going before we kick it off in September?
Well, I think it's the same thing. We feel good about our quarterback situation. You know, Aaron did a great job of stepping in, and Jeff Blake's obviously a quality veteran, and we feel good about Jake Delhomme, our third. So our quarterback situation is fine. You know, we feel good about that situation. Also, our running back right now.
Well, you know, Jimmy, you got to have a Cajun down there. Delhomme, you know, before that 4K or A-Bear. I mean, you got to have some down there. Hey, isn't it nice to hear them talk football in New Orleans? I know with Mike and Ricky Williams, they were excited, you know, a year or two ago. But is it football back? I mean, do you hear it every day in the streets in New Orleans?
Well, you know, I know the people are excited about playing, you know, Saints football again, and our players are excited about what's going on, and they're working hard right now, and they're in here every day. And as long as we can keep up that attitude, and the players know how hard we worked last year to get to this point, and we keep it up, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and you got a good defensive line to help you out, and that's the understatement of the year. And I know that's from a guy that played in the Bermuda Triangle in Buffalo. I know you appreciate the way those guys play. Thanks, Jimmy. We'll see you later in the weekend.
Thank you.
I loved him as a player, by the way, and he knows that. With him and Smurlus,
What a job as a
Shane
coach.
Nelson.
What a job as a coach.
Well, I'm just going back 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm moving forward to a coach. I mean, you can't do any better than Jim Haslett did last year with seemingly no bullets, right?
Well, yeah, but he changed. First thing he did was change the attitude, which was the big thing. But Randy Mueller, who was the executive of the year, he went in and signed some key free agents, and they had, you know, Darren Howard last year, second-round pick. They didn't have a first-round pick, but guess what? Darren Howard played like a first-round pick, so they had some players, and Jim coached them up.
All right, let's move on to Miami. I'm not surprised they took defensive back. It's just you want to throw Breeze's name out there just in case it happens. Miami, I mean, certainly defensively has got to be pretty happy with what they have, Mort.
Well, they are. I think that he really thought he needed that third. Even with Surtain and Sam Madison, he really felt he had to have that third back. And you'll talk about Fletcher in a little bit, how good Fletcher is, just being maybe the best, technically the best corner without the athletic skill.
You're right, Mort. I think you look at that division in the Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning, and Jamar Fletcher is an outstanding cover man. He's 5'9", he's 180 pounds. He doesn't have the great timed recovery speed, but see the physical places Freddie Mitchell and Jamar Fletcher getting into it in the Sun Bowl, and here's Freddie Mitchell in the open field. Fletcher obviously makes that play. Here against David Terrell, you see the toughness of Fletcher, a guy who was a former option quarterback in high school. I mean, he's intercepted passes from Drew Brees, let's see, 2 different years, Mort. He takes the ball the distance. He's tremendous after he intercepts the pass and making you pay.
Well, you mentioned Drew Brees once again. There are Dolphin fans who are disappointed right now because they wanted the Dolphins to kind of revisit history. They got Dan Marino at 27. They wanted Brees at 26. But really, I think the Dolphins and Dave Wanstead felt that Drew Brees is really like Jay Fiedler or like Ray Lucas. There's not a whole lot of difference there, and I think that's why he passed.
And keep in mind, we have cornerbacks now, 4 off the board. Fred Smoot still available.
Well, if Fred Smoot is a guy, as we mentioned, there have been some character issues raised. He did have an arrest warrant issued for him on a narcotics violation in March, but the prosecutor has sent us a copy of the letter saying that he dropped those charges, and nevertheless, Smoot still has some red flags on him, and I think that's why he has slid a little bit.
So no defensive backs the first 19, 5 of the next 7 DBs, and now here come the Minnesota Vikings, who, if not shocked, certainly Caught a little bit surprised with the retirement of Robert Smith, running back. But if there's a draft for need, here it might be.
With the 27th selection, the Minnesota Vikings have chosen running back.
There you go.
From Wisconsin, Michael Bennett.
So, you know, we've had two colleges go back-to-back. Michigan had 2 in a row. Miami had a couple in a row. So here is Michael Bennett, who stepped in at Wisconsin when Ron Dayne graduated, if you will, to the New York Football Giants. Well, they have to have a back. I mean, they just have to. Robert Smith retired.
You got to have some defensive players, too. We go through this year after year with this team where, I mean, I know Robert Smith is a big void to fill, but when are they going to, I mean,
next round.
Oh, they got somebody last year. They did it last year. Okay.
You look at it, Morton, you see the breakaway ability, and you see an offensive line at Wisconsin that dominates. And you watch Ron Dayne win a Heisman Trophy, and Michael Bennett now is a track star. You see a guy who can really run. We talk about running with authority, a guy that certainly has track speed. And I think, you know, he took his track ability, Morton, he applied it to the football field. The question was, he's not that shifty as a runner. He's in here, pick up the blitz and do the blocking and then do the things you have to do from a physical standpoint. But needs to develop a little bit more shiftiness. And the big question is, he's got to prove he can catch the football. Only 4 receptions the entire season for the 2000 year at Wisconsin.
But where he's going, I don't necessarily think that it matters that much. Because in the offense, when you've got Randy Moss, when you've got Chris Carter, you really don't emphasize the running back catching the ball that much. He has great speed. You have a huge offensive line in Minnesota. He slides right into a system that's very similar to the one he had in college. So it can be a good, quick transition for him. But I agree. They lost Robert Smith. Yes, that's a big loss. But the defensive side of the ball is just gone. There's nobody there.
Hey, Robert Smith, I mean, he's always been a little different. I mean, the fans, you know, a lot of people in football don't follow the Vikings that closely. Wait a minute, right? Robert Smith, he retired. I mean, this isn't news, but he certainly was at the peak of his career, one of the more healthy seasons of his career.
And going to be a free agent and going to have a windfall of money fall in his pocket.
But always has walked to the beat of a different drummer, as you mentioned. And my understanding is that his attorney, Neil Cornish, doesn't expect him to return and play football. In other words, he's not sitting out a year to come back. But I think Robert Smith has, in fact, retired. A lot like what Barry Sanders did. He's leaving before. He's got his money put away. He's invested it. He doesn't want to be beat up any more than he's been beat up. One last note on Bennett, by the way. A lot of people have said fastest back to come to the NFL since Bo Jackson. And he is a football player. That's a big...
When your ears go and you say Bo Jackson, immediately a 4-time Big Ten sprint champion. Jaws, let's go up to you. Your thoughts on Michael Bennett, the third back picked here in the first round.
Yeah, Boomer, I really like Michael. He's one of those home run hitters, and he will fit nicely into this Vikings offense. And, you know, everyone wants to talk about Dante Culpepper and Randy Moss and Chris Carter, but this is a team that ran the ball as well as anyone last year and almost as much as anyone last year. So Michael Bennett will come in, and what he has is outstanding vision. He's an excellent cutback runner, and with that big offensive line the Vikings have, he'll be able to find those cutback lanes. Here you'll see him in the I formation, which, again, a staple of the Vikings will run. Follow the fullback. In Minnesota will be Jim Kleinsasser. What you want to do is just read the base blocking of the offensive line. A man on a man on a man. Look for that seam. Look for that crack. Oh, there he goes. The linebacker is the guy a running back wants to see. The linebacker overruns. He sees his helmet. There's the cutback lane. And this is beautiful vision, good patience, Bennett, and then puts the shoulders down. And the one thing I always love, and I talk to my buddy Merrill Hodge all the time, is that running back, the factor back that runs behind his pads and delivers the blow. I think Michael Bennett will fit nicely into that Vikings offensive scheme, Boomer.
Well, another person to push the envelope on the 5th-ranked offense in football, Jaws. But defensively, they ranked 28th, and they were edged in the title game 41-0. So they replace Smith, but can they stop the others from scoring? Next on the clock, tee it up. We'll be back.
ESPN News and ESPN Radio, but also ESPN.com. We have continuing coverage of the draft, and that features an audio chat from the ESPN Zone, hosted by Trey Wingo from the ESPN Zone in Times Square. Tim, as the Raiders are on the clock, I'm curious about a veteran player like yourself. How interested in you in the decision-making process that your team's gone through all week? Do you call and talk to John Gruden and say, where are you guys thinking about going?
Well, I definitely try and find out what they're thinking. You know, if I could be some help, then I'll definitely try and help out. But, you know, if you know anything about John, he knows what he's doing, so he's not going to give out too much information. I did talk to him briefly this morning and asked him what was he thinking, and, of course, he listed every position on the football field. So you really never know what's going to happen here. But, you know, you would think that, you know, we would be looking at some help at the linebacker position maybe, or, you know, maybe offensive line. You just never know. But I'm sure they're going to take the best athlete out there.
We talk so much about these players today in the perspective of he can do this. He's done this in college. As a veteran, you know rookies don't contribute as much as we think they do sometimes. How tough is it for a rookie to come in, especially on a team like the Raiders that was within a game of the Super Bowl?
Well, it can be very tough, you know, but everybody has their role to play. And I think if guys come in with the attitude of, you know, whatever I need to do to help this team out, that's what I'm going to do, then they'll do a lot better. You know, you can't come in saying, hey, I should be the other starting receiver, I should be starting opposite Eric Allen or Charles Woodson or whatever. You know, you can't come in with that type of attitude. You have to come in and say, look, whatever I can do to contribute to this team, that's what I can do. And, you know, sometimes in football today, these young guys come in and they just want to run the whole show right away, and it's not going to happen that way. You have to pay your dues and work your way up the ladder.
Well, Tim, the pick's in. We'll ask you about it in a second, but let's go to Chris just down the street at Madison Square Garden. Boomer?
Well, Mike and Timmy, can you save us a zone burger? I mean, that's the big question that we got to ask right now. There it is. Hey, how about Timmy Brown, #1 pick back in the 80s and 88, and still as good as he ever was, one step away from that elusive Super Bowl. The Raiders have chosen, and
tight end.
They traded for one, but not like this, right?
Got to be Todd Heath, Chris.
Okay.
With the 28th selection, the Oakland Raiders have chosen defensive back from Florida State, Derek Gibson.
There's your safety that you were talking about with Archuleta.
But this isn't a player that's quite up to the level, in my opinion, of Adam Archuleta. Gibson has great physical ability, and he had some big games, but I saw some inconsistency, Joe, where he didn't produce the kind of results of physical talent like Derek Gibson.
It was the first area of need.
Yeah, but the pass on a tight end who can get down the middle of the field and give Gannon another weapon.
When you make the deal for Roland Williams, you have a tight end, you've got somebody on the roster. Maybe they felt like
Roland Williams, Todd Heath as a pass receiver.
Well, but you're going to get a lot more use of him right now than you are Todd Heath. There you see his ability to come up and fill.
Well, you can, Joe, and this is the thing about Derek Gibson. He flashes it. There's no question he had some big games, and he certainly has the great physical ability that you look for. You watch him in certain games, you would say mid-first round. You watch him in others, you may say third round. I think he has to play to the level of his talent on a game-to-game basis. And we went back, we were talking about Archuleta, who we had penciled into Oakland, was because he was a tackling machine. And that's what Oakland needs. If anything cost them against the Baltimore Ravens, it was a bad angle and a missed tackle against Shannon Sharp that led to the Ravens and Trent Dilfer going on to victory in that AFC Championship game.
I think it was, to be honest with you, I think it was just a great throw by Trent Dilfer. I mean, you put the ball, he puts the ball the only place you can down low.
I'm glad you're a Trent Dilfer fan like that.
In a situation like that.
There was a safety who was supposed to be lined up inside, and he landed up outside, and that's really what it was. Plus the missed tackle.
Anthony Dorsett still really finding his way as a safety. This is an insurance policy. I think the Raiders are looking, they feel they're good enough to compete right now and go at a title. This is one of those additions you make that as you build will be there.
Well, let's go back up to Mike and continue your talk with Timmy Brown. Mike, I wonder what Timmy thinks about this. We talked about the tackle made in the secondary that could have changed the Baltimore game. Michael, take it away.
Yes, we have Marquez Pope and Dorsett, who was involved in that play. Tim, as a team, and you mentioned John Gruden mentioned defensive back, is this a good move for your organization?
Well, no doubt about it. I think Gibson can serve two purposes for us. One, I think he can come out and certainly help us in our defensive secondary. But number two, and I don't know if this is going to be more important or not, I think he can help us tremendously with Sebastian Janikowski. You know, being a guy that he's played with and familiar with, you know, Sebastian won't feel as if he's all alone out there in Oakland by himself, you know. So I think that's a big part of this also. But I think Gibson can come in and definitely help us out. You know, whether he'll be able to do that early on in the season or not, we don't know. But surely we're going to try and get him on the field and put him in the best position to help our team.
Great point about the Florida State teammates from an old Notre Dame guy. Tim Brown, thanks for joining us. And you're on ESPN.com and audio chat throughout the day. We appreciate it, Tim.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Let's fire up the Tinactin video conference. The pick before Oakland belonged to Minnesota, and Dennis Green took Michael Bennett, the running back from Wisconsin, who's played a couple of times up in the Metrodome, where Denny Green's team calls home when they played against the Minnesota Gophers. Dennis, obviously the Robert Smith situation, running back was a big need. Did Michael Bennett move up higher on your board because of the need for a running back?
No, not really. We had him rated top 10. He was a 10th pick on the board. Keep in mind, there were 14 defensive players that went in the top 26 picks, so this was a heavy defensive draft, and surprisingly, guys like Deuce McAllister and Michael Bennett, guys that we thought were tremendous players, were still on the board.
Limited experience in football because of his track success, but what about the 1 year at Wisconsin jumped out at you to give you confidence that this is a player who's going to only get better?
Well, he rushed for 1,600 yards. He scored a lot of touchdowns. Of course, he's a four-time Big Ten sprint champion, but he played behind Rod Dane, and we've always been able to develop players. We don't expect him to just walk on the field and be a player, but we think that we have a style of play and a system of playing football that he will fit in very well at. And then what we love about the fact is that this guy can go the distance, that he can take when a defense is spread out and make big plays and score touchdowns.
We have plenty of other questions for you, but it's a long weekend, so we'll catch up with you later on today or tomorrow. Thanks, Denny.
You bet. Take care.
Dennis Green of the Vikings. Let's head back to Chris Berman in New York as St. Louis, as they've been most all day, on the clock again, Boom.
Michael, yeah, they're going to go into the watch and clock business here. I think they're going to move Timex right out of that business. The St. Louis Rams have been on the clock enough for the third pick in the first round of the St. Louis Rams.
With the 29th selection, the St. Louis Rams have chosen defensive tackle from Ohio State, Ryan Pickett.
Mel, look, when you have three number ones, not to mention Aeneas Williams, who you get also, and you're picking all defense, I guess you try to hit a home run with something that's not as chalk a pick. Where is this pick in your book?
Well, I think he was projected. I know he was projected to be an early 2. And we went back to Derek Gibson. I thought maybe second round to Oakland. They took him in the first to fill that need. I think you look at Ryan Pickett, a junior, coming out early. You see a kid with outstanding physical ability, no doubt about that. Holds up well at the point against the run. I think he's diversified things, technically become a little bit more sound, and become more consistent. I thought with another year at Ohio State, you'd have been looking at a prospect we were talking about, like we talked about Seymour and Stroud and those guys going into the year. That's the way Pickett would have been viewed. So another year, I think, would have really benefited him. He didn't play to the level of count every week for it, but you look at a defensive tackle and you look at St. Louis, that's obviously a neat area, despite what they've done already.
And he gets the benefit of coaching from Bill Kolar. One of the key, I thought, off-season pickups of the Rams was hiring Bill Kolar, who was with the Atlanta Falcons, one of the best, if not the best, defensive line coaches in football. So that's another thing. You got a young player, at least you've got a coach.
And the pressure's not on. Well, Damian Lewis is there. Damian Lewis comes in, experience from Miami. Now you get a guy who probably needed another year, maybe needs a little bit more to learn about the position, and now you have Lewis to take a little pressure off of Ryan Pickett.
But then when I hear you talk about the fact that if he'd have stayed another year,
it'd have been a high pick.
Very high pick. So they get the value. Now they get to teach him to be a football player. So his classes go from the classroom in school to that on the field.
And he was projected, I said, to be an early to mid-second round draft choice, so you're not stretching it that far.
Well, so Pickett becomes the 9th defensive lineman to go in the first 29 picks. The Indianapolis Colts, remember, they moved down 8 spots in their trade with the Giants. They got a 3 and a 6. Now, you would think I would have this, but so much has changed. Let's
With the 30th selection, Indianapolis has chosen wide receiver from Miami, Reggie Wayne.
If I looked at my notes, I would have had it.
Peyton's here somewhere. We ought to find him.
Well, it's interesting. The Colts were looking at Fletcher, and who was available at that spot. And obviously something happened there, and they figured, you know what? Even though they were an offensive team that scored over 400 points, you talked about it with hands, right? Route. Get Peyton another weapon.
He's the best route runner, and I don't think anybody would question this in the National Football League about his route running skills, his strong hands, and the fact that this is a guy with ideal size. He's an even 6 feet, 200 pounds, and you look at the speed factor, ran a 4.58 during his individual workout, or 4.55 in that area. I think that's where a question went up. But I think Antonio Brady, look at third-round pick, wasn't perceived to be the #1 option. This is a guy, certainly with Marvin Harrison there, established as that deep threat, Morton Joe. Now you bring in a Reggie Wayne, polished and more consistent than Jerome Payson. I think that's the key, Chris. A polished veteran who can come in as a rookie and give Peyton Manning a guy you can count on a play-to-play basis. When the ball's thrown his way, Reggie Wayne has the strongest hands of any wide receiver I've pretty much ever graded. I think that's a strong statement, but I really believe he is phenomenal as far as the natural pass receiver.
You know what the clue was? It's not that Bill Polian is running the draft, and of course Jim Moore and everyone, and you would think they'd have a clue. But as I look down at the other end of the theater here, and I look to see who's sitting next to Chris Fowler, and I see Peyton Manning, there should have been our hint right away. Guys,
Well, Chris, Peyton gave a fist pump as Reggie Wayne's name was announced. We were talking about a half hour ago. I said, Peyton, if you had your wish, big, tall, wide receiver with strong hands that goes and gets football. But that is Reggie Wayne.
I'll tell you, I'm really excited about the pick. I think, you know, I have to admit, I was thinking defense probably along the way, but I knew we needed a big receiver. I followed Reggie Wayne's career. He's a New Orleans kid from John Ehret High School out of New Orleans. I've seen him make some big catches for Miami, and you know, we have the smaller, speedy guy, Marvin Harrison and Terrence Wilkins. Reggie Wayne is going to help our football team tremendously.
Reggie Wayne, the 4th Miami player selected in this first round already. He didn't clock with blazing speed, but you said you don't need that at this point out of him. He brings other things.
That's right. He's a big physical guy, and, you know, against man-to-man coverage and bump-and-run coverage, you need a big, strong physical guy that can throw the defender off and make some big catches across the middle. So he's really going to fit in perfectly into our offense. And, you know, I'm kind of disappointed Polian didn't call me and fill me in on what was going on, but I guess I'm not there yet. But I tell you, I mean, that was the first time I heard his name mentioned, and I'm truly excited about the pick.
Of course, the Colts do, with a defense that was near the bottom of the league, need defensive help. Last year, 6 out of the 7 draft picks were on defense. Where do you want to see him go now?
Well, I think the reason we made the trade probably is because we need more players. We get an extra 3rd pick, get an extra 6th-round pick. I think we'll probably focus on defense the rest of the draft. And the best thing we've been able to do is keep our players on offense. We lost some players on defense, and I think Baltimore really set the barrier this year, proving how a great defense can take you all the way to the championship. So hopefully we can focus on that the rest of the draft and in free agency.
Of course, 3 years ago, it was you up on this stage as the #1 pick. Now you're here for DirecTV, playing a host and interviewer. And I understand you sat down with Michael Vick, today's first pick, and did a Sunday conversation for ESPN. What'd you guys talk about? You give him advice?
Well, I tried to give him a little. I told him he had to teach me how to be a better runner for any advice I would give him. But I guess I am on the different side of the ball. Certainly know what it's like to be in your position, doing some stuff for DirecTV. But it was fun to visit with Michael. Certainly realize what he's going through, the whirlwind tour. Going to the Atlanta Falcons as the first pick in the draft, how excited he is. I'm extremely happy for him and proud of him. He's going to have a great NFL career.
Peyton, thanks for your time. Enjoy the addition of Reggie Wayne to the Indianapolis Colts. A couple of New Orleans guys perhaps hooking up in a different dome.
That's
guys.
right.
All right, guys, thank you. There's the face of the NFL for the last few years and the next 10 years. Peyton Manning, one thing they didn't have was a big wide receiver. Not that he's huge, Wayne, but he's bigger, really, than Marvin is or Payton or most of the guys that they have. The 6th wide receiver taken, by the way, in the first round ties a record, and we saw Timmy Brown earlier, which is why we bring this up. 1988, admittedly, there were a few less teams then. 6 first-round wide receivers. Jim Brown, a guy named Sterling Sharp. Have we heard from him lately?
Very heavy receiver. Very heavy, big guy.
Michael Irvin, bang, bang, and bang. Those 3 great picks. Anthony Miller, Aaron Cox, and Wendell Davis. So, Wayne, now this ties 88 with the most wide receivers ever in the first round. And now we come to the Super Bowl champion, Baltimore Ravens, who we said to bring your defense. They at least watched our show and brought it all season long. Let's go to Solomon Wilcox. Solomon, you've been waiting. Now's your shot.
Oh, that's right, Boomer. You talked about the Baltimore Ravens defense, and talking with the Ravens Vice President of Player Personnel, Ozzie Newsome, he said that this team is built with speed, and they have the speed on defense. They want to add speed to the offense. Now, the player that they covet most on the board, particularly with this 31st pick, is that tight end, Todd Heap from Arizona State. He's the guy that they want. And remember, the New York Giants, everyone thought they would take a tight end. When they jumped to the 22nd pick, of course, everyone here in Baltimore, they were holding their collective breaths, sort of waiting to see who they would take. They thought that they would take the tight end. So now the Baltimore Ravens stand poised to try to take Todd Heap, or they will take him, actually, with this 31st pick. They like the tight end, feels that he's a good fit for their system, and he'll fit in the same mode as a Shannon Sharp, and they can study under Shannon with a mentor like Shannon Sharp. He'll be able to fit in this offense.
Well, thank you, Solomon. It makes sense. I mean, they just going out on a limb. I don't think they need that much help defensively, Mel. So,
no, and I'll tell you what, Boomer, Brian Billick's smiling because he's a former tight end. You know how important the tight end is in the equation. You have Shannon Sharp. Then coach moves on. John Jones is there along with Shannon Sharp. Now you're bringing a Todd Heap. You're bringing Gerback. Travis Taylor, guys, is like a bonus first-round pick. They got to the Super Bowl and won it. They're world champions, Super Bowl champions, without Travis Taylor. So, I mean, they're in pretty good shape from an offensive standpoint, adding a Todd Heap to the equation.
And an Elvis Gerback. Everybody feels like that's an upgrade at the position for them. They want to be able to put the ball down the field. Even though they won with defense, you can't forget Brian Billick is still very much an offensive coach. And if he just imagines, if I can add 10 more points per game, what are we going to be able to do with the defense that we have? They didn't lose anybody. When I talked to Brian, he basically said, there isn't anybody in this draft that can come in and start for us right now. So this is a great opportunity to add depth at a position where there's age.
Let us just remind folks real quickly, 165 points allowed, unbelievable record for a 16-game schedule, the Baltimore Ravens. In the playoffs, not counting the kick return right by the Giants, the opening drive by Tennessee for a touchdown, that's about it, right?
Yeah.
That's about it in the touchdown department. Last time we checked, that was pretty good. The Ravens, the champion Ravens, all fans of all ages waiting. Let's go before we discuss it here. Is Sean Salisbury, San Diegan, quarterback. And Sean, I mean, is Drew Brees a fit for San Diego right here, do you think?
A major fit, and that's the guy they want. I spent a lot of time talking to head coach Mike Riley, and this draft is set up exactly the way John Butler and those guys wanted it to. They get their running back. Now they're going to get a quarterback who they're very high on, like his toughness, like what he's all about, has played in a big-time conference. They win both ways. The big-time pick, they want Drew Brees right here. They actually tried to trade up with Miami, the 26th pick there in the first round. Couldn't pull it off because they thought somebody else was going to snatch him. They get their guy with the first pick of the second round. This is a huge, huge get for the San Diego Chargers.
Well, if it works out that well, they certainly have the opportunity, Sean, to do that. And Joe, let me go to you quickly on Drew Brees. He may not have the total upside of a Michael Vick, who I know you love. I mean,
no one does.
Fine. Drew Brees is a professional quarterback. Where would he have a chance to be a starter and a good starter one day?
I think he's a system quarterback. I think he's a quarterback that has to be in the right place. I don't think you can stick him just anywhere and have him adapt to it. Although with Norv Turner there, with a running back, with a good defense, with the ability to move around, the kid rushed for 900 yards. Everybody looks at him and says, geez, I don't know, well, Drew's not this, Drew's not that. The only thing that everyone talked about was his arm is a little bit suspect. I'll go back to the discussion that I had with Sean Salisbury. He talks about arm strength, arm strength. I don't think it's that important, but I think it has to be adequate enough. I would put his in the adequate category. 90 touchdown passes in a career. I think this kid knows how to win. He comes out of a system where they put the ball down the field. As I've sat and thought more and more about him, I think it's a perfect opportunity for San Diego to bring someone in young. We talked about Vick learning under Doug Flutie. Brees can do the same thing.
We'll talk about that in a minute.
The pick is in, and, you know, 24 hours ago, they were fools. Now,
looking better.
Bulls.
With the first selection in the second round, number 32 overall, the San Diego Chargers have selected quarterback from Purdue, Drew Brees.
There's some Charger fans here, some JL jerseys, Tomlinson and Brees. You know what? This is interesting. This is very interesting.
Well, I'll tell you this. Mike Riley told me that 2 weeks ago, they spent time with 3 quarterbacks this offseason. Michael Vick, Drew Brees, Marcus Tuios, and so forth. Drew Brees to him was a ready-to-go quarterback, which I think brings up an interesting dynamic. Joe, you mentioned Michael Vick under Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie's not known for mentoring young quarterbacks. Yet Drew Brees is ready to play. He's got a chip on his shoulder just like Doug Flutie. He is competitive, and I think this will be very interesting.
This mentoring young quarterbacks gets dragged out and thrown out.
Nobody does it.
That's right. Nobody mentors. Doug Flutie's out there to win football games. I think Drew, well, you can learn things from him. Right. But the other side, it doesn't flow quite that way. Chris Chandler with Michael Vick. These two guys are like night and day when it comes to playing the quarterback position. So what's going to happen is Drew Brees goes into a situation where Norv Turner, that's the key, the coordinator, the quarterback coach, they're the ones that are going to help develop him, and he watches Doug Flutie operate on the field. So the lessons will be learned from Doug as he studies, as he goes out and does things
and he
on the
also,
field.
Joe, plays in great weather conditions. We said, hey, if he went to Detroit, he'd be guaranteed 10 games, either in a dome or down in Tampa, great weather, right? Yeah. Now he's out in San Diego. If you have questionable arm strength,
at least 8 games
you obviously want to
be
be out there. And I think when you look at Drew Brees, short memory, throws an interception, comes back with a touchdown pass, throws through lanes very effectively, even though he's 6 foot and a quarter.
Moves around
and I'll
the
tell
pocket.
you, he's the new captain comeback. 4 times this year, 4 successive weeks, led Purdue to comeback victories, then led the Boilermakers to their first trip to the Rose Bowl since 1966. Remember Bob Greasy? the new Boilermaker. Now we have Drew Brees going to the San Diego Chargers.
Well,
I think you can expect, hopefully for the Chargers, a similar career, Joe.
He mentioned short memory to us older guys.
Bob,
we have short memory.
Bob,
Senior moments.
Bob, oh, yeah.
Bob Brees.
I got it. Okay. Came back to be a player.
6 feet tall,
Let's talk to guys with longer memories, perhaps, than us. I didn't say long in the tooth, Jaws. Mike Tirico and Ron Jaworski on Drew Brees, guys.
All right, Chris, for the second consecutive year, we have just one quarterback taken in the first round, but unlike last year, first pick of round 2 as a quarterback. And, Jaws, as you've broken down Drew Brees, what stuck out to you?
Well, first of all, I am a big Drew Brees fan. He understands the game. He knows how to manage a football game. And he has what I believe is a very important characteristic of a quarterback, amnesia. When he makes a bad play like he did in the Ohio State game, he always came back with a positive play. And the one thing a quarterback do is forget about the history and move ahead and challenge the future. Drew Brees can do that. People talk about his lack of arm strength. Garbage. He is very accurate. The arm strength is good enough to get the ball to the receiver. And he played in a system which I like. It's modeled after a pro system, read coverage, get the ball out, get it out on time. The play I want you to see is a 5 wide receiver set. A play that he will use with the San Diego Chargers, spreading the field in the shotgun formation. Attack the defense. Now you'll see the motion come across the field. No one in the secondary will move. The safety will slide over just slightly, but no one will run with the motion. Pre-snap indicator of zone. The ball is snapped. He's got a pretty good idea where to go with the football. The minute the safety goes to center field, he comes to this side where he has 2-on-2. Great matchup for the offense. And here's what I like. The poise in the pocket, strong delivery, the accuracy on this 3rd and 3 moves the chains. You want to get first downs. Now, here's what I like too. He's in the pocket. There's the motion. He'll get the snap. He sees the safety right there. The minute he gets the ball, he's looking at that safety. He immediately knows where to go with the football. Good ball position, short stride. Now, people like to talk about his lack of height. He's not 6'4", 6'5", like Troy Aikman and the bigger quarterbacks, but he does throw the ball tall. When he delivers, his arm is always high. He's on his toes. So although he's 6 foot, he throws the ball like a 6'2" quarterback, Mike.
Quick answer, you break down every quarterback, every game, NFL, during the regular
Over
season.
200.
In watching Drew Brees, if he has to play quarterback November next year, can he?
If there's a quarterback that's coming out in this draft that's ready to play, it's Drew Brees. I think he can play and play well. Vick is a real heady quarterback, intelligent quarterback, and understands the game.
All right, Ron, it's the 9th Big Ten player selected in the first 32 in the draft. Pick 31 in the draft was a Pac-10 player from Arizona State, the tight end Todd Heap, taken by the Baltimore Ravens. Here's the head coach of the Super Bowl champs with our Solomon Wilcox.
Thanks, Mike. I'm joined by Baltimore Raven head coach Brian Billick. And Brian, never in a million years did you think a talented tight end like Todd Heap would fall to you at the 31st spot. Why is it that he was available, and how happy were you when he was available at that pick?
Well, we were thrilled to death. We had him on the upper half of our board in the first 15 picks. I think it's a little like what Denny alluded to when you see a Deuce McAllister and a Bennett drop as late as they did. There was a real run on defensive people, on the corners, on the defensive line, and that pushed some really quality offensive people to the back end of the first round.
You guys came in saying you needed a quality of depth at a number of different positions. Why the tight end position when you have a talented guy like Shannon Sharp?
Well, what a perfect opportunity for a Todd Heap, who's a tremendous athlete. Many people have equated to a Tony Gonzalez, to come in and play behind a Shannon Sharp for a couple of years and to learn and be mentored by certainly a future Hall of Famer. And in our 2 tight end set, which we're in about 30 to 35% of the time, that's going to give us a big target down the field with a Shannon Sharp on one side and a Todd Heap on the other.
2 tight ends were available, Todd Heap, Algie Crumpler from the University of North Carolina. He's more of a dual threat at tight end position, good at the point of attack, good pass catcher. Why Heap over Crumpler?
Well, it came down to proven ability now versus potential. We think Heap has a huge upside. Algie's a great player, going to be good in this league. We had them both rated very, very highly, but we feel the potential and the athleticism of Todd Heap made the difference.
Brian Billick and the Baltimore Ravens will now go to work trying to add depth to an already talented team. Now let's send it back to you, Mike.
And a pretty good tight end in the front office, and a guy you know very well, Ozzie Newsome.
New York, Drew Brees went with the first pick in the 2nd round. Cleveland is about to make their choice to Gene Washington.
With the 33rd selection, the Cleveland Browns have chosen wide receiver from Kansas State, Quincy Morgan.
Well, we were debating Mel at wide receiver, but there went Warren, the defensive tackle, so you knew they needed wide out and running back. Where are you with Quincy Morgan? I mean, Had some big games.
He did, Chris. I think he's more of a boomer bust type. He really was one of the top players on that overrated list in terms of my ratings. I look at what he did at Blinn Junior College, was a heck of a player, went to Kansas State, gave Bill Snyder 2 outstanding years, made a lot of big plays. We were in Manhattan, Kansas for the Nebraska-K-State game in the snow. He was huge in that game, 7-8 catches for about 200 yards. Watch me here. Played in a lot of inclement weather conditions playing at Kansas State. This was the bowl game against Tennessee, but I want to see the route running improve, more consistency catching the football. They got, I think, has to do a better job without the ball. And if he pays attention to detail, he certainly has the enormous talent that you look for, Chris, but I think he does fall in my opinion, to that boomer bust category.
Well, they need a #1 receiver. I don't know that he's going to be the guy to do that. Kevin Johnson's a nice receiver. So they get a lot of #2s and 3s. They really need a #1 guy for Tim Couch. Arizona went to offense before. It's got to be defense now. They're up on the clock very quickly. Second-round picks are 10 minutes, not 15 minutes.
With the 34th pick, the Cardinals have selected defensive end from Nebraska, Kyle Vandenbosch. And that is on the clock.
Well, I mean, this is, I mean, for years and years and years, Arizona was defensive linemen. They had Rice and Wadsworth and Swan, and they pretty much, except for Wadsworth injured, Mark Smith, they're pretty much, except for Wadsworth, they're all gone. So they needed a guy to replenish what they, unfortunately for them, spent a lot of time building up and have very little to show for it.
Chris, no question, Kyle Vandenbosch has a motor. He hustles. He gives you a ton of energy. You see him here against the option. He does have the ability to chase and close. Runs a 4.68 at 6'4", 270 pounds. Good athlete. A guy that made a lot of plays at Nebraska. But I think when you look at the type of competition, the fact he's surrounded by some quality players, I just wonder if he'll be engulfed, if he'll be steered against the run, just out of the play for it. And I look at Aaron Schobel from TCU, a defensive end. I was a little bit higher on as the year progressed. Well, Schobel brought more value than Vandenbosch, but yeah, at this point is about where Vandenbosch was coming off the board. I would have gone a different direction, looking for a defensive end and going with Aaron Schobel.
Well, let me ask you this. Dave McGinnis always talks about passion. Does this guy have passion? Because McGinnis wants that on his defense.
And I think Aaron Schobel does. So I think Schobel, to me, rated out higher. Now, I would have had Schobel ahead of Vandenbosch. They obviously disagreed. We'll see what happens.
Guess what? Now, the first round was over an hour faster than last year. It was 4 hours and 18 minutes. Atlanta's ready to go here with the 4th pick in the second round.
With the 36th pick, the Falcons have selected tight end from North Carolina, Algie Crumpler.
Well, Dad's an NFL player. His Carlester Crumpler, brother, player at tight end with Seattle. And Algie is just a pick that's going to grow on you. You know what I mean?
Think about, we talked about the Falcons and why they dropped back from being in the Super Bowl a few years ago. Remember that next draft, they gave up a first-round pick in the early second round to Baltimore to acquire Reggie Kelly and ended up being the 5th pick overall. The Baltimore used for Jamal Lewis. So that was a questionable move. Now they had to go back. After giving up that one for Kelly, they go back to the tight end spot for Algie Crumpler. A good football player, came back from the knee injury, had 2 solid years. A guy who was a former inside linebacker in high school, a tough kid. He's only 6'2½". He does have long arms, and that will certainly help him. But at 6'2½", he doesn't necessarily present the ideal target, Joe, down the field.
He can block, though. He can block, though. And by the time he's really ready to be a big-time tight end in the NFL, well, this guy will be ready to be a big-time quarterback in the NFL.
Who's going to be throwing the football? None other than Michael Vick.
To Algie Crumpler. So the pick is just going to grow on you. And
like an amoeba.
I think it'd be good if it's raining outside. I think a wet weather game, I think Algie Crumpler would be perfect. What a great name, Santana Moss, Algie Crumpler. We haven't even got to Marcus Tuiato. We are back in New York. We are early in the second round, and now, Mel, even though we are at pick number 36 for the Bengals now, here are some players just by number that you have first-rounders that would be, according to you, a bargain right now.
No question. I think you look at Chris Chambers. We had talked about him in the first round. Chad Johnson dropped after his suspect combine workout. Remember, Darren Howard went early second round last year and became a star. I like Jenkins an awful lot as an early to mid-second. And Robert Ferguson, a junior, that one season after coming over from the JUCO level, did a heck of a job for R.C. Slocum. Mo Williams played guard, played right tackle, has the athleticism to be a left tackle. I've talked about Aaron Schober. I really like this kid's motor and his productivity, both against the run and as a pass rusher. Kendrell Bell is a brilliant physical talent. Ken Lucas, stock dropped from the end, mid-season on. Didn't finish as strong, but he's a good corner, former wide receiver. And Quentin Caver, we talked about the outside backers, Boomer, that they were all going to be there. And now you're looking at Quentin Caver and Tommy Powley and Cedric Hodge, all figuring to be second-round draft.
Where's Stephen Campbell, wide receiver, Brown University?
He's in the book.
I know he's in the book.
I know you noticed.
Where is he? Caught 305 passes in his career. Cincinnati is on the clock. Oh, you can't have enough guitar riffs from Todd Tebow and the Blue Chips. The Bengals have made a pick in the second round.
With the 37th pick, Cincinnati has selected wide receiver from Oregon State University, Chad Johnson.
You know, in Crumpler and Johnson, we've had two interesting players go here the last couple of picks. Two offensive players. Chad Johnson, I mean, the sky's potentially the limit for him, Mel.
I'll tell you, when we were at the Senior Bowl, Vinny Serrato joined us up here. We thought he was one of the best players down in Mobile. And you look at his season, one-year wonder, that's true. He came over from Santa Monica College, had been at Langston. But you look at his 97-yard touchdown reception against Stanford, averaged over 22 yards per catch. He did a heck of a job. You look at this kid, he's 6'1", he's 191 pounds. Great body control, outstanding hands. Look at that catch, how he adjusted. And I'll tell you what, this was the Senior Bowl. Look at that catch there. And, I mean, this is a guy that put on a show. The reason why he's still here in the early second and didn't go in the mid-first is because he ran a subpar 40 at the combine and didn't vertical quite as much as expected. But I asked you, Vinny Serrato, at this point in the draft, you have to believe Cincinnati got a heck of a pick.
Well, I think they got a great steal here. I think, like you said, Mel, at the Senior Bowl, dominated. We loved him. Went to the combine, didn't run that well. Is Keyshawn Johnson's cousin. Listen to Keyshawn, said, don't work out that, had a bad workout at the combine. Said, it's not going to hurt you, and it did.
All right, stick around. The Cowboys are up next as a Redskin and Niner. You always had an eye on these guys. Yes,
absolutely.
We all have. So the Bengals have chosen a very interesting player, Chad Johnson. And for the first time this afternoon, how about them Cowboys? We'll be back with Dalek, and, it's so many. I can't believe how many folks were waiting out on the street. I've never seen that much. And, yeah, the kids all fired up about the NFL in April. I think it's great. The Colts traded up to get Dallas's pick. Dallas moved down and gets a third in the process. And they have picked Idris Bashir. Idris of Genie Bashir. Safety from Memphis. And that's certainly an area of need. First, the player, Mel. Certainly big enough.
Big and athletic, Chris. Look at a guy who's 6'2 1/4", 205 pounds, a former track star, hurdles champion, played both free and strong safety at Memphis. What I really like about him, he had a broken arm in '98, tried to play through that, was productive this past year, broke up 13 passes, 65 tackles. He can cover the field, and when you look at Bashir, Vinny, you have to believe that he's a guy who can be a hole filler for a team that had a need at that area.
Absolutely. The thing that he does, and I think the thing that they like about him, is he can cover a lot of ground. He's got great ball awareness, he's got great zone awareness, and I think he's a good fit for what they do on defense.
And let me just say, talk about fast rising the last couple of weeks. People say, was this a reach or wasn't it? There were several teams in the mid to late second round were hoping that Idris Bashir would slide through the cracks.
Well, you know what happened, Mel? He had a workout, and he ran 4.5 in a workout. He bench pressed like 22 times. He vertical 40 inches, and he skyrocketed right up the charts.
Well, he went up the charts, and moving down the charts is a player that many people had penciled in the first round, cornerback Fred Smoot. For some thoughts on that, let's go to Chris Fowler. Chris.
Well, you're right, Chris. The guy that at cornerback, Mel Kiper, had rated #1, becoming one of the true sliders in this draft. Besides being a guy who's known for strong press coverage, he's also known for trash talking. He is unparalleled in that department. He gets the media guy to the opposing team, looks up the receivers, tries to find the buttons to push against those guys, and then harasses them all game long. It's a family show, so I can't really tell you the kinds of things he says. But, ironically, it's Smoot's reputation that's been trashed in the past couple of weeks. 4 days ago, Fred Smoot sent a letter to general managers basically saying that he'd been a victim of the wrong place and the wrong time. Here's the story. November, a party at Mississippi State gets out of hand. It gets loud. The police come. Most of the guys scatter. Smoot, one of the few guys to stick around, but he's one of the most recognizable guys at the party. The police at another location of that party find a marijuana roach in a trash can. Now, Smoot is never questioned about this. He's never arrested at that time. Later on, he finds out that there's a narcotics warrant out for his arrest. He voluntarily reports, but no charges were ever filed. He was never arrested. And Oktibbeha County's district attorney down here, Roy Carpenter, sends a letter saying the facts as reported in the media have been completely misrepresented, that he was never a suspect in this case, that they had sought him out, perhaps for information, but that the reports of Fred Smoot's marijuana arrest were completely erroneous, completely blown out of proportion. Smoot, though, perhaps has some fences to mend. Fences to mend. He slides way down. He's watching corner after corner drafted ahead of him. So perhaps this issue is not a Smoot point to some of the teams that are considering taking Fred Smoot. In the meantime, 37 picks into the draft, the talented trash talker and cornerback from Mississippi State still awaits the team to select him. Chicago Bears are on the clock. We'll come back to the early parts of the second round coverage of the NFL draft on ESPN shortly.
All right, we are back in New York, and the Chicago Bears, followed by the Patriots, followed by the Seahawks. Chicago Bears just looking for a move up. And here we go. Move up in the standings.
With the 38th selection, Chicago has chosen running back from Michigan, Anthony Thomas. New England is on the clock.
Well, a Big Ten guy going to play again at Soldier Field for the Chicago Bears. You have two Michigan men going into Chicago to play, and, well, running backs drafted. Of course, we love Mr. Irrelevant, Jim Finn, from Pennsylvania. But, I mean, these are really what you want to consider at this point. Jerry Azuma was a converted DB who we liked a lot from the Wildcats of New Hampshire. But Enos didn't really work it. Rashaan Salam playing in the XFL. Autry playing, but for Andy Reid at Philadelphia. I mean, you're talking about a lineage of backs for the Chicago Bears. Names: Grange, Nagurski, Sayers, Payton. Some of those names you saw in the graphic don't fit. Does Anthony Thomas have a chance to be a hit in Chicago?
Well, we had talked about Chicago in the first round. If LaDainian Tomlins had slid through and the trade wouldn't have been made with Atlanta and San Diego, then maybe they would have gone Tomlinson. He didn't get that far. You know, you look at San Diego bringing him into the fold. You look at Anthony Thomas, different style of runner. I think you're looking at a big back at 6'1.5", about 230 pounds. He was considering leaving Michigan after his junior year. I thought it was a smart move to go back. He went from being a 5th-round pick to being an early 2nd-round pick. His average per carry jumped from 4.3 yards to 5.4 yards. He was more decisive, showed better balance, and more having 3 great offensive linemen and a 4th, David Brandt, to help you really run downhill and not get touched until you're about 8 yards into the secondary, really, I think, assisted Anthony Thomas.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If only the Bears had the Michigan offensive line, then maybe we would know that Anthony Thomas would become a...
Here's another Michigan. What the heck were they doing?
They didn't stop anybody.
These are offensive players.
My God. I mean, there's going to be 6 guys that go in there. Well, not Henson, but 5 guys that go in there.
And one of the guys who assisted Anthony Thomas, Maurice Williams, still on the board. But I think that's where you have to look at, Vinny. You have a guy here who had obviously that great offensive line, opening up those gaping holes. So when he was running, he wasn't touched until he got into the second line of defense. Is he a great back at the pro level, or was he a benefit of a great supporting cast?
I think it's a combination of both, Mel. I think he's got strength. He runs a little up and down. He's going to have to learn to get the pads down a little bit to deliver a ball and get his pads out. But with what they're going to try to do on offense and become a more physical and run some more two tights, they wanted a bigger, stronger back, and he's the biggest, strongest back left on the board. I don't like Lamont Jordan here. I think with the talent and everything, would have been a great pick here. But big, strong, physical guy, Michigan guy, popular in Chicago.
Well, a couple of Michigan guys going to the Bears. When we return, the New England Patriots, followed by the Seahawks, followed by the Packers. Around the clock in round number 2, a briskly moving draft, we might say. We'll be back. It all comes down to this. Wide receiver selected thus far as we reach the back portion of the second round. We had 9 defensive linemen picked in the first round overall. But we began the day with Atlanta selecting Michael Vick to play quarterback behind, at least at the moment, Chris Chandler, and Eric No Time to Wallow in the Zaire. Someone probably very intrigued at the way they had drafted and maneuvered to get Michael Vick is moments ago our Scott Walker was with, a man that has been kind enough to work during some of his off seasons with us. A pretty good running back named Jamal Anderson. Sky?
Thank you. The Falcons have their man in Michael Vick, and Jamal Anderson joins us here. What does this mean to the players on this team, the selection of such an electric player?
Well, anytime you get a guy, the first overall pick in a draft, the possibility to get the first overall pick, everybody's really excited. Obviously, you don't want to be in a lottery situation because of the season before, but when it happens and you get a guy, you know, the only person on the field who touches the ball on every down is a quarterback, and a guy like Michael Vick is going to be a tremendous boost for this organization and for the city and the type of excitement we're looking for. I think we're in a great situation. We got Chris Chandler, who's got several good years left, and then Michael Vick will come in and obviously play every now and then, and you know, just to see how he can pick up the system. But I'm excited, man. It takes pressure off me as a running back. I can go out and do my thing and just look forward to playing again.
Well, I was going to ask you quickly, how far is this team away from getting back to the 1990s?